Hello everybody, it's I, Krisis. Today we're talking about my top 60 most wanted DC omnibuses. You do not have to adjust your screen because it is I, Krisis. You're having a crisis, coming to you live from a truly, frankly, gorgeous morning here in New Zealand. Monday for me, Sunday for the most of you. So this stream is something that is here because you demanded it last year. Last year we had our second annual Tigereyes DC Most Wanted Omnibus poll, and you said, Krisis, what are you voting for in the poll? And I said, look at the hair. The answer is Wonder Woman. And you said, but what about other things? That's, you know, there's not even 10 Wonder Woman books on the poll, are there? And then I said, I'm going to fall into a coma now. And then I disappeared from the internet for several months because, oh my gosh, running these polls is hard. This year, there was planning and so much support from the amazing near mint condition community. And I listened. And so we are going to talk about my, not top 10, which is what we actually get to vote on the poll, but my top 60 most wanted DC omnibuses. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, there is a channel, little channel, you might have heard of it, called Near Mint Condition. And on that channel, for the first half of every year, we run what's called the Tigereyes Most Wanted poll. It started as a Marvel omnibus poll back on message boards, for those of you who are old enough to have participated in those. And it's now become an internet-wide phenomenon that thousands of people vote on every year. And we just had the 14th annual Tigereyes Marvel Most Wanted omnibus poll. But 2 years ago, we asked Tigereyes, hey, do you like DC too? And Tigereyes said yes. Although he, at the time, we'd never seen his face. So he was in one of those like witness protection things, like, yes, his voice was disguised. And we said, well, do you want to do a DC poll? And he's like, yeah, let's do it. And so this is the third year that we've been doing that. I've been with it from the start. And you can go right now, if you search the internet for Tigereyes DC third annual, you'll find a page on Crushing Krisis. And you will be able to vote on the poll. You get 10 votes and it's open for a whole nother week. So if you haven't voted yet, there's no emergency. Like, you can listen to me talking today and decide, you know, what you think about it and what you might like about it. And that is great because then you have a whole other week to vote. So one thing that I forgot to do is there is going to be an after party today, an after show, which means I'm not going to do that much Q&A on the show unless it's about the actual things that I am talking about at the time. So if you have questions about New Zealand or how I feel about X-Men, that's not going to be on the show. I did just put the link to that in the description. So at some point, if I pause for longer than 1 second in the middle of talking, you can reload and you can grab that link. It will only be available while the show is live. Afterwards, if you want to watch a recap of it, you have to be a Crushing Krisis patron, which you can do at crushingkrisis.com. Okay, I'm just going to say hello to a few folks. We discovered I was so on top of my bullshit today that I got this stream set up over a day ahead of time, and we had a lovely conversation in the comments and discovered that YouTube can only remember 1 day worth of comments at a time. So unfortunately, I do have to, on a technicality, give the first comment to Cedric and Ellen today, but I do remember it was somebody else yesterday. Who that was, I'm sorry, that information has left my brain. Superjob is here hoping for wet works in the DC Omnibus poll. It's not just traditional Prime Earth DC. It's WildStorm, it's Vertigo, it's Warner Brothers licenses, Scooby-Doo, Looney Tunes, anything DC has the rights to. Super Panda's here. The hair and makeup team should be setting up right about now, and in fact, they were. Edwin Billiot is here today. Cruel Angel saying my bank account might be complaining, but I'm not. DC is putting out way more I care about, especially Omni reprints this year, and I expect there to be even more in 2027. Max Abelman, who's somewhere playing music for people, probably as he's typing this, says, give me Batmite or give me death. Would you like to see Max join me on the channel sometime soon? I have an inkling. I mean, we talk about ideas to do all the time because we talk about music and comic books all the time, but I have a specific idea that Max doesn't know about yet. Shh, don't tell him. But if you want to, comment, and then, you know, that could happen. We are going to have a special guest in 2 weeks, by the way. Okay, a few more hellos, and then we're getting right to the point of the video. Logan Wayne is excited. His top choice is perhaps some Wonder Woman. Logan Wayne has been on a bit of a Wonder Woman kick lately. Badger Stump is here talking about wet works with Superjob. Let's see if anyone else I haven't said hello to yet. Miguel Lupi 8709, Wonder Woman, WildStorm, and what else? Yes, I promised there would be all W's. Velnet is here. with their traditional ellipsis. James Abel, the cerebro of the comic-loving internet. Tigereyes himself, the man, is here saying that he hopes everyone has voted for their most wanted. I have not even disclosed to Tigereyes yet what is on this list, so it will be a surprise to him. My very newly regular viewer has such astute comments to make. Daria is here. Ted is here. Jamie C. 479, 47, 749. He's got some numbers, Jamie C. Here with their Ileana profile pic. Says Murph. Let's see, anyone else I haven't said hello to? Of course, I was just watching an old video because I did take a note of a way I explained something, and I was like, I just love that Nick N 1978 profile picture. It's one of the promo posters from Extinction Agenda. Bears Lairs here, who used to be, I believe, if I'm not confused, and please, I apologize in advance if I am, was a fifth of Jack Gaming previously, but now Bears Lair. And so I have to re-add you to the Friends of Crushing Krisis strip. And I know you were talking about doing a video on some Thundercats, but I forget if you did it or not. I have to catch up because you're not in the channel strip, so I need to get reacquainted. Lance the Library is here. Hello, Lance. Adrian Montanez with a really awesome Superman picture. One Wheelchair X is here, who you may be seeing on the channel very soon. That's a hint. Jay Rabbit here, who I was talking to yesterday, so we will at least give them some credit for having an early comment. Axel Plate with their Statesman from City of Heroes. I don't have to ask again. I've asked twice, and now it has fixed in my mind. Kia ora to my New Zealand neighbor. New Zealand Hawkster is here. And I think we're just about ready to go. Matt H., James Rhodes, Pinch Hitter. I don't know if I've ever said hello to Pinch Hitter on a stream before. Always voting for more Batgirl. Well, Batgirl's been #1 for the last 2 years, so I think you've been doing pretty well. And Goosey's here, the Willingham Sturgis House of Mystery. Did I miss that? I don't know that I saw it in there. You know what? I will look it up for you right now. So if you go to Crushing Krisis, or if you just type into the Googs, Crushing Krisis, Tigereyes DC, because I know what I'm doing and the SEO is there. It should be the absolute first result. So I don't even have to give you a URL. You can just go there. And let's see. So you said you are looking for the Willingham Sturgis House of Mystery. So if you scroll down the page, there's a little expandable list that you can expand. And, you know, I don't see House of Mystery on there. I thought, oh, you know why? I think we have it just credited to Sturgis for some reason. Let's see. Sturgis. Yep. House of Mystery, The Vertigo Years by Lila Sturgis is the book you're looking for. I don't know why I didn't put Willingham's name on it. Okay. All right. And Bears Lair saying I was correct. Formerly 5th of Jack Gaming. We had an intervention. It became Bears Lair and the Thundercats, inspired with a bear twist. Okay. Thank you so much for everybody who's tuning in live. That's really appreciated because I could pre-record these, but I think it's fun to do them live and have you all heckle me as I talk about my favorite stuff. So that's why I enjoy it live. But, you know, it's here for everybody on the replay too. And I think 7 minutes has been plenty of time to say hello to everybody, except, of course, not enough time to say hello to my friend, Cliff on Comics, who maybe one day you will get to see me put myself into Lady Death Drag one more time on stream live with Cliff. Kia ora to, oh my god, Samantha, who's probably on a run, knowing her, and Yarnay Pauls is here. Okay, here we go. Let me make sure I'm visible here, because we have all this technology that we figured out how to make the thing square. That's my big, I invented squares this month. That was my big invention. So these are my 2026 Most Wanted DC Omnibus picks. And I should say up front, by way of explanation, generally, I only buy 2 things from DC oversized: Wonder Woman and WildStorm. Oh no, three, because also Sandman stuff I buy in oversized. So my fear in previous years of the poll is that I would just basically have a list of like Wonder Woman, WildStorm, Sandman. But I think because of the DC Finest, which are, I guess you can't see them in this view, they're all arrayed on this side of me here. Because of DC Finest, I've finally been getting deeper into post-crisis DC. And the thing I always say to people who say to me or to Tigereyes, like, I can't believe you haven't read all blah, blah, blah DC. Read where? DC was, once New 52 happened, DC absolutely was not taking care of their backlist, especially via Omnibus. If you look at what was coming out in Omnibus and old trades, mostly they were collecting the 2000s. It was very rare that DC would put any kind of substantial collection together of anything from the 80s post-crisis, or even really nothing pre-crisis, unless you go all the way back to their Golden and Silver Age trades, which before DC Finest were very, very thin and inefficient to collect, and they always tailed off after 3 or 4 releases from every series. So even if you're a fan of anything other than Batman. I mean, even Superman hadn't really been collected especially well. You couldn't get most of the Triangle years. There was really no 70s Superman, nothing. And for Wonder Woman, luckily, because of George Perez's run being so big, we got that in trade paperback. And then John Byrne, his, is John Byrne. So we got that in standard size hardcover. But even Wonder Woman was very undercollected. So this idea that somebody who's a collected editions person could know DC very well, we have to not judge them. Because up until probably 5 or 6 years ago, you really didn't have a choice. Now, not only is there that, but there's also the amazing DC Universe Infinite, which just is really well built. It's always a joy to browse. It has so many comics on it. So just now, I'm feeling that people who missed out on reading a lot of DC as collected editions readers are getting the chance to get to know DC. And there are characters that I either was totally not aware of whatsoever, or I kind of dimly remember from the 90s. And then I'm like, oh, wow, that was 30 issues. So we are going to tackle that today. I'm going to say a couple things. First, one, I'm only going to generally answer questions that are related to my picks. If you want to have a general Q&A with me, we will do that afterwards in the link that's in the description. And the other thing I would say is, again, you have the power to vote for whatever you want. I'm not telling you to vote for these things. I'm saying these are what my weird little brain craves the most in Omnibus, or at least to be released in some format. Like, can we get a compendium or something? So Dallas Anubis is saying, are we getting updated maps for the poll? I just don't know. I don't know if I have enough time to meaningfully do them. I might selectively do a couple of things where the maps have significantly been updated, like Superman or Wonder Woman, but a lot of the maps are just the same. They put out a lot of omnibuses last year, but not in a way that like really substantially changed the mapping. So I don't know if I'm going to do all of the mapping posts the way that I usually do. Okay, here we go. Oh, I forget how to drive this. Oh, here we go. Okay, here we go. Now, of course, you only get 10 choices on the actual ballot, but what would be the fun of that? So I'm doing 60. Okay. By the way, somebody else did this in our channel. Oh, Chubby Ray Comics, who's an excellent channel that you should go and subscribe to. You've seen him sometimes on Your Conditions. He's on some of the Solicit streams. I did the Superman Evergreen with him last year. He's just a very charming and very kind person. And he, like minutes after the stream was over, went and shared what he was voting for. So please go and check that out. Okay. My number 60 pick, and I know you are all going to be shocked about this one because I talk trash on this all the time. This one's for Sean at Comic Bell. Sean, I love you, babe. This is Watchmen Doomsday Clock. So let me explain the why. First of all, this is highly unlikely. DC is going to release Watchmen in every possible format in perpetuity, and I'm sure they're going to do the same thing with Doomsday Clock. The thing about Doomsday Clock was, even though it does stand alone, and even though it does build out of Watchmen, Doomsday Clock was Jeff Johns and Gary Frank's version of what it would look like if the Watchmen actually bled over into the main DC universe, which is of course funny because the Watchmen originally were supposed to use the Charlton Comics characters, which got absorbed into DC, but then DC decided they didn't want Alan Moore to destroy those characters as much as he was planning to do in the original Watchmen. And so all of DC Rebirth, which was truly phenomenal for the first couple of years, was used to kind of move the DC universe away from the New 52 and kind of restore a semblance of history to the DC universe in a way that made sense not only with post-crisis history, but with pre-crisis history and with New 52 and with everything. And they were saying basically that some outside force had done some kind of tampering with the DC universe to cause the New 52, to cause everything that happens, and that somehow it was linked to Watchmen. So we could just have Watchmen and Doomsday Clock 12 and 12 perfectly in a 24-issue book, but at that point you really could just buy 2 deluxes. I think the allure of getting this in Omnibus and putting it on the shelf next to the before Watchmen Omnibus is that there's a lot of little linking stuff that's happening in Rebirth. So there's the Rebirth special, there's the button crossover with Flash and Batman, which is like, was so fun to read. You're like, oh my gosh, they're really doing this. They're really referencing Watchmen in the DC universe. Then there were some Superman stories which implied what had happened with Superman, that what had happened to Superman's history was sort of the inciting event to change everything. I think this would be a really fun read. As I was putting it together, I was like really interested in it. Now Superjob is saying, why would I ruin Watchmen by putting the worst sequel in the same book? The thing is, Watchmen always will be Watchmen. Nothing anyone can do to it will change the quality of Watchmen. Watchmen will, before Watchmen can't taint it. This can't taint it. Watchmen will always be a landmark all-timer run of comic books. But to fully appreciate Doomsday Clock and to appreciate how Watchmen got integrated into the DC universe, there's just something entertaining about getting it all in one book with me. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that it's going to make the read any better as a thing to react to, but I think it will be a better reading experience. For those of you who don't know, Peter Cannon was another Charlton character that DC did not acquire the rights to, but he is the inspiration for the blonde guy. What's the blonde guy's name? I can't remember the blonde guy. The blonde guy in Watchmen. I can't remember. It's a like Egyptian god name, right? Anyway, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but Peter Cannon was the inspiration for him, but DC didn't get Peter Cannon. He is now, I think Dynamite last was able to publish him, and Kieran Gillen, my fave, wrote the series Peter Cannon Thunderbolt for, I believe, Dynamite, that is very much like an individual take on Watchmen. Like, what if Peter Cannon was dealing with the same sort of deconstructionalist events as all of Watchmen does, and it's phenomenal. I would put that in this book too if we could. Okay, Ozymandias. Ted, Captain Blonde Guy. That's what I thought his name was. Lots of people came through with Ozymandias. Thank you, Emmanuel Silvera. Okay, that's enough about Doomsday Clock. Gosh, that was only one slide. Okay, here's another one that probably will never happen, but we're deep in the depths of my poll ballot, and so I can just put these things on here. Deathmate. Image versus Valiant. Now here's the thing. DC just has one little kernel of what is printable of this event, because this was all of Image Comics. So not just WildStorm, but Top Cow, Spawn, Youngblood from Extreme Comics, I guess probably Shadowhawk's in here somewhere, all of the Savage Dragon, all of the launch lines, I believe, participated with a crossover to Valiant, which at the time was really big in the early 90s. But Valiant also had licensed characters as part of their universe. So on this cover, you can see Turok, who Valiant does not own. On one of the other colors, there's Solar. Valiant does not own him. So this would be quite a feat to be able to reprint, because it includes so many different characters from so many different publishers. It feels like DC has a lot of goodwill in that regard right now, because they just did DCKO and they had things like Beneath the Trees and Vampirella participate, Homelander participate in an official DC line-wide event. So it feels like if anybody could do the negotiation to maybe make this occur, it could be DC. But you know what? We're not voting on based on reality. We're voting based on what the heart wants. And the heart wants this, baby, an oversized hardcover. It doesn't make the most sense. I do have all of these issues. And there's a lot of things that we're going to go through in the show that I actually own all of. And I was like, oh, I could get them out. We could go through them. I'm like, no, 60 is plenty to go through. But yeah, I mean, this was just not done. I mean, Marvel and DC hadn't really had a crossover at this point since like X-Men and Teen Titans, which was, I think, almost a decade prior. So for the two big titans of indie comics to get together and be like, we're mashing up our whole universes, every character is going to see and fight every other character, I just think it would be so fun to have collected. And Badger Sump saying, I have Deathmate in singles and I would buy this on day one. Cruel Angel saying, I remember I had the Deathmates. Okay, if you have general questions, we will talk in the after show if you can stay up that long. Peter DeLuca, and the URL should be in the description right now. If it's not, please let me know, but I believe it is. Okay, number 58. More things you've never heard me talk about before. So this is Hawk and Dove, the post-crisis omnibus. Although, does it have to be a post-crisis omnibus? Not necessarily. So why? I love any omnibus, and you know this about me from the Marvel poll, that can collect everything in one go, where there is like no chance it is going to get split into two, and I could just have a whole run in one book. So that's really attractive to me. And the other reason is that, yes, I know Rob Liefeld on the cover, but everything about this series, which was a mini-series in 1988 and then an ongoing series in 1989, which together weigh in at about 40 issues, every single bit of it was written by Barbara and Carl Kessel. So I love, A, it's a series that we can get contained all in one book. B, it's extremely undercollected. Most of it has never been in print before. C, it's all by one creative team. To me, that is always the most interesting omnibus. I always am more interested in an omnibus, especially from the 80s or 90s, that's like a 40 plus issue run by a single set of creators, because it just wasn't, it happened. Many people ran for a long time, but a lot of books just had different people coming and going and they didn't relaunch. So this is kind of a big deal to me. Plus, I don't really know these characters very well. I very, very rarely have read them because they haven't been a huge factor, even though they did have a New 52 series. Now, something to point out there is that there are not that many other pieces of Hawk and Dove material. So there's like, there's Hawk and Dove 1968 1 through 6, I believe that's in the Teen Titans line. I could be mistaken, but that's only 6 more issues. Then there's a totally unrelated Hawk and Dove in 1997 that are 5 issues, and then they have some appearances through Flashpoint. But then Rob Liefeld comes back and relaunches them post Flashpoint and New 52 for 8 issues. So if we were to add all of that together, it's only another 19 issues. So this could just be an everything Hawk and Dove omnibus. Now at that point, I think we're getting to the point that it's probably a little bit too big that DC wouldn't do it all in one place, but a kid can dream. So I think I'm primarily interested in getting this in that all-in-one. You know what? If it's going to be a compendium, fine. Like I said, to me, these poll votes are kind of, I know that DC might look at some of these things and go, you know, I know you guys want that, but we're pretty sure it's not going to sell an omnibus, or the art is not ready for omnibus. Like they said about Nightwing. They're like, look, you guys love Nightwing. We love Nightwing, but we need more time to restore that art. Same for Man of Steel. But you know what? Hey, you guys can have a DC Finest. You guys can have a compendium. So I'm voting for this fully knowing that we might not really get an omnibus. Well, I'm not really voting for it because it's number 58. I'm saying I desire it, knowing we might not actually get an omnibus, and that I am fine with that. Hawk and Dove with Liefeld art, that would be awesome. Nick N, we need more Hawk and Dove. Cliff on Comics, Hawk and Dove, James Rhodes. My lists always include way too much Liefeld material. What would be too much? More than 0? Edwin Billiard saying Hawk and Dove is really good and should have an omnibus. Miguel saying collecting Cull characters because of Barbara Kessel, not because of Liefeld. Super cool, says Jamie, to get one full creative team book. This has been one I've been considering. Cedric Nellen says, I love Hawk and Dove. I only don't know if the original series from the 60s is worth collecting. I see, sometimes I like doing these because I think I'm all alone. Like, oh, nobody's going to know what Hawk and Dove is. And then you all come through with like, oh, you know, I've always been interested in that. It makes me really excited. All right, number 57, the first of what will be many WildStorm books appearing on this poll. And I will always call out their WildStorm. I will say, if you're voting on the actual poll, every WildStorm book says WildStorm at the beginning, just because WildStorm fans, I assumed, kind of would want to find them all in one place for the purposes of no, what does a dolphin do? That's more of a hyena. I can't do a dolphin noise. For the purposes of these slides, I just wanted to have titles that would display and look really clean and attractive, so I don't have them all say WildStorm at the beginning, but this is a WildStorm book. So Midnighter was originally introduced as part of the Authority, and of course the Authority got 2 omnibuses because it looked for a hot second like we were going to have an Authority movie, and then that didn't happen. But we got 2 omnibuses out of it. Now Midnighter is really, I want to say he's the only WildStorm character, solo character, that really broke out on his own in the DC years. Like there were a lot of Authority side characters that got a number of miniseries, like Kev got a number of miniseries, but like Grifter even had really fallen off. Mr. Majestic by the mid 2000s had really fallen off. Midnighter really stuck around, and I think there's something very unique to him, right? He's kind of a little bit Batman-y, but he's way, way more violent. His morals are a little bit more questionable, so he's this like super violent, you know, super self-sufficient guy, but then he's also gay, and he's in love with another character, Apollo, and they're a couple, and so there's just like layers there that I think are a little bit unique to him. Also, the beginning of this solo series, which has been collected completely in trade, is by Garth Ennis. Now, I'm not personally a huge Garth Ennis fan typically, but I know that's why there's interest in it. Other people wrote it as it went on. And the thing about this is a lot of WildStorm kind of just dies at Flashpoint or gets like so reconfigured like Stormwatch that it's not really even the same thing. Midnighter pretty much remains Midnighter. They get a little squirrely about like if he has the whole same history that he had before Flashpoint, but he comes back and he has another series. He has a Midnighter and Apollo series. He has a Midnighter solo series for 12 issues, and then he has a Midnighter and Apollo series for 6 issues. So you could basically take everything that was in that original Midnighter trade, which would already be enough for like a small omnibus, and then you can add Grifter and Midnighter, and then you can add the post-Flashpoint stuff, and all of a sudden you have got a chunky omnibus. Super Chop saying, Midnighter is such an Ellis character. The Blue Dragon Warrior can't stick around, gonna watch the video on demand later. Long live the Legion. Will the Legion turn up on this poll on my ballot? I do not know. Okay, let's go to number 56. You know that I am a strong believer that Marvel and DC should find a way, while their omnibus programs are popular, to use that popularity to subsidize the restoration of the most important works that they have available to them in their library from the 40s and 50s. And sometimes those works are not works that are wholly owned by them, but they're works that they acquired over time. And that is the case with the original Captain Marvel, who of course we know as Shazam. widely recognized as some of the best Golden Age era comic books, especially kind of very for kids wholesome comic books. When people talk about the best of the Golden Age, and we're not just limiting ourselves to things that were in universe for Marvel and DC at the time, usually they're talking about some Captain America comic books. They're certainly talking about some of DC's Golden Age, Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman. Of course, they're not just the Trinity. They also had very good Golden Age titles. This is usually in the conversation. The art is spellbindingly beautiful. Just the simplicity of the line work and just how iconic Shazam is. He's even more bold and iconic than Superman in a way, with the all red, the yellow bolt, the white cape, which is kind of like a bold choice, a white cape given the print quality of that time. But so few of these are available, and there's a lot of them. So Shazam headlined Wiz Comics for 24 issues, and they were, if memory serves, they were pretty long. Then there was Captain Marvel Adventures. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. That's just what would fit into this first book. So I think the first 24 issues of Wiz would probably fit into this book. Wiz Comic ran for 144 issues. Captain Marvel Adventures ran for 150 issues. And that's before we even get into the Captain Marvel family, which ran for 89 issues, and stuff about Captain Marvel Jr., Mary Marvel. There's a lot of Shazam. Now, unfortunately, I think our moment really might have passed here because we had 2 movies and DC didn't get on it. If this was Marvel, they would have used the opportunity of the movies to make this omnibus. I just think it's really important that somebody, and I know because this is like kind of sort of public domain, I don't profess to know all the legalities of it, but I know that there are comic companies who have taken the opportunity to just reprint some of these books from scans, which is great. And I'm so happy that that exists in the world. But this is part of the DC legacy at this point because they purchased it. And I just really, I wish we could see it. So I would buy this in any format, no matter if they put it out in Finest, Compendium, Omnibus, any format that they committed, even if they're not going to get through all of it, because it is a prodigious amount of content. But any format that they're like, we're at least going to do like 3 volumes or do this amount of years or do whatever, I would absolutely tune in for this. Would I be okay if this book omits the Steamboat Bill material? Yeah, I think if there's some material that needs to be omitted for rights issues or for cultural issues or for any issue, I'm a little bit less invested on this has to be like a complete and gapless collection. There just might not be good scans of some of these comic books. I think that's fine, James Rhodes. I would not necessarily be upset about that. Valentin's saying this needs to happen, please. Although that might have been about Midnighter because it was right at the end of Midnighter. Kane Gilmore saying here, Shazam. Cliff on Comics saying Shazam, yes. Please give me that Wizzy burger. I don't believe you got me to just say that live on stream, suspicious lunch witch, but here we are. A lot of Captain Marvel fans. Warren Weaver, a Captain Marvel fan. Sorry, I keep showing that. I know I try not to show when you're talking to each other. Adrian Montana's also really invested, but Miguel with a cautionary note here saying I would buy it, but I don't see DC doing a Golden Age before having a more contemporary book succeeding. And I agree with that. I don't think that Shazam has really shown to be a seller really for DC in really almost any format. And now that the movies have passed, it's like the moment passed. Like he just had the most attention he's going to get. So, but this is my ballot, not the DC Fantasy Draft, which is coming. Okay, let's move on, shall we? Because we're only in the 50s and it's been 30 minutes already. This is DV8. It is a WildStorm type. Every time in WildStorm I'll do this, right? But that could be Wonder Woman too. It could be any of my W books. This is another WildStorm title. If you've never heard of it, good, because I have to say this is one of my least favorite WildStorm titles. I read the first couple of issues with a friend here in New Zealand at one point that we were going to do a show about it, and I was like, I think I might hate this comic too much to have a show exclusively about talking about it. DV8 was sort of the negative reflection of Gen 13. So in the way that Gen 13 were looking for community and were kind of just good kids that didn't have direction, DV8 were like just a bunch of assholes. And I really find it unpleasant, but they're part of that Gen 13 universe. They're really, even this cover is an homage to an early Gen 13 cover. They're meant to be a negative reflection of Gen 13 to kind of show what happens if the bad kids get together and the bad kids don't have a Lynch to be. Lynch was their kind of like Professor X sort of, if you don't know Gen 13. What if they don't have a Lynch? What if like all of the bad things happen? Now, I don't profess to super know this series really well because again, I don't like it very well. Do I own it? Yes, it's right up there. And I was thinking about getting out all the singles of WildStorm stuff because I own every last issue of everything. But I was like, this show's going to be long anyway. If you want to have a Krisis pulls out all the singles of WildStorm show, that could be a totally other show. But I do enjoy omnibuses that could be knocked out all in one. And unlike Gen 13, which is going to take a lot of omnibuses to get through, I think like 5 or more, this is just one book. So do I really think there's a high chance of it being an omnibus? Not necessarily. Do I think that if DC continued to tackle WildStorm and Compendium, that we could see this compendium? No, probably not. I don't think there's more than like 25 people who would buy that compendium, but by gosh, it's on my ballot, and I don't need to make any more excuses than that. So here it is. I got those Deviant issues, Roberto Ramos on art. That's another thing. I'm not a huge Ramos fan, as we know. Okay, number 54. This was one that I knew it existed, but I did not know it existed to this extent until I was researching for the poll, which is Steel, a whole series for Steel, a 52-issue series for Steel by Louise Simonson for the first half and Christopher Priest for the second half. Okay, so did you know, first of all, did you even realize that Steel had his own ongoing series after the whole Reign of Superman thing? Question number 1. Question number 2, did you know that it ran for the best number at DC, which is not 42, which it would be anywhere else. The best number at DC is 52. Did you know that it ran for 52 issues? And then if you knew both of those things, did you know it was written exclusively, I think other than 1 or 2 fill-in issues, by Louise Simonson and Christopher Priest? This was news to me. I'm sorry if you knew it already and I'm just a dumbass. But I just think that Steel, unlike a lot of the other characters that I'm going to be talking about that are so niche, I never know. I just try to take turns saying the two. I should look it up. Let's look it up, shall we? Unlike a lot of these other characters that like I don't think anybody knows who they are or remembers who they are, Steel, I think, has wide brand recognition. I think people like, oh, it's niche. It's not niche. Niche. Okay. He's not niche. I think he has wide brand recognition. I think people of every era know who he is. I think putting the names Simonson and Priest on a book makes it very sellable. And I think that there weren't a lot of African-American heroes in the 90s headlining books. I mean, Luke Cage only lasted 20-something issues. Deathlock, I guess, is nominally African-American, or at least black, but he's mostly a cyborg. I think that this is like one of those books that is actually pretty unique. And I like that Christopher Priest always says, like, why won't you just let me write Superman? Like, do I always have to write black characters? But here he is writing a black character. Of course, you know, this is 2 or 3 years before Black Panther. He pretty much leaves this and goes to Black Panther. So I've never read a single issue of it, other than I know that I have a couple of issues in the Milestone compendiums, and this would be a great compendium because it's like a perfect chunky size, and also it's never been collected. The first 8 issues and the 0 issue have been collected, and then issues that have crossed over with other things that have been collected, so crossover with Superman, crossover with Milestone. But this is like, to me, this just seems like if DC would get it out in some format, Finest, Compendium, Omnibus, I just think there's enough 90s comic book lovers that would be like, hell yeah, first time, that it would just sell. But again, I'm kind of like making a strong pitch for why things would sell because I'm fantasy draft on the brain. I don't know that I would put this in the fantasy draft, but do I want it? Would I buy it in just about any format? Absolutely, yes, I would. Jamie C says, Steel, I literally just added this to my reading list yesterday. I didn't realize it was Priest. I only noticed Simonson. Even more excited. Lance at the library saying, Steel is cool. I would love to read this. James Abel saying, more people know who Steel is than Hardware. Nick N saying, I had no idea that Steel was 52 issues. I had no idea Simonson and Priest did it. Why hasn't the series been collected yet? It should be super popular. Bonjour, I should say bonsoir, to French Bolt from France. Steel is on my shortlist. Well, it has the Tigereyes stamp of approval, so there you go. But the Phenomenal AC, always here to give a little bit of a balanced take. Never was a fan of Steel, mostly because of the corny-ass movie, but I'd probably pick it up with Simonson and Priest names on it. I definitely am interested. This is one of those ones that was never on my like list of things that I need to read or need to get to, but now that I am aware of it, I'm like, well, now I need to read it, but it hasn't been prevented. And I forget if all of it was on DC Infinite or not, and I can't do DC Infinite at the same time I'm doing this, so I can't check. Okay. WildStorm. WildStorm. This is a WildStorm book. Stormwatch, the DC years. So let's talk about what that means. Stormwatch was a launch title at WildStorm. Wild was Wildcats. Storm was Stormwatch. Stormwatch ran for 50 issues-ish, right? I think it's 50. Warren Ellis takes over from issue 37. Then he writes another 13-issue series, all of which has been collected in that wonderful compendium, which is somewhere somewhere adjacent to me right now, which I don't see. And then it turns into the Authority. But Stormwatch at that time was still a brand that the marketplace had an awareness of. So as the Authority is still existent and big, DC launches Stormwatch Team Achilles, and then they relaunched Stormwatch PhD Post-Human Division later on to bring back some of the original Stormwatch characters, which were not in the Authority. Now, I love Stormwatch. It is probably my favorite of all the Image launch books. Yes, even more than Wildcats. I have all of this in singles. I'm not that familiar with this content because the Stormwatch that comes before PhD, Team Achilles, it's like a really dull, I don't know how to describe it. They're kind of just like this battalion who's like going around and being like, stop being bad, superheroes. It's not terribly interesting. I'm much more interested in that PhD and Armageddon and World's End stuff that happens at the end of the Stormwatch. I think the chances are probably higher that we would get this in Compendium than Omnibus, but Moi wants everything that is WildStorm in Omnibus. So I want an Omnibus, and that's what I want. And that's really all I have to say about it. I mean, I guess the hope I had is that while the Authority was big and while it seemed like we might get an Authority movie, that DC would use that to get everything Authority related out in Omnibus and then maybe everything Stormwatch out in Compendium. And now that that moment has passed, I'm like, oh no, it doesn't really feel as possible as it was before. So this is not the New 52 team with Martian Manhunter. That went on long enough that it could get its own omnibus, and DC has been very active in making New 52 omnibuses, so maybe that would happen. But no, there's enough material basically from the post-Authority relaunch of Stormwatch all the way up to Flashpoint that we could get it all into one book. Okay. Number 52, The Ray, the 90s omnibus by... Look, it's Christopher Priest again. So in the 90s, many of you are aware of Starman. Starman by James Robinson. It was out in a series of hardcovers for a long time. We finally just got it in Compendium. It is a very well-known, very famous series. And the premise is that this present-day Starman has connections to the Starman of DC's Golden Age. DC, now that they had kind of straightened out their continuity after Crisis and then again after 0 Hour, was really looking to revive the ideas of a lot of these Golden Age heroes. And let's not forget that that really started with Sandman in 1988. Sandman was a revival of a Golden Age hero. So DC tried to do that in some cases with Vertigo titles, but also they were trying to do it in the main universe as well. And I think the Ray, who is very much part of that, he is a Golden Age, he's the son of the Golden Age hero, I believe. I think this kind of is in that same lineage. It's just one more of those kind of revivals that DC did. And they're all interesting to me because it's something Marvel can't do. Like, Marvel doesn't really, I mean, they had a Golden Age, but they don't really acknowledge the continuity of the Golden Age a whole lot other than if it is, you know, Al Ewing tinkering with it. But to me, this is just so interesting. And I think it had really great artwork too. So the original Ray mini series, which was 6 issues, and then the first 5 or 6 issues of his ongoing series had early art from Joe Quesada, like always easy to market and attractive. And then Christopher Priest again writes this whole thing pretty much before he moves on to Steel. And this is Christopher Priest. I mean, the character's visually black on that cover, but I think the Ray, this character, I think is not an African-American character, so it's Christopher Priest just being allowed to write any superhero, as he should be. And I just haven't read very much of it. I've read like 1 issue of it. I looked in the stacks. I had like this, I think I had this issue, the 0 issue. And again, I just am always very attracted to a book that we can get all in one. So this is 6 issues of the original miniseries, 28 issues of 0 and an annual of the main series. 36 issues is the perfect size for DC Omnibus right now, and or a compendium. So it's absolutely perfect for that. Cliff on Comics is pretty excited about the Ray. James Rhodes saying it's his number 1 pick. Kane Gilmore giving me feedback that the Ray was so good. Superjob saying Joe Quesada art, let's effing go. James Abel Ray is this a character I don't know much about. And Tigereyes, who loves that 90s bullshit just like I do, saying Ray is also on my short list. Blue Bat's got it run, but saw this was live and just wanted to jump in and say hi, hello to you, friend. Tigereyes has great taste. I agree, Nick. Okay. And also hello to Novarg and his character L. All right, number 51. It's more WildStorm. This is Gen 13 Armageddon and World's End, but the name in the title that probably really matters here for directional purposes is Gail Simone. So Gen 13 always was the little WildStorm book that could. Actually, it wasn't just the little book that could, it was the big book. Gen 13 just had the biggest fandom of all of the WildStorm titles in the 90s. It allowed it to run incredibly long, longer than any other book did. And even with the rise of the Authority in the early 2000s, Gen 13 as a brand and the characters, the main characters of the book that you see here, Fairchild, Roxy, Grunge, and Burnout, just had, is Rainmaker in the back there? I can't tell. It's kind of small for me. They just had lasting appeal. This was one of the few WildStorm properties that kind of maintained its traction in the mid-2000s. There's a lot of like launches and relaunches. Wildcats is going to come back. It got one issue by Grant Morrison and Jim Lee and it went away. This book just kept going and going. There was a 2006 series for 13 issues. Then they had a one-shot in 2007. Then to the 2006, actually, I'm sorry, the 2006 issue series continues. I have it in reading order in the box there. And Gail Simone writes this. So it was, I think this is a huge part of kind of what was a star-making turn for Gail Simone. She just had this string of team titles that had some really fun, quirky, funny characters on them. You know, it was Birds of Prey, Secret Six, this, and Welcome to Tranquility. And I think that's what really, really established her brand in addition to her writing Red Sonja. Cliff was not expecting all this Gen 13 love, but it's nice. Cliff, we haven't talked about this, but I'm obsessed with WildStorm. So there is unlimited WildStorm love here. Elon, hello, my friend, saying I would get this. Great choice. Novarg saying I love Gen 13. This was right up my alley when that miniseries originally was published. I had to get every issue. So did I. And Warren even gives the stamp of approval to Gen 13. Calder is late, but I'm here. Okay, so I would really love to see this in Omnibus. And honestly, Gail Simone, I think DC is figuring out like, oh, there are people that, even if they're not Gail Simone super fans, they trust Gail Simone's writing to be good and interesting enough that we can sell omnibuses with her name on the title. It's always interesting to see what Marvel and DC thinks they can put in the title of an omnibus, and even if a omnibus has a creator on most of it, they like won't put them in the title. That's to me often a sign of low confidence. They're like, oh, I don't know if we put this in the title if it's going to help or hurt. Gail, I think they've figured out between her Wonder Woman, her Secret Six, I think they're figuring out that like they can put her name in an omnibus and it does pretty well. Gen 13 has the most name recognition of all of the WildStorm properties, probably after the Authority. I think that this would be a really good one for DC to try, and I would love to have it in Omnibus. Okay. Lance didn't even know if Gail wrote any Gen 13. Number 50. I'm deep in my bullshit, baby. Here we go. This is Sovereign 7 by Chris Claremont. Did you know that Chris Claremont wrote for DC in the 90s? Did you know that he wrote a fully creator-owned series in DC continuity in the 90s? That is a little bit crazy. So this series, he kind of invents this team who kind of like arrive at DC proper, having... what am I trying to say? Having come from somewhere totally different and then have to kind of navigate through DC. And he's pretty much speed running everything that he did on X-Men. Like it's got like the big team of various kind of characters and personalities the way of X-Men. It has all sorts of things kind of threaded in and out the way that it did on X-Men. It's very X-Men-esque. It's got really good art through a lot of it, including, what is the name? Dwayne Turner is the artist who is on the launch of it. And again, it's like perfectly omnibuses sized. And Cliff says, and then it was a dream. So I have to see, I don't know if I can share it. There's this amazing comic book commentator. He's on Blue Sky now, but at the time I knew him on Twitter, called Conrad Bulski. And he has this great thread where he breaks down like every issue of Sovereign 7 and explains all the themes and kind of explains what it's about. I'm going to put it in the chat here. I hate to send people to Twitter these days, but I don't know that he ever made that same thread on Blue Sky, and I'll put it in the description after the video too. So here it is. And it's a huge thread. I mean, you can spend the whole afternoon reading it. He's got art in it. He explains the characters and the themes and the way that it's so Claremont. But I have all of this actually in physical. It's not much. You can get a lot of it on eBay for cheap. And I not only have it ready for binding, I actually went through and I cut up stuff from other things. Like, I think they had like a showcase, showcase 96 number 7. I literally like cut that out of showcase number 7 so I can insert it into this. And so I have this like so ready for binding, because I thought, oh, you know, DC's probably never going to print it. This would be a good first bind to do. And I thought it was going to be one of my first binds. And then I moved to New Zealand. So I've still got it. I could read it at any time. But wouldn't it be fun if DC put it out? And again, even though they have no name recognition whatsoever, it's an opportunity for DC to put out a book with Claremont's name on it. And I would buy it. Again, I keep justifying these choices as if this is the fantasy draft poll. I don't have to justify shit. This is the stuff that I want, and I just want it. Cliff on Comics refuses to believe that I actually want this, but you have to believe. This could be an extra Legion slot if I didn't think Legion was the most, well, we'll get there. Okay, Huntsman is in this, right? Would there be difficulty reprinting? I don't know if Huntsman's in this. Huntsman from Wildcats? I'm not sure, Super Chop. I'm not sure. Lance says this is going to be a no from me. Okay, let's get, I just, the heart wants what it wants. Okay, let's move on to one that I suspect is going to be popular with several of you. This is number 49. It is Martian Manhunter by John Ostrander. Why? Martian Manhunter really does not have his own solo series all that often. Usually they are very short-lived. This one was not short-lived. It ran for 36 issues, 0 annuals, and a 1 million issue. So this is, for many people, kind of the definitive Martian Manhunter, because it's what they read him in, and it was the longest running one. And talking about creators whose names sell omnibuses, DC knows for a fact now that Ostrander's name can sell books. They've sold Spectre books. They've sold Suicide Squad books. I think DC is figuring out, in terms of classic creators, in the same way that Marvel finally caught on that JMD Mateus can sell just about anything, I think they've caught on that Ostrander's name can sell books. So I do think this will be coming. I think maybe a compendium rather than an omnibus. I would think it would be cool to get it in omnibus. Now, the thing about this is some of these things are on my list, not just because I'm interested in reading them, not just because I think they ought to be collected, but because I think my map is good. And I have actually spoken once or twice with folks who officially do mapping for DC, and I know that the Krisis way of mapping everything in a giant smorgasbord platter is not necessarily DC's way of mapping, and I fully understand it. But sometimes we meet in the middle. Like, I think what they did in that Zatanna omnibus was really, really cool. They didn't reach as far back to the beginning of post-Krisis as I thought they might, but they did include stuff other than just the Paul Dini, and I thought that was wonderful. So for this book, could it just be the Ostrander run? Yes. Could it also just go back for just 8 additional issues? Martian Manhunter 1988, Martian Manhunter American Secrets 1992, and a special from 1996. If it went back for those 8 issues, we would have every Martian Manhunter solo story. Maybe I missed like one in Showcase or somewhere. But in terms of him titling a book, we would have everything from post-Krisis, and it's only 8 more issues. So that seems eminently doable, and you could still call it Martian Manhunter by John Ostrander, and I don't think that that would be disappointing at all. So let's see how many people are agreeing with me. Cliff on Comics, I've been redeemed in his eyes after he couldn't believe that I wanted Sovereign 7. Jamie saying top 10 for certain, possibly top 5. Wesley Wiggins saying yes on this. Cliff does certify that it makes up for my pick of Sovereign 7. Nick, though, not a particular fan of Martian Manhunter. Lance saying would love for Martian Manhunter to be collected. I want a DC Finest line. I do too. Martian Manhunter by Ostrander was number 11 for Body by Leafield is here. I've got to do the thing. Hold on. I don't know. Am I doing it? Okay. Caldern, this was my number 10. James Rhodes is looking for a lot of Hawkman as well. Martian Manhunter was Edwin Billiott's number 6 vote. Okay, so this was a popular one. If anything, I'm behind the curve. Gracie Patrick saying this is one of my votes. Jade, not only have I read Absolute Martian Manhunter, but if you go back to my pull list show from last year, which hopefully one day will be back, there's only so many hours in the day, same in New Zealand as anywhere else, I actually wrote a song about Martian Manhunter because I found the first issue to be so evocative, and those who know have seen me do that song on the show. Richard B pointing out Ostrander dominated the poll last year as much as Legion. This would sell for sure. Ostrander only did a little bit of writing for Marvel. I'm actually reading some Ostrander right now. He dabbled in the X-Men line in the 90s, and whenever he shows up, things start making so much more sense than they did in issue before. He wrote a really great X-Men versus the Brood miniseries with Brian Hitch on art. He also wrote X-Man, which not even the powers of John Ostrander could save. Okay, I cannot believe Leafield drew Krisis. I need that cover. Very good joke there, Adrian. Okay, number 48, The Authority Companion, The Monarchy versus the Establishment. So, again, WildStorm. I got really excited when they put out that Authority Omnibus Volume 2. Not excited enough that I've unwrapped it yet. But again, I own every single issue of this in singles, so it's not like a hurry to. I should unwrap it, just like make sure it's not messed up or whatever, but you know, I haven't. So I would not have listed a lot of these Authority books so high on my poll before this showed up. And this has an amazing map. On the first year of the DC poll, we just had this as like Authority Companion ? But this just collects so many Authority adjacent things. I know you can't read all of this, but this is all the stuff it contains. Look at all of it. And it's a thickums. It's really, really big. Now, in doing that, it left out necessarily these two runs, which were 12 issues and 13 issues respectively, which obviously you could not have fit another 25 issues into that book. We originally thought, oh, maybe they'll start out with these 25 issues and some of the miniseries, and maybe eventually we'll get the rest of the miniseries. But no, they put all the miniseries in one book instead, along with some other ongoing Authority stuff. So these two series spun out of Authority from specific issues. The Monarchy spun out of issue number 21, The Establishment out of issue 13, and I actually own them all, as I do with all of this. I know that the name recognition is low. I know there's very little reason people would want it in an omnibus. I just, now that they've given me 2 Authority omnibuses, I'm hungry and I want a whole shelf of everything related to the Authority. The Monarchy versus the Establishment sounds like a Dennis Camp book. Well, maybe we could get absolute Monarchy versus the Establishment, and we can then have a reason to reprint this. Edwin Billy giving his thumbs up. The Establishment was so much crazy British fun. Okay. Novarg didn't even realize there was a Gem 13 omnibus on the list, possibly because they were all advertised under WildStorm. Fair enough. Okay. Let's see. I recently read the Stormwatch Compendium and the Authority Compact Stellar Comics, says Caldor. And speaking of compendiums, here we have Sandman Mystery Theater, Volume 1 of 2 in Omnibus. Now, for the longest time, for the longest time, DC just could not finish a collection of this. They tried once or twice and they only got through a little of it. So when the first compendium came out, we were clenching every orifice in our body. Could we get a volume 2? And they really lingered like a cranberry, but they eventually did put out a volume 2. So we finally have all of this collected, or do we? Because those compendiums, if I'm remembering correctly, I always can be wrong, I'm fallible, but I believe they left out Sandman Midnight Theater, an original graphic novel, and they also did not continue to Sandman Mystery Theater, Sleep of Reason in 2006. So I'm not saying that that's a crime. Those are 2 very small things. I'm very, very happy to have the compendiums. If for some reason we could finally advance to having these in an omnibus, it gives the omnibus a way to be a little bit different from the compendiums, which I think is always good for marketing purposes, to say the omnibus has just got a little bit more. Just in the same way that some of these new compendiums for things like the Green Lantern run from Jeff Johns, they're like, ooh, the compendiums have a little bit more. I just think it's always good to try to differentiate the compendiums and the omnibuses a little bit, unless they're for one singular run, like Death of Superman, which is, I think the marketing ploy there is it's exactly the same. So again, much like with Authority, we have so much of Sandman and Omnibus, especially because we got Books of Magic, we got Dead Boy Detectives, we got Lucifer, and I just think that this series always had gorgeous art. It's just so fun and so readable, and it's, I like that it's a golden aged series, but in a 90s sensibility. I've always been a fan. I haven't read a ton of it. I need to sit down and read all of the compendiums now that they're finally here, because I never actually had it all in singles. But I would like to see it in omnibus. I want that complete Sandman shelf. And because there's the opportunity to grab a couple of little things that were missing in the compendiums, I still have a reason to put it on here. Now, as of 3 years ago, before we even had the first compendium, or even before we had the second one, this would have been top 10 for me. No question whatsoever. Now that I have the compendiums on my shelf, you know that I generally put a lesser priority on things that have been collected well in other places. So for that reason, this is just not as high as it used to be for me. Vailned saying Wesley Dodds is great. Wesley Wiggins saying I need to get the compendiums of this. Max Appleman Cranberries reference right after a Billy Joel reference. What is this, heaven? I did notice that I got very musical when this one came out. Adrian Montana's, I'll be honest, I would probably upgrade for this if it happened. I loved reading it, but I want all the stuff they didn't include. Body by Leafield saying, don't get me going on Billy Joel. I'm trying not to talk so much. I mean, Billy Joel, that could be a whole other stream. Wesley Wiggins saying, I have Midnight Theater and the Neil Gaiman's Midnight Days hardcover. I have the graphic novel of Midnight Theater somewhere in the stacks. I would have to go and retrieve it. Gang Gilmore would love to read it. Been waiting on an omnibus. Superjob got the compendiums for Christmas. Still have not read them. Apparently, I've hit upon a hit here. Everybody really has good things to say about it. Andrew Udavoida, teach me how to say that, please. Sandman Mystery Theater Compendium 1 was shockingly fantastic. That is a glowing review. I need to prioritize getting to reading the second one. All right, let's continue. I got Adam pilled by one of our friends who helps to map the DC poll, who had Adam mapped perfectly. This is number 46, The Power of the Atom by Roger Stern and Tom Payer. And it's 1983 to 1999. Why? Well, I don't totally know because I don't know the Atom very well, but this is where I trust the wisdom of our Atom mapper. He was like, look, it starts with Sword of the Atom in 1983. And I'm like, but that's pre-Crisis. And he was like, no. Sword of the Atom then continues to Sword of the Atom, which now then continues The Power of the Atom. Thematically, it's like all the same. It's one of those times that I would rarely put pre-Crisis stuff with post-Crisis stuff. I was like, all right, well, you know better than me, despite my name being Crisis. And then later in the poll process, I was kind of trying to chase down all the things that we didn't have spaces for, because on the DC poll, because DC actively releases deluxe editions, if something is like 13 issues, and I don't know it that well, because I don't know DC all that well in certain year periods, I will ask the experts like, ooh, is there a reason we should like try to squeeze this into an omnibus, or is this actually a deluxe on its own? And so I asked the question, oh, is Chronos from 1998, surely that's just a deluxe, right? And it came back saying, no, actually, it completes the story of the Atom. It should be the last story in the Power of the Atom omnibus. So I know literally nothing about this, other than somebody got me so hype for how it's this great sweeping 16-year arc of the Atom. And plus, you know, pink on a cover always turns me on. So that's why it's my number 46 pick. Also, again, just something totally uncollected. The Atom has virtually no collected editions, and the chance to just knock out this massive, massive swath of him in one omnibus or maybe compendium, to me, that is so, so attractive. And so I'm just like really, really intrigued by it. Would DC actually put Chronos at the end of this? I don't know how adventurous that is. All I know is that my mapper who knows DC really well told me it would be a good read that way, and I'm just going to have to trust them. Cliff on Comics saying, I can back this Atom horse. Superjob saying, Matt Wagner, shout out my best creators list after reading, we're now talking about Sandman Mystery Theater again, Monster Man and Mad Monk and his Dracula graphic novel, which I missed getting, I think. I think it was like in my cart and then it disappeared from the cart. I do have All of Grendel, which is quite a reading project. I started to binge that, Superjob, and then I just fell off. Dan, the Stern name also had me adding this to my future reads list yesterday as well. DJ Lost, who might be 14 spots behind us on the poll right now, saying retcon Doomsday Clock. Look, I'm not saying I like Doomsday Clock. Let's just set the record straight. I'm just saying I think it's more interesting to read it to see the thread of what Geoff Johns was trying to do, rather than reading it by itself, in which I think is a disaster. Cliff saying pink on a cover always turns me on. Indeed. Also, I always say, and I don't know where I got this, that pink on a cover tended to sell well from the newsstand because it just was always, it like popped so much, but I could be making that up. The more competent and charming version of the Micro Hero, says Suspicious Sledvich, injected into my veins, the pink Kirby-esque collage cover slaps. He's dancing around in the bloodstream there. Superjob voting on books I didn't like, an interesting tactic. Well, Superjob, for me, a lot of times I get enamored with an omnibus a certain way that we've mapped it, or like a certain reading order. Like once I see it that way, I'm like, oh, that would make a lot of sense. So like, I think that's why I get enamored. Ken Crayley, who's generally very good taste in DC, saying, yes, on some love for the Atom. I love Ray Palmer as a character. He needs more books out. And Body by Leafield saying, I only read Watchmen and Doomsday Clock back to back last year. It only helps a bit. Okay, let's continue to number 45, Underworld Unleashed. Hear me out. This is a line-wide event that is villains focused. It has Joker right in the middle, And DC has never comprehensively collected it. I understand that they're just now finally working their way through their major events in Omnibus, and it's just like finally happening for us. But every year, I've always been puzzled that this has never been in an Omnibus, especially when they were basically doing a version of this with like Year of the Villain and The Man Who Laughed and all of that. Like, even I think, Dark Crisis and Dark Knight's Metal and all that still all had shades of Underworld Unleashed. I was buying at the time, is this the best story? No. But sometimes what we want in Omnibus is we want to see stuff from the 90s collected in a holistic kind of way. And it just, of all the stuff, they're going to have a lot of trouble marketing a lot of, and I know this is not my fantasy draft bill or my fantasy draft show, but DC's going to have a lot of trouble marketing a lot of books from the 90s, a lot of their events from the 90s, like Final Night, Genesis, Day of Judgment. How do you market an omnibus of those? They're not, to me, as mostly a Marvel fan, I look at the descriptions of those and I'm like, I don't really feel the excitement there. But for this, I just think this is an easy sell. Joker on the cover of a big hunkin' omnibus of an event. I think it's fun to read because unlike Zero Hour, where the enemy, which was the event prior to this, which I love, and you cannot convince me otherwise. Unlike Zero Hour, where the bad guy was kind of like time. I mean, there was a bad guy, but for a lot of it, all the heroes are like fighting time. This is a very specific kind of struggle, and I just think that always reads better in an omnibus, and I want it. Would I buy it truly in oversize? I don't know, because generally I do not do DC events in oversize. I think it should exist. And if it was a compendium, I would buy it. I'm really trying not to go down the path of buying a whole lot of DC omnibuses because look at this room. I truly can't. Kane Gilmore saying, oh yes, Underworld was such a fun crossover, but they need to figure out how to redo that fifth ink green color. I was going to mention it. So the fifth color ink means that usually most colors in a printed matter are built from CMYK, cyan, yellow, magenta, and black. And any color you want has a CMYK combination that you can build. But you also, if you have a very important color, like for your brand, when I worked for a particular United States health insurer that is associated with a very specific color, you knew the Pantone color of that color. And if you were doing a really big project and it was important to get that color right, you might actually ask for a fifth color of ink to be that actual color, so that was like kind of pre-mixed, pre-blended to be that color, so that when it hit the page, it was always true to your color, because especially for us, that color could trend very green if it was built from a CMYK build. And so this thing that was kind of big in the mid-90s, Marvel did it too on some of the Midnight Suns books, I want to say, is that they picked a fifth color of ink, some crazy neon color to print that you just could not get from a CMYK build. Underworld Unleashed did it with that like really spooky spectral green. I think it was the green down at the bottom of that cover there. That was a fifth color ink. So there's Crisis's print technology quarter. Cliff Unconic saying, okay. Body by Leafield saying, can we sneak in the other 17 issues of Extreme Justice for funsies? No, you gotta vote for that separately. Suspicious Sludwitch saying, good omnibus material, a weird toy-like story. Hey, Zero Hour is monarchly great. Monarchly. I got it now. I'll take that omnibus too. It exists. You should buy it. It's a great omnibus. I just happen to have it in DC Finest, but I love Zero Hour. Love Zero Hour. All right. Number 44, Legion, which every time I see it spelled out, I don't know what it's meant to stand for. With the periods, I start singing Queen Latifah's Unity, like you and I can't even do it. U-N-I-T-Y, that spells unity, right? Yeah. In my head, I'm like L-E-G-I-O-N. It's not easy. It's not easy being Queen Latifah, I'm sure. I mean, it would be pretty great to be Queen Latifah. She's pretty amazing. But anyway, here's the thing about this. It's not actually Legion of Superheroes. It's spun out sort of the Invasion event. And it was like, fuck those Green Lanterns. That was the in-universe reaction that characters were having, that like the Green Lanterns are not keeping the universe safe enough. So we need some would say a legion of people to keep the universe safe. And the thing I like about it, at the time I liked about it and has stuck with me, and I do have a DC guide about Legion, which is basically like, surprise, nothing's ever been collected for the most part, is that they were this deep space security force group, but because it was so deep spacey, it was like they were so separate from most other continuity that you could kind of just enjoy a Deep Space book, sort of in the way that you would with the Abnett and Lanning Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, it's just off doing its thing. It had Lobo in it at points, and also there was this like hint of that it was like a prototype of, or like a nascent version of the future Legion of Superheroes, even though in continuity we know exactly how the Legion of Superheroes came to be. There was like almost the hint of a tickle that it was connected to Legion. Now, this ran for 70 issues and 5 annuals, and then it turned into Rebels in 1994, which ran for another 17 issues and a zero hour issue. And also, we probably would put the 3 issues of Invasion in this in the same way that Legends is in the Suicide Squad omnibus. So it's got to be 2 books. I mean, it's bordering on 3, but I think that maybe DC would maybe go big on it because, like, who cares? But I care, and I just I might actually get this in omnibus rather than just saying, oh, I want it in Compendium or Finest, because you know me, I love a self-contained book, and so this is really attractive to me. Logan Wayne saying UNITY, who you calling it stands for Licensed Extra Governmental Interstellar Operatives Network, apparently. Saz Murph saying Legion was on my short list, and Lobo has something to do with that. Yeah, I love Lobo. And Logan Wayne loves that song. Clearly a backronym, which I think is when you have a word that you want to turn into an acronym, and so you force it to be an acronym. That is a backronym. I'm so lost in Legion of Superheroes juice. How? Why? I should hate it, but I love it. Confusion. Also great cover and statement. Shiny boots. Yeah, Suspicious Sledgewitch. I only really know Legion of Superheroes through Lars, the Norwegian assassin, and Jess, the Omnidog, talking about it. I've literally never fully read an issue of Legion prior to 2011, the post-Flashpoint Legion stuff. I have a guide to them. I actually had to help. I paid a consultant to come and help me with that guide because Legion is such a crazy, it's like X-Men levels of complicated, and then on top of that, time travel. Whew. So I can now spoil, now that we've gotten to this pick, there's no other Legion picks on my votes. It's just not my thing. I want it to exist. I'm happy when it's for it to exist because I know many of you love it, but that's not my thing. This is the thing that's deeply my bullshit. Number 43, Captain Adams by Carrie Bates, Volume 1 of 2, 1987 to 1989 would be Volume 1. Why? Of the 4 major Charlton Comics heroes that come across to DC, Blue Beetle, Question, Captain Atom, and Peacemaker. Captain Atom, initially out of the gate, looked like it was going to be the one that maybe was the big one because he was another Superman level figure. And in the post-crisis DC world, DC was like into this idea that Superman didn't have to be so singular, especially because John Byrne was recreating what the origin of Superman looked like. So DC was very interested in having Shazam be a Superman level character. They were very interested in Captain Atom being a Superman level character. And Captain Atom ran for 57 issues. It was an ongoing concern. Now, to be fair, Quasar ran for 60 issues. So things were just allowed to run at that time. But I just think he's a very cool hero, especially because he is the basis for Dr. Manhattan. So, like, you're basically seeing Dr. Manhattan was Alan Moore saying, well, if there was somebody with these powers, they really wouldn't be like going around going pow, boom, although you might deploy them into a war zone, like that very kind of famous scene of him in the Vietnam War, to great effect. So here's, without the Alan Moore filter, here's that hero with that level of power existing in the DC universe. And again, it's crazy to me that he's not collected. Now, over time, Blue Beetle and Question became the 2 Charlton heroes that really had the most impact in the DC universe. After the early 90s, Captain Atom kind of just gets put on a shelf. He's used to create some crossovers with WildStorm in the 2000s. He briefly comes back in New 52, then they kill him, and then he just had a really very interesting part in the post-Absolute Power part of the Justice League Unlimited story. But he's just not a major character. So basically, if there was any chance that we would see this in Omnibus or Finest or something, it might have been last year when he had his own series as part, along with the Atom, actually, as part of Justice League Unlimited. But this book has always been very cool to me. I know it's not like the highest quality book, but it was one of those books that, like, if I had an extra couple of dollars and it was like in the dollar bin or the quarter bin, I would pick one up. And I just think there's some really fun, comic booky superhero stuff in here. Yeah. So let's see if not as many favorable comments about this one as Martian Manhunter. Jamie C saying this is some good Captain Atom stuff. JLE is him at his best, but this is a solid book. Wesley Wiggins misses long runs for non-A-list characters. That's a very good point. Okay, number 42. Look, you don't have to agree with me. Just know that I'm right. DC Superhero Girls, the first iteration by Shea Fontana, is, in my opinion, the best all ages book that has ever done anything with superheroes from like the popular superheroes. I know there's been things like that were made for the graphic novel market, which were just like a superhero that's been invented from whole cloth. I'm not saying that this is better than every one of those, but we were in California for a couple of days visiting family before we flew to New Zealand in 2017. Kid Krisis was not quite reading, but she was experienced because she was like 4, but she was experienced enough with comic books that if you read a comic to her enough times, she would kind of remember what the shape of the script was, and she could kind of go through and sort of guide it for herself. So and it was about to be a long plane ride. So I went to Comics Conspiracy in just outside of San Francisco, which is a really popular award-winning comic book store, and the owner of that store is very popular on social media. I forget his name, maybe Ryan Higgins, and he has a lot of really interesting things to say about the industry. I think he also has a podcast. And I went and I said, look, I know a lot about comics. It would be really hard to sell me on something that's a normal Big 2 comic, but I need a comic for my tiny kid to keep her occupied on the plane, and she loves Lumberjanes. So what would she like? And he was like, honestly, DC Superhero Girls is like really good. And so he hand sold me the first couple of those. The thing I love about it is, and look, for the majority of you out there, you probably would not read this. I have a special place in my heart with it because I spent the last decade of my life with it. The thing I like about it is the characters are recognizably them. Shea Fontana is a huge DC fan. She's not some like random person they brought in. I think she was a DC editor at one point. She knows their stories. There's so many fun references to all these characters, to Katana, to Harley, to Wonder Woman, but also the rest of the staff of the school. Basically, everybody's a good guy or becomes a good guy in the end. But like Amanda Waller is the principal, and like like Gorilla Grodd is the vice principal. But the amount of like hilarious in continuity nods to DC continuity that happen within this, I mean, at one point Katana and Lady Shiva are fighting, and like the nods to Lady Shiva, there's just so much fun in it, and it's super wholesome. Like, it's never just about punching. I really had a thing with Kid Krisis, and I don't know if any of you are parents and would relate to this, where I never wanted to just give her a story that was punching. It was not that I was trying to hide the fact that superheroes punch to her, but I think if you always give kids media where the adventure in the media has to be violent, then when they model their own play and their own idea of adventure, everything they model is violent. Because when you're a 4 to 9-year-old, most 4 to 9-year-olds don't have such an amazing fantasy life that they are making things out of whole cloth. They're remixing elements that you've given them. So if every adventure thing you've given to them involves people punching each other in the face to solve their problems, to that 4 to 9-year-old, they think that's what adventure is, that's what action is. And then to a degree, they project that onto their real life because that's what it means to be young and impressionable. You think to solve problems, people punch each other. The thing I love about this is that very, very rarely are the DC Superhero Girls actually physically punching each other. Like, it's a lot of problem solving. It's a lot of figuring out how to work together on things. It's a lot of trying to decide like how to deal with people who are different from you or maybe have different motives or ethics than you. And I just think it's adorable. So yeah, I literally could talk about this for hours. I've seen all of the videos. I've read all of the books. It's absolutely adorable. Then they changed it and they made it very like Cartoon Networky after 2018. And like I watched the first episode. I'm like, oh, well, maybe this will be cool. And the first thing they do is they show Supergirl like punching somebody and being really angry. I'm like, well, that's not what I signed up for with this. So I don't like that new version of DC Superhero Girls. This is, I mean, the cartoon, it's not good in like it's not as funny as like Teen Titans Go. It's very gentle superheroes, but it's not as like, if you've watched the Spider-Man 3D animated show on Disney Plus, where it's like, that's a show for babies. And it can be very funny sometimes, and my kid still likes it. But I mean, it's like very baby safe Spider-Man. This is like one level above this. This is a high school book for 7-year-olds who want to think high school is cool. That's the vibe. So I don't think, for a lot of you who don't really like all ages media or kids media, I don't think that you're like, I don't think this is a top recommendation for you. However, if you have kids and they are kids under age 10 and they love superhero stuff, this is peak. and there's so much of it to buy because it was all just individual graphic novels, and they kept them in print for a long time, so they're not super hard to get a hold of. DJ all day saying, I can't wait to impose this on my daughters to get them into comics. Calder 11 said, I did watch some episodes they released on YouTube. It was cute and very Easter egg fun. Wasn't there also a cartoon with the same title, Amazing for the Kiddos, Precious Stuff? Yeah, and the cartoon never was directly the same as these stories. Like, they were all... There's one where they have like an intergalactic games that's like very like Hunger Gamesy, but like not nobody dies, and it's versus like people from Apocalypse, and like Big Barda comes with that. It's very funny, very very funny. Lance Library saying, my comment on punching reminds me of John Semper not wanting to show Spider-Man punching in the 90s animated series. People say it was censorship, but it was about the message he was sending to kids. Absolutely. Squirrel Girl, I love Squirrel Girl for the same reason. I think Squirrel Girl trends a little bit older. Kid Krisis found Squirrel Girl a little boring at first. Now she likes it that she's like over 10. I think it's a little cerebral for like a 7 or 8 year old, but Kevin Barry read it with his daughter and thought it was the best. DC Superhero Girls isn't quite that, but it is fun. Okay. Well, now you know my deep love for DC Superhero Girls. Number 41 is a WildStorm book. It is Mr. Majestic. So talking about Superman analogs, Mr. Majestic was the WildStorm Superman analog. He was one of the original Caribbean lords who came with these kind of this other race of aliens who crash landed on Earth and integrated into society to eventually create what we know as Wildcats, although not many of them were actually Carbon, but that was the idea. And so he's not in Wildcats at the beginning. Then when they get into a lot of distress at one point, I think when Chris Claremont was writing it actually for a couple of issues, they kind of put out the call for him, and we see that he's just living in isolation in his, it's almost like a fortress where one could have solitude, and he comes and saves the day. And so at various points he leads the Wildcats, he's on the Wildcats, but he's like the big heavy, he's the guy from Krypton, he's the big one. And so, but also it's interesting because they play him as being very idealistic in the current day, but then the more and more they explore his past, you see he's done some horrible things, which is kind of why he is so idealistic in the current day. And he is, again, there weren't a lot of solo WildStorm characters. It's really interesting. There's really just a handful. He is one that after appearing in the 90s, he kind of spun off and became a solo character in a way that he wasn't in the 90s, because he had a series in 1999. Then he actually crosses over briefly with the DC universe. There's a crossover in the Superman books where he gets pulled into the DC universe. And then he's got even more material, another 4-issue miniseries and then a 17-issue series. So he's, and the thing is, it's written almost entirely by Joe Casey, and a lot of it, as this cover does, has, or maybe not this cover, no, this cover does, has early Ed McGuinness art. And I know not a particular favorite of mine, but I think that's because to me, Ed McGuinness is this, like he's Mr. Majestic. I want to see a big rubbery Superman with big cartoon sized fists, right? So I like Ed McGuinness and Superman, but then when they have him on something like Avengers, I'm like, well, no, like maybe Thor, but I want to see Ed McGuinness drawn big beefy boys, you know, like I want them to have fists the size of hams. That's what I'm looking for Ed McGuinness. So I think this would really be really fun to get onto one book, because I think this, unlike a lot of other WildStorm books, which are so niche that you kind of had to be there and it's like hard to market it to you, I think anytime anybody is a Superman analog, it's really easy to be like, this is a Superman analog. Like that's just an easy thing to market. That's the reason they use Homelander to market the boys for the TV show, even though he was not as front and center in marketing the comic books, because it's just something that reads easily to audiences. Warren Weaver saying, Mr. Majestic, woo! So much of this list I've never heard of. I'm both confused and fascinated, says Wesley Wiggins. Yeah, with me and DC, you know it's not going to be a lot of Batman and Superman, because I have some niche DC picks. Miguel Lupi saying Supreme is better than Mr. Majestic. Look, I am deep on my Supreme bullshit. If I did a list of the top, maybe I should do, content alert, if I did a list of my top 60 books I want to see completely collected of all indies, not just Image, but like across all indies, what would I love to see kind of omnibuses or compendiums of? Getting all of Supreme in two, we need 2 books. It's got to be top 10 for me. And again, I own everything. I tracked it down painstakingly. But yeah, Mr. Majestic was very much a Supreme, but you have to remember, Supreme was Extreme Studios, which was Rob Liefeld. So every one of the studios at Image were kind of trying to make their own brand of heroes. So sometimes you would see a version of that kind of archetype of hero in each of the studios. And I think that is kind of what happened a little bit here with Mr. Majestic kind of being very Supreme-ish, Supreme-esque. Logan Wayne saying, I've never heard of this character, but I haven't heard of a lot of the characters I've mentioned. Mad Coco G saying the Casey McGinnis run was so good, and then they yanked him to be Superman. Cliff Comics loves Majestics losing his kid. Oh, spoilers, but yeah. And Suspicious Sludger saying, sold me with the big beefy boys remark. Okay, possibly also Cliff. So, he was even in the Wildcats cartoon, says Mad Coco G. Love that Wildcats compendium. Really, just absolutely love it, Nick. Okay, Supreme cheats by having Alan Moore write him for a bit. Yeah, but Supreme was really interesting even before Alan Moore got there. Number 40, Hawkman by Ostrander, Messner-Loebs et al. So here's the thing about this run that makes me both excited to get it in Omnibus and also like hesitant to get it in Omnibus. Hawkman has always been a weird character for DC. He is kind of emerging for me as my fourth thing I would buy from DC. Like, I've got my Wonder Woman, my Sandman, my WildStorm. I think number 4 is Hawkman. There's just something about him. There's something about how he's like always different, but always the same, but he's from a bird planet, but he's also human. Like, there's something about it that just is really compelling to me. And I just love that he's dressed like He-Man, and he's got a giant mace, and like, how can you take him seriously? Like, there's just something inherently comedic, but then he is such a serious and dramatic character that something about it is really, really attractive to me. But Jamie C kind of like hits the nail on the head here. Does it hold up with the Hawkworld stuff before it? Because Hawkman was such a strange character in continuity post-Crisis. Immediately after post-Crisis, they have this thing called Hawkworld, mostly written by Ostrander, where they kind of like just deal with him on Thanagar, right? The actual planet. And that is like a really cool, fun sci-fi take on Hawkman. What it's not is Hawkman as a superhero on Earth. So then he comes back, and Ostrander does write the beginning of this, and it kind of like ties it to the Hawkworld stuff. He does come back to Earth here, and then he kind of goes on to be superheroing. I kind of want that. I know Jeff Johns has the Omnibus in the 2000s, which I guess eventually I might buy if I'm going to do Hawkman. I don't know. I'd rather just have it all in paperback. But to me, I want to see how and I know he was in the League in this era. I want to see how he kind of reintegrates into superhero life. So this is one where I don't know the material at all. I know I trust Ostrander to set it up, and he writes for 6 issues. And I know I'm obsessed with William Messner-Loebs. And so if it has their 2 names on it, I am going to like it. Oh, I don't know enough about Hawkman canon to explain it. I want to do a guide for him, but I need to sit down and read a lot of Hawkman. And the hard thing is, there's like no collected Hawkman. I mean, like this is it pretty much. This and the John stuff from the 2000s and the modern stuff. There's just not any. He had a showcase. He had some showcase volumes at one point, which it would be very hard for me to get in New Zealand. But yeah, I think some of it's on DC Unlimited, but some of it is not. So I will say there's this channel that I have become obsessed with. It is called Higgy Pop Comics. I'll put it in the comments here. It's becoming my favorite YouTube channel. It's this guy, and he is just in his basement, and he is talking about comics. He gets a lot of singles from Silver Age all the way to today. Oh, I hope I didn't just get his name wrong. But I'll put it on screen as soon as I can find it. I can't believe I got it wrong. Hold on, I'm going to find it in my YouTube history. But here's the thing. He doesn't just read comics. He calls his basement the Hawk's Roost or the Hawk's Nest. And he sometimes will just be dressed up as Hawkman while he's down there. And then he does like bits and skits. Like sometimes he'll walk off camera, and then the walking back on camera will be like Conan the Barbarian. Yeah, it's Higgy Pop Comics. I got it right. I just find him so funny. But that's the thing. The channel's called Higgy Pop 53. I'm going to put it in the comments here. So, I just find him so entertaining, and he just did this great Mother's Day show where he had all of these singles. He got a bunch of old Aquaman and a bunch of old, Steranko Shield. So he's showing off the singles, and then he had comments on a bunch of new stuff. He was showing some Image comics. Then he had this huge sketch pad. He was sketching all of these comic characters, and his drawings are great. And he's also there's this like Dadaist humor, you never know what he's going to say aspect to it. And so the reason I mentioned him is because he's a huge Hawkman fan, and he does so many Hawkman things. I'll have to post, he has this video that I think is the funniest video I've ever seen on comic book YouTube that just takes me out, where it's just him as Hawkman. Here it is. It's called Hawkman 1 at Nature or 2 One at Nature or two. Hold on, let me see if I could share my screen. This is how much that I love this guy, that you're going to see me totally interrupt a show in order to try to show this to you. Is it going to also share audio? Yes. Okay, share. Okay, I think no. Oh, I add to stage. Hold on. We're going to just break everything just so I could do this. Look at this, man, okay?
And here. Ah, yes, let's head outside. Ah, fresh air. I could commune with my feathered friends. Hey, oh, up there. There they are. Ah! Yes, up here with my winged brothers. Ah, you are majestic, my brother. You are my winged feathered family. Oh, handsome. Oh, he's off.
I just have an unhealthy obsession with it. I don't know what to tell you. So anyway, that's my story about that. Oh my gosh, I broke everything. Okay, here we go. I don't. So anyway, go check out his channel, I think was the upshot of that. And now everything's broken. So anyway, I love Hawkman, and I don't understand that much about Hawkman, and I will need to learn more about Hawkman before I can explain it to you. Please, everybody go subscribe to his channel. He genuinely, sometimes I have to take it in pieces because 4 hours of me is a lot. An hour of him is like a lot to absorb, but he's just such a genuine, funny guy, and he has great tastes in comic books. Okay. When am I dressing up like that? Sly Blue Demon, we have the masks. We have the technology. So we can make that happen. Okay, let's continue from there. Hawkman. Number 39, Sandman Wesley Dodds, The Golden Age Omnibus. Why? In a world where Sandman Mystery Theater didn't struggle across the finish line of finally being collected in full, I think DC would have hopped right onto this. Like if Sandman Mystery Theater sold like hotcakes, they would have been like, yeah, man, let's do some Golden Age adventure comics. The thing is, this could fit all in one omnibus. We could just knock it out. It's one time, DC, one book, because his stories in adventure comics, at least as far as I checked them, which was granted only 30 or 40 issues into these 60 issues, were only 10 pages each. So even if they continued on and became 15 pages each, which would be a lot for a Golden Age story, we'd still be only looking at a 900-page book, and DC will do books up to usually about mid 800 pages, and I already can tell you the first 20 or 30 issues are only 10 pages each. The thing about this was, in the Golden Age, superhero didn't necessarily mean like bam pow. I mean, that very much is a product of like the Batman TV show, and it didn't necessarily mean super powers. Although Green Lantern had powers, Flash had powers, but Sandman just was this detective dude in a mask with sand, like, you know. And I mean, it was the thing I'm trying to say is, much like Batman is really just a detective in a bat costume, he has even the gadgets of it all start happening later in the Golden Age and into the Silver Age. This is just Batman. I mean, it's basically just like a low, super mysterious detective book. And I enjoy it on its own merits, even without it being collected in, and connected to Sandman. Superdrop saying, yes, more of these Golden Age anthology titles have to be reprinted. Never read Golden Age comics, says Sly Blue Demon. Are they usually 10 pages? Well, no, the comics themselves, actually, Sly Blue Demon, would be super, super lengthy. Sometimes they would be like 64 or 72 issues. They'd be like a magazine length. But a lot of this, the idea of like a 20-page comic story was not as common. And you can see that if you look at how many stories are collected in some of the DC Golden Age comic books, because usually a DC Golden Age comic book had like the A story might be Superman or Batman, but then there were all these other characters that had B stories. So the A story might be 12 to 16 pages, and then there was like a 8-page story, and then a 10-page story, and then a 6-page story. And this even continued into the Silver Age, where a lot of these characters who were mostly appearing as backups in other books, their stories were like 6 and 7 pages each, which is why we can sometimes see a book like with Aquaman that has like an issue collection range of like 70 issues. You're like, 70? That must be a big omnibus. But no, it's because the stories are like 6 to 10 pages each. I would love Sandman. When did he start getting the prophetic dreams? I'm not sure, because DC needs to collect this so I can read it. Okay, number 38. Whoa, more Hawkman. Hawkman, the Silver Age Omnibus, Volume 1. And I previously probably would have had this in my top 20, but oh, that's the wrong book. No, that's it. This starts to collect this. So this would begin to collect Hawkman stories from the Brave and the Bold 34 through 36. That is where this book starts. So this is basically the first half of what would be that omnibus. And I just love the inherent ridiculousness of him. And especially as you get deeper into his stuff that's in mystery and space, which this has the beginning of. So maybe I can find one of the covers. The covers get so absurd so fast, and it just makes me love him more. I hopefully there can be one in here to show you. He like fights, he has this like giant like Muppety character that's his friend, and they kind of like adventure around together. No, I don't think it's in here. I think it'll be in the next one. Yeah, but anyway, I've become Hawkman pilled by Higgy Pop Comics in the same way that I've become Adam pilled by my friend Donovan, and I really want this. And also, again, like, now is the time, DC. Like, omnibuses are big. People are into these collections. DC Finest is creating excitement for these characters and their runs. Now is the time to finally do some of these books from the Silver Age that are seen as smaller books as omnibuses and get them out there. And Hawkman, for me, is one of the higher ones. I know we also need a Silver Age Aquaman. We need Silver Age the Atom. There's a lot of Silver Age books that we could get. But I would actually buy this. Like, I would buy this in omnibus tomorrow and put it directly onto my shelf. Okay. Nick N didn't vote for the omnibus because of DC Finest. Yeah, it would have been much, much higher for me if it hadn't already come out in DC Finest. Number 37, we are the crystal gems. We always save the day. And if you think we can't, we'll always find a way. Anyway, another huge one for me with Kid Krisis. And unlike DC Superhero Girls, where I think you need a kid in the room to watch it with you, Steven Universe as a cartoon is absolutely freaking hilarious no matter what age you are. I love it so much. It has become a foundational text to me in my queerness. It's like the queerest possible cartoon that's perfect for 5-year-olds. And because it's not addressing characters being queer in a romantic way, it's just addressing what it means to be queer and different from the surroundings around you. And the great thing about Steven Universe, much like The Simpsons, the character models are so distinct. Like, if you look at Bart and Lisa and Marge, it's like, it's so easy to produce a comic book with them on model because they're so iconic. Steven Universe is like that. I mean, the four of them, the four main, Steven, Garnet, Pearl, and Amethyst, all look like they are from like 4 different cartoons in a way because they're all like different shapes and proportions, but they're also unified in certain elements of their design. And I found, and we own all of these comic books, and I've read all of these comic books, and they're a perfect extension of the show. I mean, the show has a truly absurd amount of episodes because the episodes were little quick, like 12 and 15-minute episodes. So actually within 5 seasons, I think it has, of the original show, there's just so many adventures, and some of it's kind of myth arc plot, but some of it is like just funsies plot. These issues don't try to turn into a big myth arc thing. They're just inserting more funsies stories. I just love it. I think because the art is so iconic and bold, blowing it up to oversize actually will just make it look even better. But it was all really, really charming. I really, really love it. Now, here's the thing. Boom, this was printed by Boom at the time. It was on the Kaboom imprint, which is this one of the side kind of littler kids imprints to the side of Boombox, which is what did Lumberjanes. But it's a WB property technically because I think it's like co-owned by Cartoon Network, which is why James Abel... Wait, it's streaming on Disney Plus? I don't think it's on Disney Plus here. Oh, I'm going to need to look into that pronto. Okay. So yeah, it is, to the best of our ability to determine, it is a WB property that DC could reprint. Now, here's the thing. Boom did do a compendium style book of it, but it collected all the stuff from prior to the main series from 2017 that was really long running, and then it only had 8 issues of that series. So I guess maybe they thought they would do another one, which tells me it was maybe kind of a soft seller, or they lost the license. I think you could actually do all of it in one omnibus. There's an 8-issue original series for Kaboom, then there's a couple of specials, then there's a 4-issue miniseries, and then there's the 36-issue main series. So we're looking at a 50-issue omnibus. I want it. And I think there's a lot of older people with disposable income who love Steven Universe. But again, maybe it's just not a big seller right now because it's not on the market right now. But then also there was a whole series of original graphic novels for this, which I have not read because they were harder to get in New Zealand and I just never could track them all down. And so you could not fit them all in a book with this other stuff. So if you wanted to thread them in, which you certainly could, we'd need 2 volumes to break everything apart, or you could do 1 volume with the whole ongoing series, and then you could do 1 volume that has the rest of it. Logan Wayne started watching Steven Universe but never got around to finishing it for some reason, wouldn't mind getting back to it. Suspicious Sludgevich saying, injected into my brain mousse, so beautiful I melt a happy slobby sludge. Yes, I just love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Estelle was the voice of Garnet, and the songs are banging. If you've never heard the soundtrack, Rebecca Sugar, who's the writer of the show, was such a great songwriter, and they had all these amazing singers. I forget the name of Pearl's singer, but she's also like a former Broadway singer, and the music is just absolutely incredible. Okay. Number 36, it's more Golden Age. It's the Flash Jay Garrick, the Golden Age Omnibus Volume 1. Why? Jay Garrick's Golden Age material is as under-collected as Alan Scott, the Green Lantern, even though, because they're kind of big DC characters, but unlike Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, they were different characters. Jay Garrick was the Flash, and Alan Scott was Green Lantern. Now, unlike Alan Scott, who is a great character, who I really, really like, but is not like key to DC's history, even his lantern is kind of like a little bit different than the main Green Lantern. Jay Garrick is hugely important to DC's history. He was the character that kicked off the idea of multiple Earths. His crossover with Barry Allen Flash was like the beginning of the idea of the DC multiverse. So I just think that, like, how do we not have him? And he's known to modern readers. He and Alan Scott, but for a long time, much more than Alan Scott, Jay Garrick has been very participatory in the modern DC universe. So he's like known, he's important. I just don't, I get it. Like they're, you know, in a world where DC has figured out how to sell Golden Age whole lines of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman and reprint them, I have to think that they could get the print numbers right for a Flash comic book to collect it. Now, the thing is, there's a lot of Flash, and I did not look too deeply into how long these issues and stories are, but he's in 104 issues of Flash comics and then also 32 issues of All Flash. So we're looking, this is a line of omnibuses, and maybe DC's hesitance there is like, oh, I don't know if we could ever get through all of it. And I completely appreciate that. But for me, I would be excited to have this in any format they could give it to me. I would be excited in Finest. I would buy it in Compendium. I would certainly buy it in Omnibus because I just have an interest in the history of comic books and seeing them all restored while we still can. Flash was my favorite Golden Age JSA, but then he left the book because his own title was popular. DC knows Flash sells. Why have they not done it? Well, I think the thing is Barry and Wally sell, and we've seen them be very good sellers in Omnibus. And generally Golden Age sales when they did them in trades were relatively weak. He only ever had 2 books of his archives line. So I think DC maybe is operating from that mindset of like, well, we don't have evidence that it would sell. So it's scary for us to put out. Edwin Billy would buy all the Golden Age heroes. I would as well. For me, the Batman and Superman lines are just like too long for me to sign up for. Like I just don't have the shelf space and I don't think I'd read them a lot. But I think for all of these heroes that we could kind of do smaller lines of, or that are not like the big Batman, Superman, getting them, because a lot of this isn't even on DC Unlimited. So getting in an omnibus or anything would allow it to be on DC Unlimited, but then, or whatever it is, Infinite Universe. But B, also, I find it more attractive to have kind of these briefer series rather than like however many, 12 Batman Golden Age. Okay, Kenneth Crilly saying, great to see some love for Jay Garrick Flash. Also played so well by John Wesley Shipp in the CW Flash TV series. We need some more Golden Age Flash books out. Adrian Montana's new the movie trailer voice is going, and Dana Andre would be down for some Golden Age Flash. Hello, Dana. DC Unlimited Infinite Frontier Universe. Number 35, Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, Emerald Dawn, Volume 1. Why? The rise and fall of Hal Jordan in the post-crisis world, and I do know some of this material, is epic. It's like one of the biggest superhero stories of the 90s. The idea that this iconic hero from the Silver Age has some great adventures and then kind of goes mad with power and has to be defeated by his friends. Marvel doesn't have a story like that in the 90s. Like, no, they never executed that. I hold the Green Lantern rise and fall almost equally to Death and Return of Superman as like the most iconic thing you could do with that character. Marvel just didn't do things that iconic. I mean, they had the Clone Saga, they had Capwolf. It's just, we're talking about different levels here. Now, I know you cannot have a conversation about this run, which, by the way, the beginning is written by Christopher Priest as Jim Owsley, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But everybody always brings this topic up that because Gerard Jones wrote a lot of this material as it gets into the ongoing Green Lantern, we don't see DC reprinting it. DC is really adamant about having nothing by Jones out there. A lot of stuff won't even be on DC Unlimited with Jones. But here's the thing I'll come back to again and again. He was one person on a creative team that included many people, that were building the fabric of a universe that was built by many people. I don't think you can take the actions of one person and say, and I never want to see that book available. I don't think you can memory hole that, especially in a shared universe where the events of these comic books are so referenced. They're so much a part of, we're not talking about something out to the side of DC history here. We're talking about the center ring. This was pretty much the most important thing that's happening other than Death of Superman. It leads into, in a way, parts of Death of Superman, and then it creates Zero Hour. Like, it to me, it's crazy to try to memory hole that because there's one person on that creative team that committed a crime and went to jail and served time for it. Like, I don't know. This always comes up because there's always the Neil Gaimans, there's always the Gerard Jones, there's always the Warren Ellises, there's always whoever has, rightfully, we need to talk about the things that they've done wrong and that we cannot accept this in this industry that is meant to be inclusive and for everyone and a safe space for people to love heroes. But at the same time, I think in order for it to remain a safe space to love heroes, we got to still take the messages, good and bad, from the heroes books made by the bad people in the same way we can still appreciate music made by bad people. And that's a story you've heard me tell again and again. And honestly, I think at some point DC will do this. There will be a point where the Gerard Jones stuff is far enough in the rear view, or maybe they do it in a way that it doesn't need to have his name on the spine, which I think they don't need for this because they can just call it Emerald Dawn. But I think it could I think it's going to happen in Finest first. That's my wager. That's my bet. And I think they're going to feel out how upset people are about it being in Finest. And then we're going to see what happens after that. But that's what I think is going to happen. Okay? That's what I think is going to happen. Adrian saying, I need the story. I need it. Banned books should be read. So there's a lot of material because there's Emerald Dawn, the original Emerald Dawn. Then there's another Emerald Dawn. Then there's 55 issues of his actual comic book, and there's annuals. Then he has parts of crossovers. He has like one-to-one crossovers with The Flash. He has a Trinity crossover with Legion and Dark Stars. I mean, there's a lot of material. We need at least 2 books. I think you could do it in 2. I think in terms of total issues, we're hovering right around the 80 mark. And I think for 90s material, DC is willing to do a 40-issue book. And I think it could happen. James Rhodes saying what a lot of people are saying is that they don't think DC will collect this book until after Gerard Jones is no longer with us. And that just might be what happens. But I want it. And I want to be able to sit down and read it, not through like bootleg scans or tracking down the original issues. Like, I want the other creators on the books to make the money that I pay for the royalties, the colorist, the whoever, and I want them to benefit from that. I don't want to steal it or pirate it, and I don't want it just in back issues. But that's me. Okay. Number 34, and this is kind of a weird pick for me because I don't buy this omnibus line, but if they announced this book, then I would go back and buy 1 through 3. So this is Justice League International Volume 4. Why is it so important for me that they put out Volume 4 and not the first 3? It's so hard to explain the Justice League's publishing history directly post-Crisis because the title changes titles multiple times and then gets additional titles that has the same title as some of the things it changed from having the title of, which is like mind-bendy. But the point being that it started as Justice League and then it becomes Justice League Europe and then it's Justice League International, and then at a point all 3 of those things are happening at the same time. So we actually collected just a massive amount of that in those 3 existing Justice League International omnibuses. At this point, it's so splintered. So those books were collecting it when it was Justice League America and Justice League International. This would continue collecting Justice League America. It would continue collecting Justice League Europe, which then turns into Justice League International. And then there's also Justice League International Quarterly. For me, collecting it all together is a lot like collecting the X-Men line all together. Like, now that we've already established 3 line-wide books, I really don't want to see them be like, oh, actually, we're going to start collecting them separately, because they still do thread together and they cross over with each other. And I think if we say that we're going to collect them separately, we're going to get into the situation where we have the Extinction Agenda in like multiple books. I just don't think that there's any point to that. So if DC would actually commit to continuing to collect this from 1992 on and say, we're going to just keep doing it line-wide, everything Justice League, at least until 1995, I would be so into that, and to me, that would be a reason to put it on my shelf. Now, once we get to 1993, there's Justice League Task Force. We could expand and include that in the line too. Then as we get later in the line, there's also like Extreme Justice and things like that. Would that all be included? I don't know. That's out of my pay grade because we can't. They're too ambiguous. They're too far ahead to map ahead. All I know is that this would be the next one, and I really think this ought to be the next one. So I really would like to see this. And Miguel says that voted for it for completion purposes because he already has the other 3. Stego King loves Justice League. And also Samantha, back from her run, says, I just read Emerald Dawn a few nights ago, and that was a 5 out of 5 comic to me. I've always struggled getting into Green Lantern, but that was awesome. And I think that's the other thing that really bugs me about the fact that we can't collect this because of the Gerard Jones of it all, is that A, he didn't even write Emerald Dawn, and B, it's just a really good starting point. Now, of course, we wound up having Jeff Johns give us a really good starting point in 2004 with Green Lantern Rebirth, but I mean, it's good comic books. That's the thing that really gets me and makes me wish that we could get it. Ryan Williams is here. Hello. Wesley Wiggins wants them to continue the JLI Thicky trays, that they only 2 of them and then stop. Just that was annoying. I think they will just turn into DC Finest, honestly. Number 33. You thought I was done with Shazam? Shazam! No, I'm not. This is the power of Shazam. Shazam. There's the power of Shazam. That's that character that I get into once my tongue stops working. Volume 1. Why? So, a lot of this, if memory serves, has not been comprehensively collected. They collected his 70s series in a complete way, but I think they started collecting this and then they gave up, I want to say. So there was book 1 collects issues 1 through 12. Book 2 has 13 to 23. And that was in 2023, and here we are in 2026, and we don't have anything that has the remaining issues. This series continued through issue 47. It continued so far that it was enough that it got to have a 1 million issue with the 1 million event in 1998. But here's the thing. We know it's me, and we know that I have strong opinions about these things, and my strong opinion about this one is it shouldn't just start with the Power of Shazam series that begins in 1995. Much like Martian Manhunter, Shazam has some immediate post-crisis stuff. And the interesting thing about that is it took DC a few tries to decide exactly what they wanted Shazam to be post-crisis. So he kind of goes through a few iterations of his origin and his role. I mean, he's in Justice League. You can read him if you have those Justice League International 3 books. But also, he kind of debuts in the DC Universe in Legends, and so that's interesting. Then he has a 4-issue miniseries, Shazam. I'm doing this. I'm getting it. Shazam, a series called Shazam, The New Beginnings, and 1 through 4. I think that's also just a hair away from Shazam. Oh, Shazam. And then we have The Power of Shazam, not the ongoing series, but an original graphic novel. Then he's in a brief run of Action Comics Weekly. And then finally, kind of one of the outcomes of War of the Gods is a Shazam related thing. And then finally we get to these series. So again, much like Martian Manhunter, we're talking about 1, 5, let's count the OGN as like 3 issues because it's going to be longer. We're talking about, again, like 7 issues that would need to come before the series that they did not collect that way in the trade line. So to me, from what? I just see an attractiveness not only in getting the series all in one place, but also collecting that little stuff that came before. And I think you might ultimately maybe need 2 omnibuses for this. I don't know. It's a 47 issue series with an annual and a 1 million issue. So that's already a pretty big omnibus, but I'm not asking to add much. So maybe it could be done. It would be about as big as a Green Arrow book. But I have read some of this, Shazam, and it's really, really good. Ryan disagreeing with me, which is his raison d'etre, saying, have I read this? I never did, but I was always interested. Oh, I thought he was saying he did and he didn't like it. That's usually what Ryan would say to me. But I always was interested and I enjoyed the crossover issues. I've read a number of these issues and every one that I read was like amazing. I was like, oh, much like Sam was just saying, reading Emerald Dawn was like, oh, so this is why Green Lantern is good. I get it now. For me, that was reading Shazam. Reading Shazam, Power of Shazam was like, oh, so this is Shazam, but interesting. I understand. So let me look up who that, I want to say it's Jerry Ordway writing it, but let's be sure. Let's be certain. Let's see. So number 1, yeah, Jerry Ordway. And I love me some Jerry Ordway, one of my favorite creators that you could get. So to me, saying Jerry Ordway's name on it I should have put his name in the title of the book. Yeah, he's writing still as of the Final Night crossover issue at issue 20. Let's see who's writing it as of late. He's still writing it as issue 43. This whole run is Jerry Ordway. Woo! Yes, so we need it in Omnibus. Now that I don't know why that didn't occur to me to look at that, but now that I've confirmed who writes it and then it's Jerry Ordway all the way through, now I think I would put it even higher. Look for this to be in my top 20 next year. Papa John Comics watched at 2 times speed. Is it hot like Papa John? Watched at 2 times speed to catch up. Quite the experience. Love the Golden Age picks. Would definitely get the Power of Shazam. Ordway's a genius, says Joe Cool. Richard B saying Shazam is the best movie of the Snyder era DC. I've actually never seen it. Should I watch it? Is it good? Also, the whole family's reintroduced. At least the major members of the fam, yes. Your Paul's Fawcett era is a high vote in the finest poll. Ryan Williams saying it was a unique series because the main character was like a kid radio, and I don't know where you were. Oh, kid radio DJ. On the whole, the run of Ordway might get a top 10 vote for me. Yeah, had I realized it was Ordway, this would have been higher. It's my fault for not realizing. Okay, number 32. This is a new one on the poll this year because we had it configured in a different way last year, and we realized that this could be done and it would be better. It's called DC's Charlton Heroes, Blue Beetle, Captain Atom, Peacemaker, and The Question. Now, for Peacemaker, we got all of this material in the Peacemaker DC Finest. And I wondered, did they leave the Charlton logos on the covers or did they not do any covers? They didn't do covers because he was like a backup story. Although, no, he eventually gets his own. Yeah, it does have the Charlton logo still on it. Sorry, it's hard to think where the camera's going to go in this tiny little window. But anyway, so we got all of that in Finest, which shows that DC does have an appetite, if motivated by a multimedia property, to get that Charlton stuff in print. So now we know. Now Blue Beetle is the one with the most content. And then once I started researching that, I realized that actually Captain Atom often was a backup in Blue Beetle books, as was The Question. So The Question actually he's entirely in Blue Beetle. Like he's either starring in Blue Beetle stories or he's backups in Blue Beetle. So we don't even need to add any other issues to this list except for one other story. So that's easy. Peacemaker, we already know exactly what he is, and it's really just a tiny handful of things. And then Captain Atom. So really it's mostly a Blue Beetle and Captain Atom book, but then it's got a little bit of Question and Peacemaker. To me, that's so interesting. The ability to get all of the stuff, some of which I want to say is Kirby, right? All from Charlton, all in one place. I think that there's enough historical interest in that, especially because honestly, if we're being really like cynical, we could call this Before Watchmen, the Charlton Heroes, and people would buy it because it would have the Watchmen name on it. So I just think there's so many reasons that this could work, and because we've seen that Peacemaker DC Finest, we now know that DC like has an appetite to do it. And again, I just crave archival quality stuff of Golden and Silver Age comics, and I just think this Charlton period is so interesting, and the fact that DC has shown they're willing to collect it, I would love to see it. I know there's other Charlton stuff. Oh, Ditko is it, not Kirby. Ditko, sorry about that. And James Rose is saying, what about Son of Vulcan? Look, there's other Charlton books you could include, but I just think obviously the Watchmen analog characters are the ones that are going to be the ones that get, that have interest. Velnet saying Charlton always seemed to have paper worse than newsprint, but I would buy it in an omnibus. James Road, let's just workshop this for a second. Road to Watchmen. Your Paul saying Watchmen Origins. All possibilities. Okay, I'm doing one more and then I'm taking a sip of water. This is Black Lightning, the complete collection. It's entirely written by Jenny Blake Isabella, just about, who you probably know as Tony Isabella, which she has said she does not consider to be a dead name, so it's fine for us to use it, and for DC to use it, in fact. But here's the thing. First of all, I just think Jenny Blake Isabella is just one of those writers that is generationally amazing. To me, probably on that same level of DC as Ostrander, where like you just can't go wrong. Truly. But then also, I just really like the changes of Black Lightning. Like, he absolutely was one of these blaxploitation, Luke Cagey kind of characters in the 70s where like every black character had like this, he was in a rough urban neighborhood, like, fighting crime. Like every one of them had the same origins except for Black Panther. Like every character was the same. But because Isabella is so good, as Black Lightning came back multiple times over the years, he changed as a character, and Isabella found more and more shades to write about him. And this is an example of basically one creator stewarding this character forever, even when he comes back in the 2000s, even in, I believe, that 2017 series, Cold Dead Hands, I think is still Isabella writing. So I love this because this is one of those rare chances where we could just get all of a character by a single writer across decades, literal decades, all into one book. Maybe it's a DC Finest line, maybe it's a compendium, but you know what? I think now's the time to start putting some love on that Jenny Blake Isabella name and start doing some Isabella omnibuses. Now's the time. I think DC would find that they sell just as big as Ostrander stuff. I truly believe that. I truly believe that. Would I put Final Crisis Submit? I don't... Did she write that? If it's Black Lightning and some... I'm trying to remember. I read Final Crisis 5 years ago now was the last time I wrote it? I don't know. I cannot answer that off the top of my head. Okay. Miguel just bought the TPP of the 70 series. His daughters, Thunder and Lightning, brought more life to him. And Logan Wayne liked the CW show. Edwin Billiot says Black Lightning needs some love. She did not write the Final Crisis Myth, but it focused on him. Then I think we should have it. One character's omnibus I didn't put on here, but I'm obsessed with them, is Mr. Terrific. I am obsessed with Mr. Terrific. He might be my favorite DC hero after Wonder Woman and apparently Hawkman. But Mr. Terrific, so much of what his development is in JSA. He just doesn't have that much solo material other than his 11 issue New 52 series. So I just couldn't get excited about putting that in my top 60, but I would buy it. We're halfway through at the 2 hour mark, which is always a good sign. I think we're going faster now, though. The beginning, there's the chat and there's the introduction of the con. I want an omnibus so bad. But what omnibus? This omnibus? I don't know. Oh, Mr. Terrific. Yeah, you and me both. Obsessed. I'm ready for a 100-issue Mr. Terrific ongoing. I love him every single time he shows up. All right, now we're getting into the top 30. Still far away from my votes, which are only the top 10. Number 30 is Union. I bet you have no idea who this character is. He's from WildStorm. Union was a character created by Michael Heisler, and he's perhaps the most obscure of all the WildStorm heroes because he wasn't... he was participated in by the whole Jim Lee of it all, but he kind of was his own separate hero. He didn't tie in super tightly to the core of WildStorm. And honestly, I think Michael Heisler had the unfortunate situation where Union was really similar to Supreme, and Supreme was just a hit. And so it was hard because even visually he looked a lot of like Supreme. But again, this is another Superman type character. He's from another time and place. He's on Earth. He doesn't know why he's on Earth. He's got the cape. He's got the super strength. I read a lot of this when I was doing my WildStorm coverage back in 2016 on Crushing Crisis 10 years ago. And I kind of assumed it was going to be crappy. It was just one of those WildStorm books I had to read. Then I started reading it. I'm like, this is amazing. This is one of the best WildStorm books. And I think because Michael Heisler just had a really clear idea of this very human story he wanted to tell of a Superman who kind of finds himself fully formed, already adult on Earth. And how does he get to know people? What does his life look like? It's almost got shades of Thor. What is he going to be, a construction worker? How does he live a normal life? Does he even have a normal life? And also the first miniseries, art by Mark Texeira. And then the second series, the first half of the art by Ryan Benjamin. So this would look incredible and oversized. And I know I separately had listed the establishment versus the monarchy earlier on the poll. Union actually appears in every issue of Monarchy. So we could put all of Monarchy here. The problem is then the establishment kind of gets a little bit marooned on its own because there's no other authority related book to put the establishment in, but it could just be a deluxe on its own. So if this were to also include the monarchy, I would not disagree. Edwin Billiot saying I might need to go back and read all these 90s WildStorm books. That's my goal, my friends. Mark Texeira is a great artist. Head socks, says Yarna Pauls. I'm in. Loves a character wearing a head sock. Sometimes I think that would help with, sometimes I want the curls in my face. Sometimes I don't want the curls in my face. Ryan Williams, never heard of it. Yeah, I think this is one of the original WildStorm titles. If you're doing a sequential read just of WildStorm, this one comes up. It's the third or fourth one that they launched. But in terms of name recognition, it is one of the most obscure Image titles. Okay, let's continue to Gotham Academy number 29. And you know what? Even though Kid Crisis likes this book, this is not just about Kid Crisis. And this is, I think, the newest run that I have on this poll. This is just about this book being amazing. If DC Superhero Girls is my favorite all ages superhero take, a take you could give to somebody down to a 4-year-old, Gotham Academy is probably my favorite take on kind of magical superhero school, but make it in continuity, because this exists right alongside Batman. It's in the real DC universe. It's, if we're talking about the best of super powered or super magical people, of course, people really like Strange Academy. I think you got to throw My Hero Academia in there. I think that's probably the one. In that zone, Gotham Academy hits hard and strong because it's in the superhero world, but it's not trying to do where all of these characters are just it's Junior Killer Croc, it's Junior Scarecrow. It's not doing that. It's like, basically, these are just kids out of school in Gotham. Some of them are there because they're rich. Some of them are there because they're bad kids. They're all there for different reasons, but they do have connections to the world of the Batman supervillains, and they're kind of exploring all of the crazy and confusing aspects of being kids and adolescents and teenagers. At this time, they're exploring like, whoa, Gotham is a seriously weird place, and they kind of find out there's some magical elements to the school itself, which maybe has a little bit of magic wizard boy school aspects to it, but it's just so well done. The art is so beautiful, and it's come back for some other engagements. So Maps, the character in the center there, has kind of been brought back a couple of times as a sidekick to Batman in some backup stories, which are really charming. And then there's also a Gotham Academy year one or first year that was, I know it says 2015 there, but I think it was actually 2025. Yeah, I think that's a mistake. And then also they did do a crossover with Lumberjanes, which actually was not that great, but maybe if we asked really nicely, could have Lumberjanes in there as well. This is also, Suspicious saying, also Tynion, not me taking notes. If Tynion's in there, it was just very briefly. He's not one of the major creators on this. Usually I'm first to call out Tynion. Hello to Only Kane. Adrian Montana saying Gotham Academy love. Wesley Wiggins, this was on my ballot. Nice, we finally found one where we cross over. Yarn Pulse saying this seems so fun. Richard Fearing saying I've heard of Gotham Academy and some people have told me they enjoyed it. I've never read the title. Richard B saying I love that first Gotham Academy. I get you two confused. Richard B, can we get a profile picture on you so that because you know that I just see your profile pictures and then when you change them, I don't know who you are. I thought for a while that Richard B was Richard Fearing, but not with a profile picture, but I know the cute Spidey is Richard Fearing's profile picture. So now that I see the two of you, and I know, and one of you's 42 and one of you's 43. So you could see my confusion. I'm a little bit name blind and face blind to begin with. So you're a little too close, 42 and 43, Richards. Anyway, so please let's bully Richard 42 into having a profile book pick. We only do positive bullying here. Only bullying for good cause. Okay. And then Ken Crilly saying Gotham Academy is a really good book. I hope the entire run gets the omnibus treatment. Yeah, first year, right, because it's super delayed. So that's supposed to say 2025 and it's continuing into 2026. I find it so readable. Like, I don't love this arc that this cover is from, your book, but the first two arcs of that first series and then the second series, I found it so page turning. Like, their whole vibe and the fact it's not Potter-esque and that there's only one chosen one and he's the only one that's important. They all have such interesting stories happening that it's just such a page turner for me. And I remember being done and being like, no, I want to learn more about these characters. And again, the fact that they exist in the world of Gotham, in the current Batman world, I think is just so interesting to me. Okay. Number 28, it's another WildStorm title. It is Team 7, WildStorm Origins. Why did I call it WildStorm Origins? So Team 7, this is the deep lore. Are you ready for some WildStorm deep lore? In X-Men, you have the Weapon X program, and Wolverine and Sabretooth, and basically anybody with any kind of healing power gets connected back to the Weapon X program. And then the Weapon X program also later gets extended to be like, oh, what if like Captain America was like Weapon 1, right? And so then you can see this in my Weapon X guide. There's this whole storied history of like which characters would have been which weapon, right? Deadpool, all of that. So that has not been fully stepped out at the time that WildStorm was launching, but like Weapon X had happened in Marvel Comics Presents by then. And so when Jim Lee creates WildStorm, he has this idea of what if there had been people that either had this cherubim lineage, which meant maybe they had access to some kind of powers, or maybe they've been experimented on in some way such that they could have powers. And what if we kind of put them all together in a similar way to Weapon X, and they were like just a kind of a squadron in the army? What if we kind of do a book that's kind of like a Nom style book where they're all together on a team, and it's in the past, but then in the present day, all of these men are older and they're at the core of all of our super teams. And what if we get Chuck Dixon to write that Nom era book? So you see all these characters kind of not super powered, but kind of dealing with the ramifications of the fact that they've been put on this team together for a reason, and that they all do have something in common. And then, but this didn't come out until 1994, 2 years into WildStorm. We had already met a lot of these characters in other books. We knew Deathblow, we knew Grifter. We had seen one of them as the parents of one of the characters in Gen 13 13, who gets killed very early on. So you had this immediate like light bulb moment when Lynch, who's a huge character in Gen 13, is in this. So you had this huge light bulb moment when you started reading Team 7 of like, oh shit, this is all of these characters. We're exploring them together. Now, here's the thing. Team 7 never fully had like an ongoing series. It was just a series of miniseries. And then they did like a team or Gen 12, which was like the gen before Gen 13. I think basically any of the numbered ones you put in this, because they also did Team 0. They did Team 1. I think you put all of those things that are books that explore what happened in the WildStorm universe before the launch of the WildStorm universe. You do all of them here, all of them in one book, and you call it WildStorm Origins. And you could also throw in some other like throwbacky, retconny WildStorm establishing stories. But what's so interesting about this is that like a lot of it is kind of a war book, but it's also a war book as an origin of a superhero book. Oh wait, Richard B. Breaking news. Richard B. has added a profile picture and he's been successfully bullied. We did it, Joe. We bullied him. And his profile picture, a fine choice, Booster Gold. Okay. It's crazy that we haven't had a regular Gotham in like 10 years. Always some crazy event happening in Gotham. City of Bane, Joker War, Fear State, Fail Safe, Gotham War. Now, oh, you mean like, I thought you meant like a regular Gotham title. I was like, surely we have. But no, you meant like a regular Gotham, like a Gotham that's not totally weird. Image did something similar with Operation Night Strike. Yeah. Didn't Black Canary randomly join this team? Well, there was the New 52 version, but New 52, it's kind of just, I can't explain the way they tried to make WildStorm make sense in New 52. Okay, let's continue. Okay, I feel even more strongly about this book this year. At points, this was in my top 10, and I just couldn't quite put it there. Next year, it might be in my top 10. Zatanna, The Early Years, is my pick number 27. We've only ever needed a pair of Zatanna books to collect pretty much everything. She's not in a lot of comic books up until pretty recently. And they put out the Zatanna by Paul Dini, and thankfully, DC saw an opportunity to reach back and pick up a couple of things leading into that, so it wasn't just the Paul Dini series. Now, they didn't go as far back as they could have. They didn't go all the way right to the beginning of Post-Crisis, but I think they started at a good point, and I do think I will eventually buy that omnibus. But what would really make me buy it is if they did this one too. So there's basically 3 periods of Zatanna that we could easily fit all into one book. And at least to get through 1986, but I think in light of where that other Zatanna book picks up, we actually want this to go through like mid-90s. So the first thing is she's kind of just in her own backup stories, and I have them all listed there. The Girl Who Split in Two, Batman's Bewitched Nightmare, World and Magic Adam, The Other Side of the World, and The Tantalizing Trouble of the Tripod Thieves. So that's her as kind of a co-star and her being featured. Then she kind of goes on to just and guest star, and I think this must have been originally mapped by Brand XK. It has the look of something that he had worked on. So then she's got this whole period where she's kind of just a supporting character in a bunch of other books. Then Krisis happens. And then after Krisis, she's in an issue of Hawkman. She gets her own special in 1987, not in that other omnibus. And then she does eventually get a miniseries in 1993. And then, of course, the Vertigo titles kind of borrow her a few times to kind of connect her to Constantine and also to connect her to Books of Magic. So there are a few issues of Books of Magic that I think you could excerpt here potentially as well. This would be so ideal to me to get this all in one book, to have all of her in one place. I think her stories are really fun. And again, it's interesting to see how like she transforms from this like kind of silly bippity boppity boo type of magician character, like into a character that has like a little bit more depth. And then to see from where this ends into the modern age, how she continues to grow and adapt. Edwin Billiot, absolutely, she needs an early years book. Nick N agreed. King Muckhap saying, yes, I loved her in Justice League Finest. I want to read more early appearances. Zatanna, Constantine's old love, saying Joe, cool. And Ataz, how do you say favorite backwards? Favorite. Ear-Dave. Favorite. Ear-Dave. I don't know. That's the dark magic. Okay, but yes, a lot of people really want that. The Dini Omnibus just came out. I kind of want it, but I'm like, what is my rule? You know, I'm big on rules of like what goes on the shelf. So I'm like, well, what does that make my rule for DC then? Is it that I will buy all solo female DC omnibuses? Does that mean I'm also going to buy Batwoman, which I already have in many other formats? I love that book. Does it mean I'm going to buy Supergirl, or are we saying the Super Family is like exempt? I don't know. I don't like what buying it means for the rules in my house. I would vote for this too, says Suspicious Sledvich. The map looks great. Your Pauls is like, just have her be in a movie. Then we could have all the books. And then it's like, oh, do I also want Justice League Dark, which I do love, but now we're in the New 52. So I got to think about my rules. Okay, number 26. I bet you thought I was done with the Golden Age, but you would be wrong, because this is number 26, Green Lantern, Alan Scott, The Golden Age Omnibus, Volume 1. Look at him punching those freaking Nazis. You love to see it. DC has always neglected Alan Scott in The Golden Age. He only ever got 2 archive volumes, but here's the thing. The Trinity, we're just about done. We only need one more Wonder Woman book, a couple more Batman and Superman books, and then I would hate to just think we're done in the Golden Age. I like that DC put Green Arrow out, even though Green Arrow generally is not thought of very highly in terms of Golden Age material. I just think that there is a chance that they could start dripping out some smaller books. And in a fight between this and Jay Garrick Flash, I'm actually mildly more interested in Green Lantern than Flash. They're both great. I will not turn either of them down. I would be happy to buy both of them. But as looking through the covers, looking through some of the interiors, and looking at some of the pedigree of the art, to me, I'm just a little more interested in this one than Flash. I would absolutely buy both of them. No hesitation on my part. Jamie C saying, I'm surprised Alan Scott is above Jay Garrick in your list after what I said earlier. Richard saying, heck yeah, Alan Scott, the best Green Lantern. Edwin Billiot saying, I'm so glad I'm giving the old Golden Age so much love. Suspicious Sledge saying, hell yes. And Miguel saying, I would buy it. Oh yeah, Batman Golden Age already done, Wesley Wiggins pointing out. So they're just doing reprints now, which means there's plenty of room to slide this stuff into the slate. Okay, let's continue. It's not that I was deliberately not showing you the funny picture of Hawkman. It's that I'd forgotten that the funny picture was actually of Martian Manhunter. Can we just live and appreciate this before I even talk about this slide? Martian Manhunter, in what I can only say is a classic damsel in distress pose. I mean, look at how svelte he looks there. And then this giant pink Muppety thing is like, coming. This cover, if they put this cover on the cover of the book, Jamie C and I would buy it in a second. And there are several covers that are this hilarious in this run. So I've been working, this is number 25, Martian Manhunter, The Silver Age Omnibus, Volume 1, and we would need multiple. I have been working on a Martian Manhunter guide for, I think it feels like 84 years, at least a year and a half now, because my Patrons voted for it, and all levels of Patreon only get DC guides when it's a vote. Usually DC's a higher tier because it's so much harder. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it. And the reason it's taking long is A, because he's not in any one title, like until that 90s title we looked at. So it just takes forever to research everything. But B, usually when I'm researching older books, and especially when they're like on DC Universe and I'm going through them, I'll kind of like stop and read a page here or there, but I'm really just going through to be like, oh, here's the one where he's revealed to the public. Here's the one where he gets a girlfriend. Like, I'm just looking for the big tentpole moments. I found myself just reading this, like really reading it. When he starts out in the Silver Age, he's this Martian from another world, but he comes here to become a police officer. And the whole thing is kind of like his gradual comfort in being, first he's summoned by Mars, from Mars, by this mad scientist. And so he's like, A, what am I going to do on Earth? And then he's like, I guess I'll be a police officer so I can like kind of fight crime. And then it's like him becoming more comfortable as a police officer, but also becoming more comfortable being a Martian superhero and like having more of a life. And then but he's not like out to the public. Like the public has never seen him. And then he like kind of is seen by the public. And then he becomes like a superhero that's known. So then he joins the Justice League. Like, it's just, I found myself like wrapped up in these. And again, these are really short stories. They're like 6 to 8 pages each. And I just found myself every time I opened the guide to start working on it, I would just like read another one of these stories and be like, oh man, that was great. And I don't, I'm not a huge Silver Age reader. I mean, I love Silver Age comics, but I often like them for like the archival quality of like the art and just getting them restored. It's strange for me to be working on a guide that includes Silver Age and for me to kind of like forget I'm working on the guide and just start reading the comics. That's much more of like a 90s and 2000s thing for me. So I kind of just fell in love with this material. Now, it has been collected in Showcase in black and white, but it has not been collected in color. And it's just so interesting to see how he goes from like this briefly appearing backup character in Detective Comics, and get it, Detective, like Detective Comics was thematic. Batman was the lead story, and then Martian Manhunter was a detective and he was was the backup story. Like, you know, it's just so interesting to see how he goes to that, to becoming this like marquee hero. It's just so interesting to me. Okay. He's not that far off from that one rogue pose from the cartoon. You know the one. Is that Gossamer the Red Alien from Marvin the Martian? No, but that's, I think, what it reminds me of. I had no idea that alien had a name. What's the pink monster? Suspicious Sandwich says Zook. Wow, you're all having a party over here. Okay. Haven't read any of this, but enjoyed Darwin Cook's portrayal of Silver Age John in New Frontier, says Wesley Wilkins. Phenomenal AC, I just made some popcorn to snack on while Krisis covers the top 25. Oh, I thought you just meant while I talked about this one book. I don't know if I'd get this, says Papa John, but I'd consider it. And you have to know, to the extent that I have vocal stims and tics related to many of your names, every time I see your name, I'm saying, I'm in my best Chapel Roan saying, get it hot like Papa John, but sang well. She kind of just talks it though. So, but that's what I'm hearing when I see your name. Okay. Zook, do something. Okay. So anyway, so people are, oh, you missed it, my friend. There was a specific shout out to you with my first pick on this list. You might need to rewind the tape. Okay, but let's keep going. Number 24. WildStorm. This is Wildcat's Grifter. So when WildStorm started, before there was a Majestic, before we had Midnighter, Grifter was the guy. Like, he was the solo guy. And it's funny, having gone back and read some of this, WildStorm was kind of some of the book I read the most. So, in the 90s. I have not read a lot of 2000s WildStorm, but I have read almost all of the 90s WildStorm many times. Grifter, it was like Jim Lee really understood what made the guys on the X-Men cool, and maybe a way that Chris Claremont didn't even understand. And so he made this version that was like a perfect amalgam of everything he had drawn at Marvel. Like, Grifter he's very much Gambit in his visual design. Like, it just looks very Gambit-y. And he's like a little bit of a wisecracker like Gambit, but he's also like this like cool, tough Wolverine guy. He's also got like a little bit of a Punisher quality. You absolutely can see his design in the way that Jim Lee designed Maverick on his way out from X-Men as he was like brewing what he was going to be doing at Image. He just kind of is like the distilled coolness of all those characters, which is funny because as a character, he's kind of amorphous as a character. Like, as you read him, he's like, he rides a motorcycle, he has guns, and it's like hard to understand what his motivation is, but the cool factor is just high. So his first solo appearance is actually an issue of Savage Dragon, but I do think DC might have the rights because Jim Lee, it was the Image crossover, Image X Month, and so Jim Lee did a Savage Dragon issue that was basically a Grifter issue. So, but then there was a Grifter one shot, and then he has like some backup stories, and then he has his own series, and then he has his own series again, and then he stars in a series called Point Blank, and then he has a series that we've talked about earlier already where he splits it with Midnighter. There's some other intercompany stuff because again, he was like the solo hero for WildStorm up until Midnighter became a thing. So there is Grifter Badrock. That's a crossover with a Rob Liefeld character, so I don't know if we could have that. There's Grifter She, which is actually very cool looking. I don't know if DC could license that. There's Grifter and the Mask, like that, smoking the Jim Carrey mask. I don't know if we could have that. But to me, there's just a certain coolness about him and an iconicness to him that he's one of the most kind of visually iconic WildStorm characters, and Jim Lee put a lot of panache into designing a lot of those earlier WildStorm characters. So like almost all of the original Wildcats are so visually distinct, but visually distinct in a way where they almost clash with each other when they're all on panel. Like, they don't go together very well. And Grifter, of course, does exist in the current DC universe. So it's like, he's somebody that is kind of recognizable. Superjob always loved Grifter's design. So badass. Yeah, Velnet, he is kind of the Gambit, but he's more, he's different than Gambit. Suspicious Sledvich accurately pointing out he's kind of like hobosexual Gambit, and I've never heard that word before, but I will be adopting it into my linguistic arsenal as of today. My only real experience with Grifter is Future End, which apparently was not that good. James reminding everybody that we will be doing the after show, so make sure you grab the link from the description if you want to talk about things other than what I'm already talking about. He looks kind of generic 90s, but like in the best possible way. Okay, let's continue. To number 23, another WildStorm pick. This is Stormwatch Road to the Authority by Warren Ellis, which we already have in Compendium. This is literally just the Compendium as an omnibus. They mapped it perfectly, except Except there's also Wildcats Aliens, a legendary book that Omar and I love to talk about because it was meant to just be a crossover with the Aliens franchise, but the artist on the book didn't know that it was meant to be those aliens, so he started drawing it with just an alien. Also, Warren Ellis basically uses it as an excuse to kill off all the Stormwatch characters he doesn't actually want between him ending the original run of 1993 Stormwatch and beginning the run of 1997 Stormwatch. So but it's also, you'll note it's called Wildcats Aliens, not Stormwatch Aliens. So it's also a Wildcats issue. So I have several copies of that individual issue and it had multiple covers. I think I have all of them because it like goes with so many different binds that I want to do. Anyway, just talking about if there's one thing you could put into an omnibus, you could. Here's the thing. In a world where we did actually get an Authority movie and Authority was a big hit, this is the natural next omnibus to do because this shows how Warren Ellis takes this kind of very Justice League-y superhero team. I mean, they live on a watchtower satellite. They fly down to Earth to like deal with natural disasters and supervillainy. I mean, they're the Justice League of WildStorm. And it shows how Ellis just very gradually starts steering the ship towards them being this very kind of like autocratic, ends justify the means authority version of the team. Unfortunately, in the current world that we have, we didn't get the Authority movie, so I don't know that DC is ever going to have the impetus to make this from a compendium into an omnibus. But super job pointing out Fuji, who's that big mountain of a man in the back that has like the red circle of the Japanese flag on his face. I love that visual design. I love him as well. And my favorite though, is she on this cover? Am I covering her up right now? No, she's not on. Oh, because she might be dead by this point. My favorite is Diva, who's like all white with this like blonde hair and she's kind of got like Siren's powers, I think. She is really, really cool. Yarn Paul saying, I'm glad I evolved from X-Men personality to 90s slop apology. Which is fair. Well, the thing is, I apologize for all forms of slop. No, that's not true. I don't like current slop. 90s was my era of slop, but here's the thing. 90s had this bombastic balance of like taking things so over the top and pushing the design of it so far that like the story so often could not meet the promise of how bombastically designed the characters were. And that's what I find with a lot of reading 90s stuff, especially with Image, that like the visual is there, but they just never stop to think about what that character could be. And you get that so much with early Image. You get that with Spawn, with Shadowhawk. Well, no, Shadowhawk was good, but like so much of it was just visually so amazing. But there was nobody willing to sit down and kind of craft a canon for those characters that made them interesting in a way other than just visually interesting. This is one of those times that I really think Ellis said, hold on, wait a second. This concept is so good. You've been using it well, but like, what if it was something that matched the visual panache of this? And I think out of that came Authority. Yeah. Okay. I'm missing important information in the first 36 issues. Well, here's the thing. I love the first 36 issues, Xbox by Degrees. They're some of my favorite comic books. I've read them so many times. Most people are only interested in this because it has Warren Ellis and because it's the road to Authority. For me, I would absolutely want the first 36 issues collected. However, I understand that you don't need those 36 issues to understand that this is the point where Ellis starts turning the steering wheel of the ship towards Authority. I think they're great context, but this works just while starting from this, and it's been collected many times starting from here, so it's fine to start from here. Would I want what comes before it? Absolutely, I would. Okay. Hey, Chubby Ray is here somewhere. People are talking to him there. In a world. This is for you, my friend. In a world. That was for you. Not only if we could get Higgy Pop Comics in here, we'd have all of my favorite YouTubers in one place. We all have slop that we defend, Krisis, then we feel good about it. Slop Watch. Should we have a special segment? Maybe we should have a separate show called Slop Watch. Oh, I'm really kind of manic right now because the sun is shining. It's beautiful. The DC poll is launched, which means that was huge work for me. I just put in my highest work hours in a single month at in my actual job that I have. I think it's the most hours I've worked at least since 2000 in a single month. And or not 2000, sorry, 2020. No, not the most. Trust me. When I was at the startup, there were weeks that I worked more than I did anything other than work. Point being, it kind of feels like that all that stuff is water under the bridge right now, and I'm just free. Like my brain is free. Also, my arm is almost fully recovered enough that I can go swimming again, which I'm like counting down by the minutes at this point. So I'm just like hyper, and every time somebody picks like a new thing, like, oh, what about a slop watch? I'm like, slop watch? That sounds like a show. Like, I'm in that mode where I'm like ready to like create stuff, right? And so anyway. You're trying to get me off topic, people. We're only 22 away from the end. And at number 22 is Hawkman by Tony Isabella. Again, not a dead name. Jenny Blake Isabella has written about how she has said that she wants DC to continue to credit her as Tony Isabella on her old books. I just, I would never deliberately dead name somebody or do something transphobic on this channel. That is so the opposite of my values. But I also think names are important, as I always say when I try to get all of your names right. And also, I think it's important to listen to what people want. And so Jenny Blake Isabella said, credit me as Tony, and so we're crediting her as Tony. Okay, so again, Isabella, no misses for me. No misses, always great. And this post-crisis material has it's kind of like pre-crisis and post-crisis. It has never been collected, never. And this is, again, before Hawkworld. So if you're trying to put it in order in your brain, it first is this. It starts with the Shadow War of Hawkman, and then it goes to post-crisis. Then comes Hawkworld. Then comes the Ostrander stuff when he's in Justice League. So again, I don't know a single thing about this. All I know is this beautiful freaking cover right here. That's literally all I know because it's never been reprinted and I want it. And I want it bad. My precious. And so let's get an omnibus. Thank you. Okay. Yes, I would agree. King Moko, it does feel perfect for a Finest. And I think the Hawkman Finest line is probably going to be how we see a lot of this collected. And that is fine. Okay. Number 21, Wildcats, which obviously is a WildStorm. And this is, I believe, our first official Wildcats release on this poll. So this is actually 3 volumes. We had Stormwatch the DC years, and I was like, oh, this is kind of just odds and ends. It's 2 series. We could get it together. Wildcats is the opposite. Wildcats kept coming back and back again at DC. And so this is actually 3 distinct runs. The first run of this is a Lobdell and Casey book. Lobdell starts writing it, then Joe Casey takes over. And it's got Travis Charest artwork. Ooh. So that is kind of like still the sort of regular Wildcats, but Joe Casey's always going to make things fucking weird. So it's fucking weird. Then Joe Casey launches Wildcats version 3.0. And the reason that we had these as separate books at one point, I think on the first poll. And the reason we put them together is because since Joe Casey writes half of the second series and then all of the third series, it's like maybe you do those 2 series together because together they're only about 50 issues. And then you just do like the end run stuff separately. So it's not entirely clear where you'd split it. Then when they bring everybody back in that World's End Armageddon period, they kind of make Wildcats just back to basics, a superhero team again. And that would be the 3rd omnibus. I love Wildcats, and a lot of this has existed in trade, but as we got to the end of the Armageddon stuff right before Flashpoint, DC kind of threw their hands up and stopped collecting stuff in trade. So there's a big gap where things only ever existed in singles. I think at this point, Wildcats has enough name recognition, Grifter, and has enough visual recognition, Zealot, I should say, because she was in Kelly Thompson's Birds of Prey, has enough visual recognition that I think you could get away with at least a series of compendiums for Wildcats. I mean, it seems like they have enough recognition and compendiums are a cheap enough buy and people have enough 90s and 2000s affection that you could probably get compendiums out there, even if not in omnibus. Sorry, I'm looking at the comments. Chubby Ray gave me an invite. I'm very hard to pin down to get onto other channels because if I have time that's not this show, it's usually me trying to get Crushing Crisis updated. So I generally won't appear anywhere unless Crushing Crisis is fully updated, which is a huge task. Because I've had an open invite that I've been wanting to take from Comic Pals for, I believe, 13 months now. So I would love to go on Chubby Ray's channel. We got to just get there. I would also love to have Chubby Ray on this channel, and I have some ideas about that. So we'll get there. Tigereyes, not only is 3.0 one of my favorite... Tigereyes is still here, by the way. Not only is 3.0 one of my favorite runs, but it will make my list. Confirmed Tigereyes vote. There was a time that Tigereyes called it the secret ballot. And if you said what was on your ballot before the voting ended, he would like smote you or something. It was like the rules that you could not say what you were actually voting for. Cedric and Ellen have to call it a night. Bonsoir, my friends. I will see you sometime again soon. I love that. Oh, here's the poll. Remember, you got a whole other week to vote. You're on Paul saying, I love that Grifter is on so many covers and nobody knows who he is. And James Moore is saying Casey Phillips Wildcats is an underrated masterpiece. James Moore will be the next person we begin to bully to get a profile picture. Okay, only positive bullying. All right, but here's another WildStorm. It's Backlash. And it's the reason I say it's by Brett Booth, even though Brett Booth is primarily known to probably as an artist, is that Brett Booth actually writes Backlash after initially drawing him, and he writes all of this. Everything. So Backlash is one of those Team 7 characters that like existed in this world of like they were just a squad. We meet him at the beginning of Stormwatch as kind of like Stormwatch's trainer in chief. His power is so different than he's kind of got a little bit of a Spider-Man bendy quality to him, but he's a little bit of like a Gambit or a Wolverine, and he heals a little bit, but he has this like electric whip thing that he does. He's just like visually kind of his own thing that didn't exactly copy anything that existed at Marvel and DC. And then Booth gets his hand on him. There's The Kindred, which is a series of him teaming up with somebody else, maybe Grifter. But then he has his own long-running series. Backlash actually ran for 32 issues. He also popped up in Deathblow a couple times, and then there was another series that spun out of that called Wild Core that had 10 issues, and then there was a graphic novel of him. Also, he had a crossover issue with Spider-Man, but we probably couldn't have that. That would have to be in a WildStorm versus Marvel book. But I just think that he, again, like I love, this not only falls in my WildStorm love, because I obviously love WildStorm, but this is one of those things where we could get everything in one book. It's so easy to do. We're talking about like perfect 40 to 50 issue range here. And it's just like a complete adventure of one character by one creator. Brett Booth pretty much either writes or draws everything in here except for that last Jet miniseries. And I forget if he draws the second Kindred miniseries. So yeah, to me, this is really close to peak WildStorm for me, because I just love a lot of the other WildStorm books changed hands a lot. It kind of like had the initial creators when it was more artist driven, and then it kind of hands over to a writer that takes over in the case of like Warren Ellis on Stormwatch, or, you know, Alan Moore on Wildcats. This is kind of a book that like, no, it just always was what it was. And you know how I was saying that so often the visual design, like the coolness of the book is never at the level of the visual design. I do think Brett Booth actually had a good enough idea for Backlash that this is a book where like the character and his history and his continuity actually pay off the coolness of his visual design and of the visual design of all the other characters there. Okay. Look, y'all were warned that if last year everybody was like, do your stream, and I was like, if I do this, it's going to be all WildStorm and Wonder Woman, and I don't think you're going to be interested in that, but here we are because everybody wanted me to do it, so I blame you, JVC. I blame you. Okay, but I'm glad everybody's learning about WildStorm here with me. Speaking of which, The Authority Volume 3. It's kind of like it's like a whoa, WildStorm. Because technically this is after WildStorm. It does have the WildStorm logo on the cover, but this was fully into the DC years. We're talking about when DC had WildStorm from 2006 and on, fully as a subline of DC Comics that was in its own separate universe, and they were doing their own thing. They had crossed over with DC at that point. So again, in a world where we actually got an Authority movie, this would have come out. We already have Authority 1 and 2. This is the natural next book. And this collects kind of all of their end state stuff. So there was actually this book called The Authority 1 and 2. DC launched a lot of stuff in 2006 related to WildStorm, and a lot of it didn't stick. There's this famous single issue of Jim Lee and Grant Morrison doing Wildcats, and that just died. In the case of this, though, Authority was big enough that they went back 4 years later and wrote a series called The Lost Year that tells the rest of what would have happened in that 2006 series that died. But between issue 2 and 3 being published, there's also Authority Prime, The Secret History of the Authority Hawksmoor, and then also all of the Authority 2008, which kind of takes them to the end of the WildStorm universe before Flashpoint. Jamie C is somebody who's never read The Authority. Who's the Homelander looking guy in the middle? I was just thinking that and I couldn't think of his name. So unfortunately, I cannot help you with that. Okay. Krisis is like, you brought this on yourself. Have to sneeze. Okay. And the makeup is mostly still intact. We got a little there. Okay. Onward. Man, can you imagine if they'd put Hawkman in the New 52 Stormwatch? It would be number 1. Okay, they're in my top 20 now. We didn't do any fanfare at number 20, but we're getting really close to my actual votes in the poll. And this is one where I think I am one of the biggest super fans on the entire internet of, which is Resurrection Man, the complete saga by Dan Abnett and Annie Lanning. Why? Because he just returned to the spotlight last year being written by Ram V, and DC didn't take the opportunity to release this. Come on, DC, what are you doing? That was the time to have it in the store so people could pick it up. So this has never been completely collected. It was all of them them, they wrote the whole original series, and they write him coming back in New 52. So this is one of the examples in New 52 where like a character being revived actually extends their own history in a totally coherent way. And a lot of the artwork on the original series is Butch Geis, rest in peace. Just a totally amazing artist who I've always loved. So last year, if you recall, when I was doing the pull list, when I didn't really like that Ram V series too much because it just wasn't what I wanted. I just love Resurrection Man. I don't need like a funny twist on it. I just need Resurrection Man. So I started reading 1 or 2 issues of the original Resurrection Man alongside each of his, and they just hold up so well. They're such good comics. It's almost like heavy enough that it has an almost slightly Vertigo feel to it. It almost feels kind of Swamp Thing, kind of, I don't want to say Constantine. The fact that he's in this world and on this cover, he's like, the JLA are around. And his whole thing, if you don't know him, is he just keeps, every time he dies, he comes back to life and he has a new superpower. And they're not cumulative. He has a new, different superpower. And sometimes it's linked to how he died. So you just have this person dying again and again, kind of at the margins of a Justice League story. So I just saw Jason L. Wright have mapped the omnibus, included the original one, New 52, and Quantum Karma, which I'd make for a weird read. YM1 and Quantum Karma do share continuity. YM1 and New 52 share creators, but not continuity. Well, sort of implied continuity. But the thing is, I think it's not just the series himself. They introduced these totally like wacky, kind of like Deadpool, Harley Quinn-esque villains called the Body Doubles who hunt him down. And I think you would probably want to, they make limited appearances and it kind of like interweaves with his appearances. So I think you would want all the Body Double stuff in this as well. Papa John Comics saying, yes, Resurrection Man. I almost voted for this. It barely missed my top 10. Edwin Billiot saying, I agree. Great Goyce art. Gurney Paul saying, I'm into this. Chubby Ray praying for a top 10 Legion pick from Krisis. You're praying to the wrong gods, my friend, for that one. And Ryan saying, how's the Resurrection Man different than any other character? Always dies and comes back. It's not a power. I just explained it, Ryan. He dies and he can't die. So there's this I can't die kind of like Highlander externals aspect. But then when he does briefly die for a second and he comes back, he has a whole different superpower. And also sometimes his memory gets messed with. So there's like a little bit like Wolverine doesn't remember his past aspect to that as well. So it's kind of like, if he was solving problems one way because he could fly, but then he dies because he gets tangled in electricity lines, and now he comes back and he can like absorb kinetic energy. What's his plan now? Like he has this totally new, different power that he doesn't know how it works. And so anyway, I really enjoy it. And Abnett and Lanning, who were very, very reliable in this period. Okay, number 17. Is this our first Wonder Woman? I think it is, right? I think it's the first Wonder Woman. To be fair, we have a lot of Wonder Woman. I was talking to my friend Felix last night, and I like listed out how much Wonder Woman we have. We have an impressive amount of Wonder Woman in Omnibus at this point. We have 6 Golden Age volumes. 6 Golden Age volumes. We have 6 Golden Age volumes. 3 Silver Age volumes. Then we have the Diana Prince book. So that's all of her pre-Crisis. We have 10 pre-Crisis omnibuses. I never thought we would live in a planet that has that. Then we have the 3 Perez omnibuses. You could kind of count War of the Gods, but we won't. Then we have Byrne. Then we have Jimenez. Then we have Rucka 1 and now the announcement of Rucka 2. And then we have Simone. So that's another 8. So we have 18 if I just... Oh, and post... Since we're counting the Rucka post Flashpoint 1, also Chang and Azzarello. So we have 19 in continuity Wonder Woman omnibuses. That's incredible. And she deserves it. She's one of the best comic book characters in comics. This is not in my top 10 because it's a little bit of an awkward gap filler. Basically, a number of different writers take a shot at Wonder Woman before Gail Simone takes over, which I should have within arm's reach. Oh no, it might be in the back row. It's not, I can't easily lay hands on it. But before Gail Simone takes over, oh no, is that it? No, yeah. Before Gail Simone takes over, and these are still wrapped because I have these all in singles. I have every Wonder Woman issue in singles from 1972 to 2011. Before she takes over, there's a couple of different authors, and we have some of it in oversized hardcover. Jodi Picoult's start of this run has been in a deluxe, I think, before. But I just think, even though DC does sometimes take a onesie twosie deluxe approach, this is just enough of a lump of comics that we should just put it in an omnibus. Because there's the Jodi Picoult lump at the beginning. It's like the first 4 issues. Then there's the next 8 issues. And then there's also this Amazon's Attack kind of mini crossover. So it has an Amazon's Attack event series. And then there's a couple of issues in Catwoman and Supergirl and Teen Titans. So you could think of this as 3 deluxe hardcovers, the Jodi Picoult stuff, the After Jodi Picoult stuff, and then Amazon's Attack. I just put it all into one book and call it Amazon's Attack. Just call it a day. It fills exactly between the Rucka book and the Simone book, and it's on the shelf. It has Terry Dodson on a lot of the art and a lot of the covers, so like easy to market it visually. Does anybody actually like Amazon's Attack? Absolutely not. It is not well regarded, but it fills a gap, and we do not have that many Wonder Woman gaps left. And so, yeah, I mean, Jamie, I'm not telling anybody it's good. Unlike WildStorm, which I'm going to bat for in a lot of cases, I cannot go to bat for most of, yeah, Jason L. Wright, everybody knows. This is bad. I'm not arguing for it for quality. There's a reason it's not in my top 10. It's a perfect gap filler between two other omnibuses. I want my gaps filled. Okay, let's continue with number 16, Sandman Universe Black Orchid by Dick Foreman. So here's the interesting thing, which maybe you didn't know. Neil Gaiman, before he did Sandman, did a Black Orchid miniseries, him and Dave McKean, on interiors. And the feeling at the time was like, that's not quite what we wanted. But but you're heading in the right direction. Do the Sandman thing, right? But then, because Neil Gaiman already had an affection for this character and already had kind of set her on a path, it became sort of one of the major Vertigo books and the early Vertigo branding alongside Constantine and Swamp Thing and Sandman. This kind of has become, and Books of Magic too, but this has kind of become the forgotten stepchild of that, because Black Orchid did exist in the 1970s. She's an existing DC character, so it's not like something newly invented like Constantine or Books of Magic. But unlike Swamp Thing or Animal Man, another one of these Vertigo, or Doom Patrol, she just never had the name recognition that they acquired through how hot their Vertigo books were. And also, this was very Sandman adjacent. I'm not trying to tell you you have to read it to understand Sandman. It actually has nothing to do with Sandman, but it was Sandman, very Sandman adjacent, in that like it was happening in that same kind of Vertigo world and vibe. And again, this is a single creator run. It's written almost all of it by Dick Foreman. I think all of it. It's only 22 issues in an annual, plus the 3 initial Gaiman issues. So if we wanted to, we could take some Bronze Age adventures of Black Orchid before Gaiman transforms her and kind of include that here as back matter, just as like, ooh, here's, you know, the road to this, or like what came before this. And I just think, again, we never know what's going to happen in the world. We're cruising along, and Sandman's the easiest sell in Omnibus, and then it turns out its creator is just an awful person, and that changes the world of what we're collecting. In the version of the world that didn't happen, I'm sure DC would still be looking to pump out more related books, and in the same way that we got Dead Boy Detectives, which I never in my life thought that we would get in an Omnibus, we probably get this too. Now, I don't know that we're ever going to get there, but if DC prints just a handful of things that are above this on my list, this will easily be in my top 10. Yarn Pulse didn't know this had a longer run after the mini. Dr. Zero says this was so close to being in my top 10. Jason L. Wright, again, just outside my top 10. I hope they do this. Jamie C. Oh, hold on. Adam Wlecklick 530 with a great Thanos picture says Black Orchid is my number 3 pick. Superjob said, I started reading a year ago, liked the Gaiman mini, but dropped the ongoing after a few issues. Might go back to it someday. And Suspicious Sudvich just likes these early Vertigo covers. Andrew Devoida saying this is how he became interested in Sandman. Interesting. Okay. Number 15. You know that I do not like greatest hitsy omnibuses. I don't like an omnibus that like picks and chooses its individual stuff. It's just not my vibe. I don't care. I would rather just collect those things in full. Except when the character crosses so many different runs and goes through such an evolution across all of those appearances that you would have to buy 30 other omnibuses in order to get their full story, right? To me, that's like Magneto, Loki, not Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom really only gets developed in the pages of like Fantastic Four and Secret Wars. I don't see the attraction there. Loki, to a degree, only happens in Thor, but then he starts appearing other places. But like for Magneto, to get all of the threads of Magneto, you would need like a shelf this big of X-Men. That's how I feel about Poison Ivy. I love Poison Ivy. She's one of my favorite characters. So my number 15 pick is Poison Ivy Beginnings. I just think that there's so many interesting eras. If you look at her first appearances in Batman in the, I guess like the late 60s, right? 1966, she looks very much like like an animated character, or like a character from the Batman 66 TV show, which I forget, is she ever on Batman 66? I can't remember. But I mean, she's just like a girl in like a leafy bathing suit. And then over time, her character, both her visual design and the way her character acts, starts to change. And so I don't have every possible story in here. I kind of just went through and I tried to pick what are the ones I absolutely would not skip. So I think there's some pre-crisis stuff, and then there's some immediate post-crisis stuff, and then she gets some like really good stories. She gets one of the year 1 annuals, she gets some stuff in Showcase, and then this, in fact, this might actually be, it's in this room. In fact, it might be right behind me. I don't know if you've even seen the back of my hair yet today. I haven't. I don't see what the back of my hair looks like. Oh, look at that, baby. I love this so much. It is literally the single issue that is the closest to being within grasp of my body in this office right now. Here's a rare look at me having Batman single issues. We'll do a single issue stream sometime soon, but here is that annual I was just talking about. So all of that stuff would be in this book. Yeah. There you go. So yeah, I just think, and again, I just think that if we were to stack rank all of Batman's villains to who has the most public awareness and sort of like antagonists, we won't even say villains because some of them are not villains, who has the most public awareness, who has the most visibility, who are people the most excited to read about. I would love to see DC's own rank of that based on how all those Arkham trade paperbacks ranked. Clearly Joker, probably Catwoman. I would wager maybe Bane. And then I bet Scarecrow and Two-Face are right after that. But I think Poison Ivy is more popular than Scarecrow and Two-Face. She's 40 issues deep into a series right now. Oh, Harley, obviously. Which Two-Face barely even got through 6 issues of his series before they canceled it. Eventually, I'm doing a Poison Ivy guide is on my list. And I know that it's going to be like the Martian Manhunter guide where I'm going to stop so many times to read the issues, which is a good thing because I'll have read them. But at some point, you're just going to see me disappear for a month or two. And then I'm going to come out with the Poison Ivy guide that nobody's ever going to care about or click on, but it's going to be for me because I'm going to get to finally figure out what every issue I would put into this, and I would enjoy it so much. Let's see what you had to say though. Love the beginnings title. Great job. Somebody criticized me like, well, DC doesn't necessarily say the early years. So I was like, well, what else can we say? By the way, some of the titles that I'm using here are different than they are in the poll because I just wanted a title that would like read well and you would understand what I'm talking about. If you're looking for some of these on the poll, they might not start with the same words or whatever, but if you search Poison Ivy, obviously you'll find it. Super job. Since the G. Will Wilson series, Poison Ivy is now my favorite Bat villain. I think she's always been my favorite Bat villain ever since animated series. Norna Pauls was looking at the Poison Ivy Arkham compilation trade, and it's so expensive. Another reason to have this. Richard B. She was created during the era of the show, but never made it on. Suspicious Sludvetch will 99% vote for this. James Abel saying Poison Ivy never showed up in Batman 66, but did show up in the Batman 66 comic. It's just in that first appearance, I can see the cover in my head. She just looks like a Batman 66 character. Like, I don't know if it was influenced by that for sure, if that was just the vibe at the time, but she just looks like she belongs there. Renzo, it's his #1 vote. Tigereyes saying Brian Boland draws the best Ivy. Also one of my favorite DC characters. Tigereyes has such good taste. I know he can be a man of few words, although we got some great stuff from him on that stream. I was so happy with that stream, the launch stream last week. So proud of what everybody did on it. But Tigereyes, man of few words, taste impeccable. Okay. I only have a single issue. That's not even close to a Crisis. Penguin. Oh yeah, but I don't think his Penguin is being somebody who really excites comic readers a lot. But now that he's had that Max series, I do think that he's probably there. These Wonder Woman issues are Artemis's Wonder Woman. Yes, Diana's in those issues, but that is during the Artemis period. Poison Ivy is my favorite Batman villain. Yeah, I just think she's so beloved. Grayson Flow saying definitely in the second tier, but she does have a great synergy with being connected to the probably mega popular Harley and having a long-running series currently. And plus, she always pops up in animated series because she's just so visually appealing. Dr. Zero giving me a good mapping note about Black Orchid. I can't copy that. I'm going to star it. Hopefully I can come back and see that later. Okay. Oh, I can also, what does this do? Oh, I can open in a new window. Oh, straight into the... Oh, okay. Too many crazy things are happening when I click that. We're almost to the top 10. Number 14. It's more Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman, The Bronze Age, Volume 1. DC has never printed Wonder Woman's Bronze Age in color. It does not exist. A couple of issues here and there up until we got this. because the Legend of Wonder Woman here, which is just a mini series right at the edge of Krisis that basically recaps all of her story up until that point, this has the Legend of Wonder Woman, but it starts with Wonder Woman 306, which means this is the first time, there it is, 306, the first time that any significant run of Bronze Age Wonder Woman has been collected in color. Now here's the thing. This is the end of that run. This is the 306 to 329. It's only the last 24 issues of that run. That run, before we even get to that point, starting after the Diana Prince Omnibus, goes on for 100 issues. And there's a whole fleet of creators that you know well. And also the art. There's just so much great art, especially the covers. I love this cover. I could probably just do a top 30 Wonder Woman covers. That would be fun. Should I do a top Wonder Woman cover show? See, a little bit manic, lots of content on the brain. So this is going to happen. I have every faith that DC is going to get here, which is why it's not in my top 10 for two reasons. One is they burned through those Wonder Woman Silver Age books so fast that I think that it's clear that they're pushing to get all of her stuff out in Omnibus. It just seems like that's the strategy. They would not have released the Silver Age books that fast if they were just going to stop and not do Bronze Age. And especially now that they're doing Batman in Bronze Age, I do think that Wonder Woman is going to be one of the next stops. The other thing is we do have now those last 24 issues in Finest, so it seems clear, to me at least, that DC is going to start doing kind of one of those backwards forwards Finest things that they're doing on Batman, where I bet we're just going to keep going backwards on Wonder Woman and getting Finest volumes that just fit right before that volume, which I'm totally happy with. So I'm not choosy about what format we get it in initially. I do want it in Omnibus eventually, and I have every faith they're going to do that. But I think if they're going to give it to us in Finest first, awesome. I just want to see it in color. I have every single one of these issues. I think starting from 218 or 20, those first few were really too expensive for me to get. But I have all of them in singles, every one. So if we did a Wonder Woman covers countdown, I could do it with physical comic books because I have every issue of this. But yeah, I just, I think people's complaint about it is that it's kind of insignificant. It's like, it's just Wonder Woman. But like, you could say that about pretty much all Silver Age DC. There's not a lot of, all Bronze Age DC. Other than Batman, there's not a lot of Bronze Age superhero DC that starts the Bronze Age like so significant. All right, maybe I'm eating those words. Green Lantern starts really significant. Flash is good. Aquaman is good, but that's more at a creator pedigree standpoint. I don't know if the stories are so significant. I guess just trying to apply this modern sensibility of like, well, it's not Claremont X-Men. Like, okay, fine. But like, was it good Wonder Woman comics? Was the art great? Was she a well-written version of Wonder Woman? I think the answer is yes. So yeah, I would be all over this. And again, the only reason that I don't have it in my top 10 is because I'm just pretty sure it's already going to happen. Richard saying Don Heck draws the majority of 306 through 329, and reading it for the first time recently jumped him up to my top favorite Wonder Woman artist. Yeah, it is. Those issues are absolutely gorgeous. This is the kind of Wonder Woman gap filling I can get behind. This is Ted's Wonder Woman pick. This was Wonder Woman. The Bronze Age was Edwin Billiot's #1 vote. Chubby Ray says, I love Bronze Age comics. Nick N pointing out, we got the Huntress Wonder Woman back up years ago. That's weird. Well, because Huntress kind of has her own interest behind her, and those were easy to excerpt. But yeah, for a long time, that was the only color work we had collected from any of these books, which is crazy. Some of these Bronze Age Wonder Woman outfits are wild. Comics Pals would love me to do a top Wonder Woman covers. Consider it sold, baby. Any excuse I have to look at Wonder Woman comic books, I am there. DC upping the Wonder Woman Finest for next year has me very hopeful for every Diana era we need. I feel so like blessed and happy that we finally live in a world where DC takes Wonder Woman seriously and they're getting her in print. This is, even as far as her movie, we weren't fully there, but we had an inkling of it. Now, as a Wonder Woman mega fan up for life, for my whole life, from my earliest memories being of Wonder Woman, I just feel so overjoyed that I can look at this shelf. And it is, there's the Prez book right there. That I can look at this shelf right next to my desk every single day, and closer to me even than my X-Men collection is my Wonder Woman collection. I love her, and she's a huge part of my personality and my hair aesthetic, and I just think we're so, so close. The villain omnibuses don't do well ever on the Marvel poll. On the DC poll, a few of them do like decently, but I haven't looked really deeply into which one does the best. But I think if any of them have a chance, it's gotta be Poison Ivy. Okay, finally, Wonder Woman is being treated like an A-lister, says Lance Library. Okay, we're so close to the top 10. Number 13. Firestorm, baby. Firestorm, the Fury of Firestorm, my #1 most wanted DC Finest line. And for that reason, not quite in my top 10 for omnibuses. Here's the thing that you didn't know, I bet, because I didn't know until last night finishing these slides. Do you know the only 2 writers on this 100-issue run? Do you know the only 2 writers? Jerry Conway, rest in peace, a true master of the form. Never wrote a bad issue in my book. And John Ostrander. You're telling me DC has 100 issues of somebody for me, the most visually iconic DC character. He has fire for a head, bitches. Okay? It doesn't get more iconic than that. The most visually iconic DC character, and they have 100 issues, which have never been fully reprinted in color. Only like the first 10 or 12 have been in color before. And not only that, but you're telling me a fact I didn't know until last night because I just don't know DC. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry, I'm not perfect. That half of it is written by Jerry Conway and the other half is written by John Ostrander and they haven't put it out in a collection yet. What are we doing here? So, I can't have it in my top 10 though, because I think they might do it. I think if it started with Ostrander and then changed to Conway, I think DC, I would have more faith in DC doing it because they're addicted to John Ostrander and with good reason. However, because it starts with Jerry Conway, who everybody should be addicted to, don't get me wrong, but DC, not as much of a DC name, more of a Marvel Omnibus name to this point. He's written plenty of DC stuff. I just don't see it for us in Omnibus quite yet. And for that reason, I feel like it could be a finest line next year, especially because we just got Hawkman. It feels like they're starting to be like, ooh, who's borderline obscure, but the finest line in general lifts all ships with its tide. So so we can kind of like get people into this character with finest. And I think that is absolutely what happened with Hawkman, 100%. And now they're like, oh, people are asking for Hawkman, huh? Krisis is obsessed with Hawkman now, huh? Well, I really think that's what's gonna happen with Firestorm. But y'all, pump it into my friggin' veins, okay? Yes. Okay, oh my gosh, everybody's talking about this as well as I am. Just a reminder, if you have general questions for me, such as this one, that are not about the topic, I'm trying to make this video into a video that you can always watch all the way through to see me being insane about this specific thing, but we will have an after show, which is going to start like probably 20 minutes from now, and the link is in the description now if you're watching live. If you're not watching live, you can only see it in retrospect as a Patreon. Nick N. Firestorm was in my top 10. Miguel saying, oh, my #1. People giving their love to Jerry Conway. I mean, truly one of the best to ever do it. And, you know, like, I love being a fan of things. And I love when people make it easy to be a fan of them. Even there's a lot of authors who I love that, you know, that I love that I wouldn't put my neck out and say like, there's really nothing bad. I mean, everybody's got their ups and downs. I don't know, man. I don't know if I've ever read a Jerry Conway comic that I don't at least like a little bit. I truly don't. I think he's one of the best to ever do it. Okay. Cruel Angel, this is one of my only non-Bats related votes this year. There were some fill-in writers between Conway and Ostrander. Shh. Don't ruin it, James. Don't ruin how excited I got everybody. Lance saying, I must read this since Conway wrote it. Another one that I've been considering for my top 10, says Jamie C. Level 87 said, just got on my Patreon. Your reading guys are so good. Thank you. It's so appreciated. I'll talk in the after show about why Patreon has been so important this month, because oh boy, it is. Comic Pals, yes, put some respect on Firestorm. I can't wait to hang out with you, Sean. It's been so long. Saz Murph saying, yes to Firestorm, my #4 vote. Logan Wayne saying, 2 goats. Why don't we have this already? Super Job loves Firestorm. Xbox by Degree, Firestorm was my #1 vote. Y'all, there might be a Firestorm insurgency this year. Where was his, let me look up, where did it rank last year? Hold on. I'm pulling up the database of everything Firestorm. Last year, Volume 1 was number 28. The year before it was number 50. based on how you're all talking about it, it might be in the top 20 this year, and I will be so excited to talk about that. Firestorm was one of the best characters created in the late Bronze. I mean, you guys just keep going and going. Chubby Ray Comics is fire for a head, bitches. Krisis is his best quote of good night. The thing about these shows is I don't rant quite as much on this one. I think with the Marvel one, I ranted a little bit more because I know what to be angry at Marvel about. Like, I just know Marvel so well that when they're doing something dumb or they're doing something that I'm frustrated with, I know to scream at them. With DC, it's kind of like, this is a newer relationship for me. I don't know the material as well. I don't want to be foolish screaming at them, but this I understand well enough that I can be like, I can scream. I remember when there was a big deal made out of Firestorm being a new hero and I was going to middle school. Xbox by Degrees will also settle for a DC finest. Okay. And has this ever happened? We need a Ghost Rider Firestorm crossover. Look, man, if you've got Flame for hair, let's throw Hades from the Disney Hercules in there. Flame for hair, you can't go wrong. Okay, number 12. Sandman, the Vertigo Years Companion. Hear me out, because you might think this is one of my bullshit picks, but I challenge you that it is not. Neil Gaiman was writing Sandman. That was the center ring. And he was also doing Death, right? The High Cost of Living. It was DC's biggest book in many ways, especially in the book market. They had every reason to have amazing people writing other Sandman stuff. And spoilers, they did. The pedigree of this early stuff is like they always get really interesting writers, whether they're like really well-known comic book writers or whether they are kind of like writers from the novel world. They always have high quality people writing these books and they fill out the Sandman world. So some of the other Endless gets books, there's Destiny, a Chronicle of Deaths Foretold that happens right after the end of Sandman. Then there's some books that are explicitly Sandman Presents, like Sandman Presents Love Street, Sandman Presents Petrifax. This cover is from Sandman Presents Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Dreams but Were Afraid to Ask, which a lot of these just had like really major creators on them. So Destiny, hold on, I'm trying to find it in my list here. Who wrote this Destiny book? Foretold. There it is. So the Destiny book was written by, all right, nobody I am familiar with in this one. Writer Elissa Whitney, but art from Michael Zulli, which is a pretty major artist. And the Dreams book, I know some of these are written by Willingham. So my point is, I don't need to, I should have pre-prepared this. I'm sorry. There's just a lot of individual books and it's been a while since I've written about Sandman. These are actually all covered on my Sandman guide, every single thing. My Sandman, and this is written by Bill Willingham. I knew it. I went so deep in my Sandman guide, and that's how I learned about this stuff. I kind of assumed Sandman was just the Neil Gaiman stuff. I just thought that was Sandman. And then as I did my guide, I was like, oh, wow, there's a whole omnibus of other Sandman stuff that extended the brand that was off to the edge of Sandman that like has never been collected in one place. And in a world where all this Neil Gaiman stuff didn't happen, DC would have merrily printed this, and the Netflix show would probably get a third season. But unfortunately, not going to happen. Bast was really good. Yeah, the Bast one, the covers, I almost used a cover from that, but I just didn't think it was as like representative of Sandman as a cover like this one, which is it McKean? It looks like, yeah, it's a Dave McKean cover. So I thought pick a McKean cover to kind of like sell the vibe. But the covers on the Bast stuff is like so cool. So yeah, it would be really BS pick. There's no BS here, I'm telling you. So I just think that this is such a cool extension of Sandman. Jill Thompson draws and writes some of this. There's just so many cool creators. There's so many cool stories, characters that existed on the edge of the Sandman run that I just wish we could exist in a place where we could just get this all collected. Some of which has never been collected. Some of which only ever got like an original trade collection and then was never collected again. I mean, it's all under collected on the whole. Okay, we only have one more book. Yes, Sandman, season 2 of Sandman book did come out to 0 Sandfair, and then they quickly just shuttered it. But yes, it did come out. Mason Alexander Park, who plays Desire, right? Yeah, Desire? Yeah. What? Or no. Yeah. Anyway. Super job saying Bill Willingham also did the Thessaly ones. All right, we only have one more book before we're into my official top 10 that I'm voting on. And you're going to be really surprised, I think, that it's not my top 10, but I have my reasons. My number 11 choice is Wonder Woman, The Golden Age, Volume 7. And here's why. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. At the point that DC put the effort into doing 6 Wonder Woman books, they're not going to not do the 7th one. They're just not. I know jinxing is real, like knock on wood that I'm not jinxing it, but I just think it's going to take a little time. They want to make sure the other ones sell through, but they're even reprinting the earlier ones. At the point that they're reprinting earlier Golden Age books, they're going to take it all the way. And the thing is, none of this has ever been well collected. There's a couple of individual issues from it that I think are in the Wonder Woman in the 1960s trade. But this last burst of Wonder Woman, and at this point, she's not in any other books. Sensation Comics has turned into a horror title. She's not in anything else. She's just in Wonder Woman. We're just talking about 28 issues of Wonder Woman to get to the Silver Age. So it's going to happen. And it's fine if it takes time because they have to restore all these. None of them are restored. So I just think that, it's going to happen. Kid Krisis was very upset that she could not read this. She read all of Golden Age. She's read all of Silver Age. She's into Diana Prince right now. She was very upset that she had to skip over these issues. Me too. And of course I have no awareness of them because they just don't exist. I mean, unless you're going to like hunt down a pirated scan or go to the Library of Congress, it doesn't exist. So really, in terms of my most wanted book, this is probably, is it my most wanted? This is maybe my number 2 or number 3 most wanted DC book, the one that I would freak out the day that it arrives at my house. However, because I am a strategic voter, both in Tigereyes polls and in politics, and because I have a pretty strong certainty that this will actually exist, I'm not going to give it my number 1 vote on my actual ballot. Are you ready for my actual ballot? Here we go. Number 10, Wetworks. This is some WildStorm, but it comes with a note. Wetworks was a team created by Wells Portacio, who many of you will have known from the end run of X Factor issues by Chris Claremont right before we go into Muir Island Saga. You might also know him as the artist of a lot of the issues where Bishop is introduced in Uncanny X-Men just following Muir Island Saga. He was originally going to be one of the 7 launch artists of Image Comics. We always talk about the 6, right? The 6 original lines. It was originally going to be 7. And he experienced some tragedy in his family, and he had to step away from comics a little bit to deal with that. And he did not have the wherewithal to kind of go in on the big launch of Image. And as a result, he did not get his own line. So when he arrived, finally, a couple of years later, as you can see in 1994, ready to participate in Image, instead of giving him a separate line. And Image did, at that point, have some books that existed outside of kind of the big 6 that they had. He became a part of WildStorm because I think he was friends with Jim Lee. I could be wrong, but I do think I recall that from the WildStorm biography. And so Wetworks became a part of WildStorm, except for it's interesting because it's not really sewn into Jim Lee's kind of unified history of WildStorm. They basically just sold it under WildStorm, but it was all Wells Portacio's ideas. And so it doesn't like connect as much to all that other stuff. In fact, it actually weirdly at points connects more to Top Cow, which was Mark Silvestri's launch imprint at Image. So at one point there's a ballistic miniseries, which is one of the main characters in Cyberforce on Top Cow, but it's pretty much like a Wetworks Top Cow crossover. And so, but DC did run with this because it was a part of the DC acquisition of WildStorm. You can see this is the original WildStorm number 1, but it's retroactively had the DC logo added to it. And then DC did do some Wetworks stuff when they were in their WildStorm era. So they did a 2006 series. It was 15 issues long. And then they also did a series of Wetworks backups late in 2008, I want to say. So the tricky thing about this is like, how do you collect it? Because the main Wetworks is 43 issues long, but they do make a couple of key appearances even within WildStorm that I think I would probably want. So we're like right at the 50 issue mark, which is kind of big, but DC will do that for 90 stuff. But at the point that we're at the 50 issue mark, and then there's also like another 17 issues, it's kind of like, well, do you do a 50 issue omnibus and then a deluxe, or do you just break it into 2 omnibuses? And I don't have the answer there. Now this team, the thing I think that works against Wetworks in terms of it being viewed favorably in people's minds is it never had a marquee writer on it to match the marquee artist, and Portacio does not stay on it for super long. So it just doesn't go through that kind of artist to writer transformation that the Stormwatch did, Wildcats did. It just doesn't have that. But it's cool. It's kind of like all these cool military people that are kind of dipped in gold, like they go through a kind of Weapon X-y process, but then it's them against a lot of supernatural stuff, a lot of like vampire type stuff. So it's cool because it's kind of like military superhero people with unpredictable changes to their body versus supernatural. It's like a really cool crossover of stuff. Also, they did have 2 issues with Vampirella, which I would typically say, like, well, there's no way we could ever get that. But given DC recently using Vampirella in DC, I almost say DC OK Go, DC KO, then maybe there's a world that we could get the Vampirella stuff collected too. So I just think that I hate that this became the Forgotten Image title because Voice Portagio kind of missed his shot. And I don't think it's the best WildStorm title. I don't. I do really love it, and I do think it's cool, and it's just different. It's different than everything in Image, because again, it was supposed to be one of the launch books, so of course it was like differentiated from the other ones. It was to give them balance to start out with. If you look back at the launch books, none of them really were dealing with supernatural creatures. Like Spawn was dealing with heaven and hell stuff, but this was going to have its own niche there, and it just never got through. So I would really, really love for this to happen. And so, yeah, I guess I didn't really look at too many comments from you about Wonder Woman, but many of you thought it was going to be in my top 10. I didn't realize what works had this many titles. Who doesn't love a whole squad of gold-skinned heroes? DC should incorporate WildStorm more. They were great in Superman Warlord. That ballistic mini is going to be in volume 2 of the complete Cyberforce. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Had no idea. WildStorm had so many comics. Oh, my friend. Okay. D-Mark, yo, I put up the notifications like 24 hours ahead of time so nobody would miss this. I can't speak to the craziness of YouTube. Valnid saying dipping them in silver would probably work better in vampires, but only in some vampire canons, right? Usually that's more of a werewolf thing, although some vampires also do not like silver, but I like vampires. Okay, my number 9 official vote on the Tigereyes DC Most Wanted poll is Hawkman, Hawkworld by John Ostrander and Tim Truman. I kind of flirted with mentioning this earlier, and I didn't want to spoil that it's my top 10. This crushed on the poll last year. Last year, this was number 4. Number 4 out of almost 700 books. So it doesn't need my vote. I mean, it's doing fine without me. But I didn't know what this was before last year. I think the first year I kind of was only like a little bit Hawkman curious. I was like flirting with maybe being into Hawkman, just like a little bit, but like only like curious. Then last year I was like, maybe I'm really into Hawkman. So then I like really researched the maps and I came to understand this, and I read a couple of issues of it. And I've already talked about it on the stream. Like, it's Hawkman taken away from all of the Earth superhero stuff. He's part of the police force on Thanagar, like investigating hawk crimes, right? It's just so weird. It starts out with this 3-issue miniseries by Tim Truman, written and drawn by Tim Truman, but then Ostrander writes all of Hawkworld 1 through 32, starts in 1990, and then he kind of wraps it up with 6 issues of that subsequent Hawkman run. So some people are like, oh, this should have those 6 issues so it feels complete. But then then that omnibus will only have like 25 issues. So it's like, I think you just leave them separate and let this have a cliffhanger so that people have a reason to still buy the next one, because the Ostrander stuff is in it. But look, there's a reason this is number 4 on the poll. It is just, it's cool. It's different. It not only goes into the cosmic side of DC, but it goes like onto another planet. And I think that's something that Marvel and DC don't actually do that frequently. They have all these cosmic heroes, but they exist in space. It's Star Wars. They're going from planet to planet. Marvel never really takes us deep onto one planet. Sometimes they do in Nova, and then sometimes they do with like Kree stuff, but Captain Marvel doesn't like spend a lot of time on the Kree homeworld. And then of course Shi'ar stuff with X-Men. So like War of Kings was probably one of the few times we like spent times on planets, Conquest, that whole kind of mid-2000s stuff. This is that. This is like, we're just on this world, dealing with the story on this world. And DC, I think, broadly does that a little bit more than Marvel, because they have Apocalypse, they have like other worlds, even Krypton, they've done plenty of Krypton stories, so they have worlds that they will take you to. And to me, that's more attractive than like vague space stuff. And Oa, right? I want to go to a world and see the culture. That to me is more interesting than just being out in space. I want to see like, what is it about that world? And again, Ostrander, man, he's having a moment, and I love that he's having a moment. Zero Zaku is here saying hello to you. Dr. Zero saying Wetworks and Cyberforce were always sold out at my comic shop, so I never got into them. Everybody's happy about Hawkman. Yes, Hawkman, says Nick, and that Hawkworld cover is so boss. There are so many cool covers that I had like 4 saved that I was like swapping between. I was like, all right, I'm going to go with this one. Because I think the wanted poster on the wall kind of like really tells you the story of what this is going to be. Suspicious Sledvich finally has to read this. Comic Pal Sean is like, damn, what a cover. How good is this? Really, Sean, it was number 4 on the poll. I mean, sometimes bullshit makes it to the top of the poll, but not in this case. Dr. Zero saying my number 2 pick. Super Chop saying F yeah. Tim Truman represent underrated Conan writer. Yarnay Paul saying my number 3 pick. Nick so Pana was expecting Hawkworld higher after my earlier Hawkman comments. Well, it has to compete with everything that starts with a W. There's 2 W's in Hawkworld, so it does better than Hawkman because W's are the most valuable currency you can have on this ballot with me. But it doesn't start with a W, so it's not number 1. Planet 628 just picked up Truman's 3 issues of Hawkworld today. So cool. Hawkman has a gun. Like, how are you not picking that up? Says Jamie C. Okay, let's continue. My number 8 vote on the actual ballot is Deathblow, the complete saga. It is a WildStorm, but hear me out. This is not on here because it's WildStorm. I mean, it is. It's on here because here's the list of artists who draw Deathblow. Jim Lee, and then parentheses, Jim Lee drawing in the style of Tim Sale. If you can, Jim Lee on Deathblow was like, this is the book that's for me. It was kind of like Wildcats was like, here's our big X-Men flagship book. When he would show up and draw Deathblow, he was showing up to draw Deathblow because he felt like showing up to draw Deathblow. So he was doing it. There was like a kind of painterly issue. There was an issue where he was trying to draw like Tim Sale. I mean, like Jim Lee, like you've never really seen Jim Lee draw. Then Tim Sale draws it. I think Jeff Loeb writes it too, right? But Tim Sale is the story here. Tim Sale art that we could have an oversized and DC hasn't done it. And then, certainly not a downgrade, Trevor Scott. Like, the art of this is just off the charts the entire time. Saz Murph pointing out, was Jim Lee drawing like Tim Sale or like Frank Miller's Sin City? A little bit of both. So, Deathblow in WildStorm, he's one of that Team 7. So he's one of these people that kind of like had the lineage, had the experiments, and he is now in the modern day he's sort of Punisher, but actually I think a better comparison for me is who's Bloodshot from Valiant. It's very Bloodshot. So he's kind of like a supernaturally gunsy Punisher-y character. He also is fighting a lot of supernatural stuff, and there's kind of like a lot of like religious themes. So it's got like a little bit of like a Daredevil shade of thing, a little bit of Frank Miller. And there's also like some like vampire devil type stuff. I find this to be a really fun read. I think I read almost all of it 10 years ago when I did the WildStorm read for Crushing Krisis, so it's almost time again. I think of all the WildStorm books other than Wildcats, this is the easiest one to sell because you just call it Deathblow by Jim Lee and Tim Sale. And it's sold. So it's not my favorite. I mean, we have passed by WildStorm books that I like more than this. For me, I actually like Union more than this, and I probably like the art more in Union because, again, like Mark Teixeira and Ryan Benjamin. I mean, Jim Lee, but Teixeira and Benjamin are way my style. So this is not my favorite story. It's not my favorite art, but I just think all together that kind of like Frank Miller vibe, as Prime One Collector points out here, I think that's kind of why this to me feels like I'm not just voting for this because I want it. I'm voting this because it feels like a thing DC could do. Like in choosing a WildStorm book in my top 10, I don't want to just put like Union, which nobody's ever heard of. Like, you know, it's great for everybody to vote for what they want to vote for, but I'm always being a little bit strategic with my votes. So I'm like, what can I vote for from WildStorm that like feels accomplishable? And Deathblow felt like that for me. I remember they did a Michael Cray series for the WildStorm, and I went, who? And then I read it and said, oh, Deathblow. Yeah, absolutely. Should they get the Warren Ellis WildStorm from like 2017 collected? I don't care. I mean, it was cool, and I like what he was doing with it, and WildStorm was, you know, Ellis was one of the OGs of WildStorm, but it was kind of a nothing burger for me. Okay. Let's go to my number 7 official pick. Wonder Woman by Eric Luke. This, for me, is, you guys talked about how much you hate the Amazon's attacks Wonder Woman, which I feel unified with you all as my brothers and sisters, because I thought it was just, I didn't realize it was that widely hated. Now I know. If that's the most widely hated run of Wonder Woman, I think this is the least well-known run of Wonder Woman. I mean, it comes after John Byrne and before Jimenez, and I just think nobody even knows it exists. Nobody ever talks about it. And there are some fill-ins. Eric Luke writes most of it, but Christopher Priest writes an issue or two. Mark Miller writes an issue. And then there's art from like Yannick Paquette, Matthew Clark. It's a pretty hefty run. And there are some like one-shots and secret files and types of things that we could put into this run as well, just to like beef it out. We put the Hikieta, I never know how to say it, in the Rucka book. How is it actually spelled? Hiketea? Anyway, we put that. Now, of course, that was also by Rucka, but the point is DC is not opposed to putting graphic novels in the Wonder Woman books if they fit. So yeah, I mean, it's hard for me because I'm like, in order to get this, there are only a handful of gaps left, right? So there's the William Messer Loeb's Mike Diodato gap. There's this gap. There's the pre-Gail Simone gap, which we've talked about. And then there's the post-Gail Simone gap, which is really only 14 issues by JMS. We have it on the poll as JMS, Wonder Woman, and Superman. I just wanted it as a Wonder Woman Deluxe. Fuck that Superman stuff. So, like, I don't even think I need an omnibus of that. Of those, I struggle with, like, would DC be more likely to put this out because at least it has art they could sell it on? Or would they be more likely to put the Amazon's Attack book out because it has more of, like, a crossover-y story? I just think this is the higher quality run. I have not read all of this. I mean, I have it, but I've never like sat down and read all of it. But from what I have read of it, it's pretty good Wonder Woman, especially for me. I don't like John Byrne Wonder Woman. So to have somebody like kind of take it back to a Wonder Woman that I really enjoy worked for me. Garner Pauls knows who Eric Luke is. Edwin Billiot says he's underrated, had great stories. Cruel Angel says much love for Eric Luke on Ghost. And I do, Cruel Angel, I forgot that he wrote Ghost. I love Ghost. So yeah, Jamie C. never read this Wonder Woman stuff. I've only done Byrne, prior, and Jimenez after. Eric Luke Wonder Woman has got to be my top 3 votes, says Lance. All right. Logan has never heard of this. Kenneth Crayley says, I think this run of Wonder Woman had the issue of Lois Lane Wonder Woman, but I could be wrong. Katya. Well, it won't be hard for me to remember that something has the word Katya in it. Body by Leafield needs some advice later on how far I should back to go on Wonder Woman if I loved Rucka's on me. We could talk about it in the after stream. So unfortunately, that Simonson Ordway arc actually would have fit right before Rucka, which is on the other side of Jimenez from this. So that will almost certainly just be a deluxe, and honestly, really easy to sell Wonder Woman Deluxe with Simon and Ordway's name on it. At DC, we don't have to worry about that because they're not Marvel. They will put out a deluxe. They did it for the Mark Millar stuff on The Flash, and if it's right between, even visually, it looks perfectly fits in between the weight on volumes. So like, I'm just assuming that Simonson Ordway thing will happen probably in the next 3 years, and it'll just be a deluxe. Okay. Ready for my number 6 pick? My number 6 pick is another WildStorm. It's Wildcats. And this is another one where whether or not you like Wildstorm, it is insane that this has not been fully collected because first, Jim Lee and Brandon Choi work on Wildstorm and on Wildcats. Then for a while, James Robinson writes it, and that's all in the Wildcats compendium. The Robinson stuff is all in there. Then Travis Charest had started drawing there. He continues to draw. Who comes on to the title after that? Alan Moore. Now, this has been collected many times by DC, but only in paperback and only as like the stories of Alan Moore. It doesn't really have like the surrounding stuff that's happening in Wildcats. And like he goes away for a few issues, they skip those issues. Like I want it all together, but I think so easy to sell it. And I know they can't put Alan Moore on the spine because he's like the original writer at this point. I understand. Although I guess they can because they're going to do Swamp Thing by Alan Moore. We'll see. But I just think that like if it's obvious that Alan Moore was on it, people that just buy everything Alan Moore will buy it. And I think at the point that we have like Tom Strong in compendium, at least we could get a compendium of this. And my hope is that since they did that first Wildcats in compendium, we could get this in compendium. The thing is though, I don't want it to just do Alan Moore. There's only 30 more issues of this first volume of Wildcats, 21 through 50. I forget where Moore drops off, like 34 or something like that. But then there's other stuff in this that is appealing. It has JLA Wildcats Crime Machine, which is a graphic novel by Grant Morrison. So I think that and it has a Voodoo miniseries from 1997, also by Moore. So I think just on the weight of having that much more and Morrison stuff, and also the Travis Charest art. I mean, look at that cover. There's a lot of good covers to choose from. And this was, of course, Moore makes it weird. So they start as this very kind of like X-Men-y team on Earth, but Moore is like, what if we like sent them back to space? And what if they were refugees? And what if it was like, if we sent it, they're on Earth, they're used to being like the cool heroes, but in space, they're just experiencing the refugee kind of immigrant sort of experience, and some of them are of a lower caste than others, and some of them are having very different experiences than others. And while they're experiencing that in space, what if it's a different Wildcats on Earth? I mean, I've talked a lot about like, how do you make these bombastic 90s slop stories stand up to how cool the visual design of the art is? It's Alan Moore, and he makes it stand up to the cool visual design of the art. So look, are we ever going to get this in Omnibus? I don't know, but it should absolutely be the next Wildcats compendium. Please, DC, let this be a compendium in 2017 or 2027. I'm begging you. I'm on my knees begging for this to be a compendium. And Miguel saying, I have it in floppies and I would buy it in an Omni. Charest art and oversized, and Alan Moore could write a menu and it would be interesting. Yeah, Travis Charest, if you've never seen Travis Charest's interiors from this initial period where he's like really hot and working on monthly comics, There's nothing like it. Like even later in his career, there's just something. The figures are like so like stately and they like stand off the page in a way because of how he lines them. I'm just obsessed. Oh, the original writer is just a Marvel thing. Watchmen has Alan Moore's name on it as well. Going back to Deathblow, did I include Darker Image #1? No, but maybe I should have. I think I might have forgotten to. Okay, what are some essential must-haves from WildStorm? Sounds like another video idea. Let's stay on topic, but I do like that question. Q&A, we can talk about it, but this is one of them. Okay, my number 5 official vote on the official poll is Wildcats Covert Action Teams Volume 1 by Lee Robinson and Charest. Here's the thing. Brandon Choi too, but nobody knows who he is now. Here's the thing. We have this in Absolute, but the Absolute only goes through issue 13, and it doesn't have the non-Jim Lee stuff in it, which is critical. Then we have the Compendium, which is perfect. Love you, babe. But there's an opportunity to do this a little bit better in Omnibus and to make it something a little bit special compared to the Compendium. Why? Well, the top half of that very small text is what's in the Compendium, and it's great. And I highly recommend that Compendium, and it's really a fun read. And the thing that makes it different than the Absolute is Jim Lee was so late on the issues that they had to keep putting other issues in that Jim Lee didn't draw. And they got Travis Charest to draw one of them. And they got Jay Lee to draw 3 more. And that is Wildcats Special and Wildcats Trilogy 1 through 3, which I would have committed actual crimes to see in Absolute size. Like if they had put those in the Absolute, I would have bought 2 copies of the Absolute. One to read on my shelf and one to keep under my pillow. But they didn't, so I didn't buy the Absolute because screw you, DC. But they did put them all in the Compendium. So I very happily bought the Compendium, even though I have all of these individual issues. However, if we're going to upgrade to Omnibus, there were a lot of Wildcats solo stories and miniseries that they have to happen before the Alan Moore run starts because he takes them off the planet. So that's what could fill this out to make it special. There's Spartan Warrior Spirit. Spartan gets his own series. He's kind of like the Cyclops of Wildcats. Voodoo Zealot Skin Trade OGN, which is like a very interesting, weird graphic novel. Then there's a number of WildStorm often did backup stories in Overstreet Fan Magazine that could be excerpted here. And then they also had a Zealot miniseries as well. And Zealot, and Warblade. So pretty much everybody on this cover got their own series except for Maul, but even Maul got some stories in WildStorm Rarities issue. So basically, I think the way to distinguish this and a reason, look, I wouldn't just have this in my top 10 if there wasn't a reason it should exist. Like you saw me at Mystery Theater back at like 47, I think. So why would I not put this in my top 10? Because for me, it's unfinished business. To me, that Compendium was good, but it wasn't great. There was more that it could have had, and I love this. I probably read these issues as many times as I've read Age of Apocalypse. Like, it's one of the things I used to carry around in the canonical Rite Aid basket. And I promise, before I ever throw away the Rite Aid basket, and that time is coming because it's looking crazy. It's sitting in the backyard right now. I will bring the Rite Aid basket on camera so you can see my petty larceny. Okay. You mean Gen 13's Brandon Choi? Yes, I do. He was a great writer. Yeah, I'd get Wildcats Omni if it happens. Nick Ensing, I remember those connected covers, and actually, the covers were so cool. And yeah, I forgot about that stupid Absolute. Give me these 2 books. Wildcats Trilogy. Oh, doesn't this volume need the rest of WildStorm Rising? I don't think so. I think both this and Stormwatch could probably get away with just having like maybe just the WildStorm Rising kind of finale issue. I don't think you would need the whole crossover. You could, but Wildcats is not actually in every part of it. They kind of like disappear for a large part of it. Many of the books, the characters kind of just do their own thing to like carry the football of the crossover a little farther, and then they go away. So I don't think Grifter needs the whole crossover. I don't think Deathblow needs it. Here, maybe I would put the first and the Alpha and the Omega issues. Superjob saying Wildcats Trilogy and Youngblood Strike File were in my intro to Jay Lee because why would I buy a Namor comic? And I fell in love immediately. Yes, there is a Wildcats reading order on my site, Ryan. You are correct. Okay. And I have to give a shout out. There's a WildStorm Lovers group on Facebook. It just grows and grows. It gets bigger every year. It's got thousands and thousands of people in it. It is chaired by a person named Brian Hartless, who is there are 2 WildStorm people on the internet that I would trust to know the answer to any WildStorm question way more than me. One is Brian Hartless, and he mapped a lot of this originally because he was telling people what to get to buy for binds. So a lot of my maps owe a huge debt of gratitude. He actually sent me stuff I was missing in the mail. He's a really nice guy. And there's this website, which I would love to cut him a deal to just blog at Crushing Crisis, honestly, called Weathering WildStorm, that's been around forever. And he's just gotten back to updating it. And he is reading every WildStorm book and putting them in explicit reading order as he goes. So love that blog, Weathering WildStorm. It's not weatheringwildstorm.com. I think it's like .blogspot or .wordpress or something. But if you search Weathering WildStorm, you'll find it. So to me, those are like the 2 North Star kind of like lead the way on WildStorm content online, and I'm just in their shadow as a fan. I started reading everything for Crushing Krisis the way Weathering Wildstorm does back in 2016 when I launched Patreon, because I thought that would be a thing people were into, and people were just way more into me doing DC guides. So I launched DC guides, and then that kind of like fell by the wayside. But I would, if there was an audience, I've always said, I even did my first YouTube video about comics was about WildStorm. If there was an audience, I would love to do more WildStorm and early image stuff. There's a reading order for Wildcats only. It's not, if you want an all of WildStorm reading order, go to Weathering Wildstorm. If I can reverse engineer it on my own, and I feel like I have a way to do it better than him, I would do it. But he's just so good at it that it's like, I don't even need, why put in that effort when there's somebody out there who's already the GOAT of doing it? Okay. Top four. Oh, before we go on, I'd ordered Absolute Wildcats because they were going to reprint it, and then they canceled it. So maybe an omnibus is coming, which is another reason I put it in my top 10. Okay, number 4. We're getting to the tippity top now. Gen 13. I don't think there's any argument to be made that Gen 13 is not the most well-known WildStorm comic, the most recognizable cast, the cast that had the most ongoing love from readers for the longest amount of time. And here's the thing I always say, and I'll never get tired of saying it. This book had youthful energy in it because J. Scott Campbell was a teenager when he won the WildStorm talent search. And he took a book that from Jim Lee's concept could have just been like a really kind of whatever New Mutants book. I mean, they're being captured because they have powers and they don't know it yet. They all go somewhere. They all realize they have powers. Super influential to me. It's literally the original Krisis name, as much as it came from Krisis on Infinite Earths at DC, came from me reading Gen 13. Like the origin of Krisis is this comic book. Straight up. And I think that would have been fine and people would have liked it. But J. Scott Campbell brought this kineticism and this like actual teenagerness to it that no other comic had, because there was no teenager working on comics in the big 2 or 3 in the 90s. And then Jim Lee basically hands it to J. Scott Campbell and is like, great, take it, do it. So it becomes J. Scott Campbell's book. And even though it's like silly and goofy, it's in a way that you know me to not normally be into. I don't like silly, goofy. I don't like Wolverine and the X-Men. I don't go for that kind of stuff. It worked for me because I was that age. It worked for me in the same way that Buffy the Vampire Slayer works for me, because it felt of that moment like what characters of that age, and they weren't teenagers, they were actually like college students, but it just felt real to me. It felt real, a real comic about young people in the 90s in a way that X-Force didn't, Teen Titans didn't, Gen 13 did. And Gen 13 went on to be massively popular. So this, I think, would probably, I just put what I thought this one volume would collect. I think it's almost certain that it would just collect the original miniseries and then the following series up to issue 11 or maybe issue 12, because there's a bunch of other miniseries and one-shots that we can put in there, and B, starting after issue 13, there's a second Gen 13 series, Gen 13 Bootleg, and I think it just really complexifies the reading order, and so I think that's just the next omnibus. I think there's a nice slim omnibus that has a lot of material that people are very affectionate for, and that if it does well, then they could do more omnibuses. Unlike my normal approach, I do not think that this needs to be like super stuffed with content. I think the perfect slice of content is the original miniseries, the first year of Gen 13, and the supporting stuff, some of which, by the way, is drawn by Adam Hughes. Adam Hughes loved Gen 13. He would always show up doing like miniseries and like covers and stuff. Gen 13. I just think that this book is franchisable. Like if DC would lean into it a little bit, this could be another Teen Titans. Enough people still know who they are. The idea was iconic enough. The visual design was iconic enough. It's just, unlike Wildcats, which I think is always a hard sell, or Stormwatch or whatever, I just think Gen 13 is eternal. And even, I mean, it's been 10 years, but when I went back and read it in 2016, and you could see this on Crushing Krisis if you want, I kind of expected it was going to be like hokey or seem stupid or whatever. And then I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is just as good. This is better than I remember it being from a teenager. Like, it's not just nostalgia. It's actually, again, the panache of the visual design was met by the audacity of how fun and cool and relatable the story was. So Yarny Pulse is okay with Gen 13. Lance saying it's iconic and so 90s. Genre me saying never heard of Gen 13, like that cover, it's very JoJo coded. Yeah, I would say that. I remember Gen 13 being originally solicited as Gen X. Yes, I have that originally, the original previews magazine. And I was like, oh, Gen X. And then Marvel was got in their DMs and was like, well, not DMs back then. And was like, you can't do that. You can't market it like X-Men. We're putting out a book that's called Gen X. But yeah, Gen 13, Jason L. Wright says, one of my faves back in the day. I was reading this alongside Starman, Preacher, and Sandman. Wow, what a pull list. Matt H. has some really kind words off topic, but saying it's good to see me back 100% myself and at full power. I'm enjoying it. I mean, I was saying to Max over the weekend, I feel so much more like myself right now than I have in months. Counting down the minutes until I can go swimming again, I think then I will be full crisis power. But I do kind of feel like getting back to myself for the first time in a year. Actually, I first injured my leg, which led to the triathlon training over a year ago, 53 weeks ago. So this is like the first time I'm feeling almost normal in so long. Warren Weaver, more on that in the after show. Warren Weaver saying I'd buy it. Millions of dollars were spent on making this into a cartoon and then nothing happened. Yeah. Should we hope for a deal to get Gen 13 Generation X in here? Wouldn't that be cool? Not really into Generation 13, but my first exposure to them was the animated movie, and I love Caitlin Fairchild. And Body by Lethal saying, I feel no shame having 5/10 of my votes for Batman, but Krisis' list is killing mine. Look, I made a decision a long time ago that I would not collect oversized Batman. It's just too big a Pandora's box to open. And I know me, and I know as soon as I have one oversized Batman, I'm going to want more. The one exception I might make is I might want the Loeb Sale Omnibus just because I love that material so much. But again, it's like once you go to the bathroom once at a party, then you're going to the bathroom multiple times because you broke the seal. That's kind of how I feel about oversized Batman. So I love a lot of Batman, but I don't want it in Omnibus. In the same way, there's no Spider-Man in my Marvel picks. I love Spider-Man. I do not want Spider-Man in Omnibus. Okay, top 3. Stormwatch Volume 1. You knew it had to be coming. It's my favorite WildStorm book. Look, this doesn't have the pedigree of Gen 13. I don't care. The thing is that this was just the best concept to start because it was just the Justice League, but with like cooler characters and deadlier villains. And this has, as many of you have heard me talk about before, my favorite crossover storyline trope in the history of comics, which was that a few Image titles did an issue 25 around issue 11 or 10. And they put out the full issue 25. They're like, here's what's going to happen in issue 25. And then they're like, when we get there, we're not going to print issue 25. You have to buy it now. It's called Images of Tomorrow. And hilariously, all of the other books that did that all got canceled before they got to 25. Stormwatch was the only one that made it to 25. And when you got that 25, it was like you just thought you were reading this kind of JLA book. They were like chasing deadly villains. They were on their watchtower. It was just JLA. It was JLA as an Image book. Then you read issue 25 and it's like the watchtower's crashing onto Earth. The whole team is dead. The most deadly of all the villains is like free. And we thought he was in like cryo sleep or whatever. He's on Earth. He's like puppet mastering the dead Stormwatch to fight the main guy. It's like, I remember reading it and being like, and you know, I was like a little kid being like I was like, what, how the hell are we going to get there in 12 issues? And then at that time, I stopped reading comics before they got all the way to issue 25, because that was when I got into the internet and songwriting and guitar and stuff. So then when I started recollecting comics in 2010, first I was focused on the X-Men. And after a year or two of X-Men, when I was like, oh, I guess I could get like singles and stuff too, I was like, oh, I can finally find out what happened in Stormwatch. And so I read all the way up to, I want to say like issue 20 when I did the read on Crushing Crisis in 2016. And y'all, I just love this. Ron Mars writes a lot of it. I mean, it just didn't have the like Alan Moore level pedigree, the Jim Lee level pedigree, the Travis Charest level pedigree of the other books at WildStorm. But for me, this was the best read. It just holds up. It's just like a really good Justice League book. And Scott Clark on art. I mean, it just really, really holds up. So this is that thing that comes before the Warren Ellis run. It's 36 issues plus a 0, 2 specials, 23 and a half. There's a source book and also Team 1 Stormwatch, which would probably be collected elsewhere too, but I think you put it here. In terms of WildStorm Rising, to answer the question that somebody asked a little while ago, I think this would have 2 issues of Wildcats in it that lead into and out of WildStorm Rising, and I think you would put WildStorm Rising, the 1 issue and the 2 issue. The 2 issue is really the finale into here because it actually kind of ends as a Stormwatch series, and I do think it kind of has an impact on everything. But yeah, this would collect through 25 and then all the way through 36, and it would meet up with that compendium. So maybe we don't get an omnibus, maybe we get a compendium. Great, awesome, perfect. Give me it now. I'll buy it for some of you. If I will make you a deal. If DC did this as a compendium, I will buy copies of it. I will do a giveaway and I will send them to you straight from Walt's Comic Shop or IST because I love this run so much. Okay, we will do that. Not omnibuses, only compendiums. Okay. I would definitely get the first Stormwatch. It was my favorite of the Image titles. Same here. The real Mr. G saying, look, 8 of my 10 was Batman, so I can't top. Body by Liefeld, once you bat, you can't stop doing that. Fuji trilogy complete. And there he is on the cover, right? He's on all 3 of the covers because he's the coolest. Top 10 WildStorm. I told you it was going to be a lot of W's at the top. Edwin Billy at Stormwatch was probably my favorite WildStorm book. You're going to see a lot of people say that. People who were just buying for Jim Lee bought Wildcats, but people who were buying the whole line, they will all tell you that Stormwatch was their favorite one. And Gen 13. As I wrote earlier, Stormwatch was interesting before Ellis. I completely agree. I love the design of that Fuji guy from all the WildStorm I've shown off. This and Gen 13 are the only things I've come. Well, they are the best too. Superjob, I thought Bloodstrike made it. I think, yeah, Bloodstrike, I think they went back later and got it far enough to reach 25. Or like, I think there was a gap. I don't think it made it all the way there. I think it like petered off at like 22 or 23, and then they went back. I do have a Bloodstrike guide, so I should know that. Okay. If you've only read the Ellis run, it's cool to go back because actually Stormwatch deconstructed itself before Ellis even deconstructed it because of what happened in that issue 25. Yeah. Xbox by Degree Day 1 purchase. A Krisis giveaway. I've never done one before. And we don't have t-shirts either. Also love the issue of Local Man that did in Images of Tomorrow's issue too. Yes, yes. And that's part of the reason I love Local Man so much, which I need to reorganize these shelves because I always look right here based on, I now see the WildStorm compendiums, but I'm so used to just like looking here and now they're not here. Okay. Are you ready for my top 3? Because it's time for an after party. Number 2, my number 2 most wanted DC. You guys know what the top 2 are, right? I know you know one of them. You might not know the other one. My number 2 most wanted is Wonder Woman by William Messner Loebs and Mike Deodato. This is the hair that I'm trying to give you at all times. I mean, it's not a mistake that I have it done like this today. Oh no, it's this arm. Okay. I love this run. And let me sell it to you in a way that maybe that's not just me saying I love Wonder Woman. George Perez's Wonder Woman, which is one of the most essential comic book runs of all time, redefines the mythology of Wonder Woman and introduces her again to the man's world. It doesn't have a lot of other superheroes in it. It does at the point that we get to War of the Gods. It's really, she's interacting with that universe. But even the first like 24 issues, she like meets Superman. That's really it. I think George Perez's run is about mythology. It's about the mythology of Wonder Woman and who she is as a woman, as a superhero, as an Amazon, which is part of what makes it so iconic. William Messner Loebs, who's a fantastic writer and really another one that just generally does not miss. He wanted to play with Wonder Woman as a superhero. Wonder Woman in the DC universe. We see her fight. We see her team up with Superman again. We see her fight the Joker. Like, she's just in the world. And William Messner Loebs dissects what it means to be Wonder Woman. What if she wasn't the chosen of the Amazon, right? It's a huge part of Wonder Woman's story, no matter what origin you read, that she wins the tournament and she goes off the island and she's the one, right? So he plays this idea of like, well, what if she wasn't? What if she fell out of favor? What if they were like, it's time for a successor? And so that's where Artemis comes from. And to me, even though a lot of this kind of reaches extreme 90 heights, first of all, Brian Boland covers, peerless. The best run of covers, for my money, in the history of comic books. Okay? I said it. This run of Brian Boland covers, and he doesn't start right away. I think he starts in the 70s. And then he doesn't do all the way to the end, because eventually they have Mike Deodato doing the covers since he was the artist. I don't know that I like any run of covers better than that. So if I do my top 30 Wonder Woman's covers, it's going to be a lot of these covers. Spoilers. So you have Messner Loebs writing. You have Boland covers. You have Messner Loebs taking the story from this idea of Wonder Woman in the wider DC universe to like, what does it mean to be Diana if she's not Wonder Woman? Which we get there by the end. That's fully the thing. And then Mike Deodato Jr. Mike Deodato Jr. early, he's not at the height of his powers. It takes like another probably 10 years before he's really at the height of his powers, and that lasts for a while. But this early version of him, it's just, there's something about it. I know a lot of people like it because it's a little cheesecakey and there's bosoms and, some things like that. Bosoms. The first thing anybody thinks of is bosoms. But for me, it was the sinewy quality. He had this way of, whether it was hair, whether it was a muscle and an arm, he had this way of drawing out each kind of like individual strand or sinew, or kind of like made you really feel like there were something moving there under the skin of his characters, or moving in the hair, or moving in the world of his characters. And at that time, I just was transfixed by that, because it was different than like a Jim Lee, who I loved and I was addicted to. But Jim Lee was kind of about these big idealized people. Deodato was so much more about like the texture and the detail on them. And to me, that was absolutely transfixing. So I love this run so much. One Wheelchair X, who, if you've made it this deep into the stream, I will say in a few weeks he will be live here on this channel, and we will be talking X-Men bullshit. So I hope you're excited. Edwin Billiot says it's way overdue. Adam Wilcock saying the hot Wonder Woman. Sesmer saying, I do love William Mesterlow's Wonder Woman run, but a big part of the appeal are the Brian Bolland covers, which were beautiful. Cruel Angel saying it would be a blind buy for me just because of these streams. Superjob, the Brian Bolland covers. Caldor saying this was my number 7. Kenneth saying he loves this Wonder Woman run after George Perez, which was needed after, no, it's before John Byrne. This comes before John Byrne, but I hear what you're saying. Jamie say, I love this run. The pencils and colors in the issue where she fights Joker. Oh, the Joker cover where she's like this. Iconic even. Cool Wonder Woman story in this run. Some rough art before Deodato. I'll give you that. Needs a Wonder Woman working at the taco restaurant cover. And I think, so the first year of the DC poll, I was heartbroken that this was number 101. I was like, it's not even in the top 100. Last year, it was number 27. This year, I'm looking for some top 20. There's a few things I'm looking to move up. I'm looking for Firestorm in the top 20. I'm looking for this in the top 20. And I'm looking for Gen 13 to be in the top 60. That's going to be hard. Gen 13's a while back, but I can exclusively reveal to you here. Or if you were a Near Mint Patreon, you would have seen that. Gen 13 is the highest WildStorm book on the poll as of last year. So it is not far from the top 60, which is another reason I'm voting for it so high. Okay, there you go. Logan's got it number 5. Love Wonder Woman. All right, you made it. So glad we made it. Look how far we've come now, baby. It's also got a little bit of like a Rosie the Riveter thing, right? Okay, do any of you know what my number 1 is? I'm sure you've heard me say this before. The reason this is not number 1 and the other one is because this has been collected. There are trade paperbacks, and it feels like DC will obviously do it. They're reprinting the Perez books right now. It is clear that they're going to do this when they're done reprinting the Perez books. But this is one where, unlike the Golden Age one, where I'm like, I'll just let them do it. I'm like, no, I care about this too much. I'm not voting for it. I want to see it hit the top 20. So that's me voting for it. But there's one book that I want that bad that has never been completely reprinted, and that if it's not in the top 60 of the poll, DC will never care. And I think there is a slim sliver of a chance we could at least see it in a compendium, which is why it's my number 1 vote, and it's never made it into the top 60 in the 2 years so far, but it did, and it actually dropped last year, and I'm sure you'll realize why. It is Sandman Universe, The Dreaming. Neil Gaiman had nothing to do with this. Neil Gaiman was done with Sandman. He moved on to other things, but Sandman was such a big franchise for DC that with his blessing, they continued the world of The Dreaming, starring the new Sandman that happens, I think not Michael Hall. Is it Michael? I could be making it up. Anyway, the new Sandman that happens at the end of his run is here, but this is about the whole landscape of The Dreaming. It's about all of those characters that Gaiman invented in The Dreaming, and it runs for 60 issues, and it has a special, and then there's a graphic novel of Merv Pumpkinhead. So it's it could maybe be in one omnibus, but back in the day when we thought Sandman omnibuses were printing money, it seemed like an obvious 2. Maybe it's 1, but here's the thing. Perfect for compendium. They did Sandman Mystery Theater. Sandman Mystery Theater has the Sandman name on it, but it's Matt Wagner. You don't have to credit Gaiman. And it came out still, I think that second one came out post all the Gaiman, controversy and news coming out. So could they do that with this? Could we maybe finally get in compendium? It's never been fully collected. They only ever did like 1 trade, I think, or 2 trades of it. So the back half of it has never been reprinted. I just think for there to be 60 issues, this is not a bunch of side miniseries. This is the actual landscape of The Dreaming. It's in continuity for Dream. Even Gaiman, when he comes back to write a little bit more Sandman later, treats this as if it is real and it happened. And then when the Sandman Universe revival happens in 2018, and Spurrier writes The Dreaming, which is an incredible series, he also acknowledges things that happened in this book. So this is kind of like, it's on the verge of becoming lost media. Like, we just don't have it. In fact, I forget if it's on DC Unlimited. You need DC Unlimited Ultra if you want, mature readers and Vertigo stuff. And I just don't remember if it's on there. But the point is, you would have to get it in floppies to have it right now. And I know because of the Gaiman of it all. So in the first year of the poll, Gaiman was still in favor. This was number 70. I was so upset. I was like, oh, it was almost top 60 next year. They're going to print 10 omnibuses from this list and it'll be there next year. And then everything that happened with Neil Gaiman and Amanda Palmer here in my home country of New Zealand came out. And unsurprisingly, this dropped from number 70 to 168. So I get it. I get that for a lot of people, all of Sandman is just tainted now. And I understand, especially if you put your love in Neil Gaiman for so long. Look, I'm a huge Tori Amos fan. Tori Amos used to write Neil Gaiman into a song every album. I can't even, she's the founder of RAIN, which is a huge charity to support, it's the rape, abuse, and incest network that supports people experiencing all those things. Imagine how she feels that Neil Gaiman turns out to be an abuser. Like, this is one of her best friends that she wrote songs about. So I get it. I get if you feel betrayed. I understand all of the people that had Neil Gaiman, Sandman, and death tattoos and art in their houses and statues and things. I get it. But there's a whole world of people who worked on these books, including people like Colleen Duran. I mean, amazing, amazing people. And I'm not saying she was on The Dreaming. I'm just saying she's another the person that's in this Sandman world, Jill Thompson. And so I just think that I refuse to give up on a beautiful world that was created, and in the way that Sandman enters the world of The Dreaming, and The Dreaming is like a collective state it's populated by the figures from everyone's dreams. That's kind of the whole point of it. Like, Sandman's realm is the material of everyone's dreams that he has adopted. In that same way, I feel that way about this series. Like, it belongs to everybody who worked on it. It's still got Dave McKean covers. It was originally written by Terry Laban with art by Peter Snedberg, who's a pretty great artist. Looking a little bit longer. Oh, my internet's feeling slow. It would be a terrible time for the internet to go slow after all this. Looking a little bit more deeply into the run, Caitlin Kiernan wrote some of it. I mean, it goes through a number of writers, and none of them are like super marquee writers who stay with it for a long time. But in a way, I think that makes it even more perfect for, again, I don't know if we could ever have an omnibus at this point, but maybe a compendium, maybe. So Bill Willingham does write a little bit at the end. So I keep the hope alive. I'm going to continue to vote for it number one, because in truth, it is my most wanted DC omnibus. So that is my list. It's been so interesting to hear your thoughts on all of these. And again, I really sat down and I was like, should I even do this? Or should I just do a top 10 and talk about WildStorm for like 5 minutes? And I was like, no, because if I do the top 60, we're going to get to talk about stuff that's interesting that I don't even know a lot about, that I have to research. I'm so little read on this. This is not like the Marvel poll where this things that I know and I owned in floppy and I've read 100 times. A lot of this is things that I know. I'm a proponent of read the thing before you buy the omnibus. But in a lot of these cases, I need the omnibus to exist to read the things. They're not even on DC Unlimited. So this is me kind of like exploring a territory of comics that I don't even know that well. And I think that's a fun, different kind of show to do. So have you voted yet? You can vote. Just search, go YouTube search DC Tigereyes, Google search DC Tigereyes Crushing Krisis. You'll find the page on my site. I'll put it in the link to the description for after the video. You have a whole other week, so there's no rush. Votes count until the very last minute. Please vote for books you would really buy. Don't just vote because I told you to vote for something. Just don't vote because, you know, if you think it looks like a fun thing that should be an omnibus. DC, more even than Marvel, actually has said to Omar, hey, you don't just have to send us the top 60. Like, you could send us the whole results if you want. We're curious. Like, they care. And they're into the validation of the market research part of it, which is why me and Pollmaster Jim and like all the people working on this poll work so hard to really perfect it. Because not that we don't work hard on the Marvel poll too, but like we have the ability to maybe move the needle a little bit. And I know of a specific book that we have specifically moved the needle on in the first 2 years of the poll, where they were like, wow, I didn't know it was that popular. And I do think it's I don't have any word on this, but I do think it is influencing their choices in DC Finest when they're like, well, we're not ready to put an omnibus out of that yet, but it did so well in the poll. Maybe we should do a Finest. Like, we got a Cassandra Cain DC Finest. So don't forget to vote. You have a whole extra week to do it from now. So please start making your list and checking it twice. This has been so much fun. There are definitely going to be shows the next 2 Sundays. I'm not 100% landed on what next Sunday's show is going to be, but I will exclusively reveal to you now that 2 Sundays from now, I will be live with One Wheelchair X from the United Kingdom, and we will be ranking every X-Men event ever. And I can say that because we started doing the work last night. So please mark your calendars for that. That will be May 23rd for many of you, the 24th for many of you, the 24th for many of you, the 25th for me. But there'll also be a show next week. There's a lot to come. There will be a DC Fantasy Draft, but I'm going to wait until after the DC poll is done. And also, we have a DC Finest poll coming up in near mint condition. So I will be doing some Finest content as well, which I have all of on the shelf right here. So if you have watched all of this along with me live or on replay, thank you so much. I'm so overjoyed to be back here doing this for you. I'm overjoyed to be talking about comics I love. I hope that I've WildStorm pilled you all and the way that I got Adam pilled by my friend. If you want to tell me what you're voting for down in the comments below, please do so. I'd love to know, especially what your top #1 book is, or if there is a book that I managed to convince you of that was on my poll and that you might put on yours. Now, if you are watching this live, there's a link down in the description, and this would be the time to go hit copy and put it into another window, because when this ends, the link will go away, and then we'll all just be having the after party. It's Krisis After Dark. It's all the questions you wanted to ask me about all the things that were happening in the stream that were not about the stream topic itself. It's been a lot of fun the last 2 weeks, or we skipped last week, but because I skipped last week, so the poll was last week. But anyway, there. So as we finish, you're used to me saying something really encouraging about the world here. And here's the thing that I will say. We read all these comics about people struggling, and we read about their struggles. And then we read about all these comics about people being inclusive and fighting for justice. And we enjoyed that. And I just will never understand how fans of comic books don't want that in the real world. No matter what comic book character is your favorite. If it's Wonder Woman, who's about boundless love. If it's the X-Men, about being different than everybody else. If it's the Justice League, literally with the word justice in the name, the original social justice warriors. These comic books were a map for how to be good people and to care about people just as much as any belief system in the world is. Comic books make a fine belief system if you take the right messages from them. So as we go out into the world and we see what's being done to our friends and family and to humans we're not even related to, who are immigrants, who are Asian American, Latino, Black people, who are trans people and queer people, and we're seeing that what's been wrought on them, even if you're not identifying in any of those ways, even if you don't have a single friend or family member who could claim any of those terms or identities, right? Are they getting justice that the Justice League would give them? Are they getting the boundless love that Wonder Woman would give them? If you were reading an X-Men comic book, would you be on their side, or does it feel like we're watching Operation Zero Tolerance right now? I just think that I don't think we need to totally live in the world of comics and think that the comics are most important than anything else in the world. There's a lot of other important things in my life, but I think if we're going to read them and we're going to love them this much, could we please go out in the world and support people the same way that our superheroes would support them? That's my request of you. And you know what? I know if you're here and you're watching this, you probably feel that way. So then my next challenge for you, if your heart is already there, and if your heart's not there, it takes some time. I was not perfect in all these ways. It took me a long time to come around on some of this stuff. Man, you should have heard how I felt about the singular they pronouns 10 years ago. And now that's my pronoun. So things fucking change sometimes. But if your heart is still on the journey, I understand. It takes time. If your heart is already there, then what are you doing to help somebody else's heart get there? So that's my message for you today. I have been so incredibly privileged to get to talk to you for almost 4 hours. It is not lost on me. Please, until I see you next, which might just be a minute from now, whatever you do, don't have a crisis unless, of course, it's me.